Hey, what's up? It's Cute What If this side. Today we will be seeing What If Deku was trained by Vlad King. Now before we move ahead with the fic, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. In a dark room, a huge man sat on a chair while scrolling through a file on his computer. He finally set his eyes on what he was looking for, a simple video. He started it and began to watch the video. The contents of the video showed a bunch of superpowered teens smashing and destroying robots left and right. However, one of them stood out. He was a young man about average height and had black hair with green highlights on its tips. He also had freckles on each of his cheeks. On each one were 4 freckles arranged in a diamond pattern. He also had large green eyes that sparkled whenever the light shined on them. But what made him stand out from the others was that unlike them, he wasn't able to destroy the robots. From the beginning to the near end, he was constantly trying to score a robot kill. But he wasn't succeeding, either other people saving him from a robot or him not finding one at all. Then the time came for the end when a giant robot was released. Everyone in the arena ran away avoiding the giant behemoth, and so did the freckled boy at first. But he suddenly stopped and looked in fear, not due to the robot, but at something else. Near the robot on the ground, a girl with small blush marks on her face and brown hair was pinned to the ground under some rumble, with the robot nearing in at such a rate that she was about to be crushed under it. The boy then turned on his feet and began to run towards the giant, causing others to yell at him to stay back or return. He then crouched on the ground and jumped. But what happened next surprised everyone. The seemingly powerless boy jumped high in the air, and then went straight to the robot as he cocked back his fist. Once he was in front of the giant machine's head, he yelled at the top of his lungs, "Smash!" His fist then made contact with the head of the machine, causing it to cave in and the robot to be destroyed. But what the boy did came at a price. Both of his legs and his left arm were annihilated beyond recognition as he began to fall helplessly to the ground. The boy began to panic, trying to find a way to land safely, but something then slapped him in the face. It was the girl from before, who he saved, coming to his aid. The boy then began to float above the ground harmlessly. The girl then pressed her fingers against each other, and the boy then dropped to the ground as he breathed out what was thought to be a thank you to the girl who was vomiting. The video was then stopped as the man watching it reclined back into his chair, reviewing the events that led to his current condition. He then looked at a roster with 20 names. He began to look through them and his eyes landed on the one he wanted. He began to rub his shin as he said, "Izuku Midoriya, you're quite the case, aren't you? You know you can always expel him like I was planning to do before you threw a hissy fit and took him to your class instead." A gruff voice came from behind him, causing the man to get startled a bit before turning to the source. "No, I won't," the man retorted. "I won't destroy a promising hero's future due to a simple problem that can be solved through hard work. But he has no, and you have." The man cut him off. "Listen, you may govern your class like some god who deems everyone worthy or not. But I don't. I at least try to give my students the benefit of a doubt before outing them. You're acting irrationally." The man said, "We aren't here to be nice. We are here to make students into heroes. The boy doesn't have control over his quirk. I told you to put him in general studies, and if he did a good impression at the sports festival, I may take him in. They are better people out there." "Tisk," the man replied. "You are only saying this due to that purple-haired boy you saw, and wanted to put him in your class even though he had no points whatsoever, unlike Midoriya." He stopped and then added, "And isn't our job as teachers to help students who don't understand how to use their quirks to use them? But that will take time and will be a waste of resources." He also chose not to dignify the accusation that was thrown at him. "For you, that might be true, but for me, it will be a good thing. I prefer to work with my students, not simply kick them out on the first day, cause I want them to come here and already be the next All Might. Now, you're speaking irrationally. The boy will hinder your class and hurt himself during the process. You may think I'm acting cruel, but I truly have his best interest for him. Hard to believe that. Act as you like, but you'll eventually reach a point where you'll have to expel him, just as I was planning to do. We'll see about that." The gruffly voiced man then turned around, walking outside the room, but paused a little as he said, "You know what you are doing is truly cruel, letting him dream only for his dream to be crushed midway when the bitter reality strikes him." As he finished his last words of wisdom, he left the room, and the other man to his thoughts, who simply said, "Izuku Midoriya, you better not disappoint me. I took a huge gamble on you." The next day, the boy from the video stood in front of a huge gate with a smile on his face. He was now going to UA, the top school for heroes. In his world, around 200 years back in China, a boy was born with the ability to glow, and then other children began to be born with, out of this world, abilities. Those abilities were eventually called quirks. They could range from simple physical mutations to the ability to control nature itself. And as time progressed, quirks became more and more abundant, but something else began to die. The quirkless are normal people with no ability whatsoever, and one of them was Izuku Midoriya. For the first 15 years of his life, was technically now considered a late bloomer. The boy then remembered his idol's words in his acceptance letter, "This is your hero academia." The boy smiled at the words. The entrance exam was truly an eye-opener for him to see truly how late he was compared to others. He wasn't able to score a signal kill in the exam. However, due to his heroic action of saving the brown-haired girl, he was given rescue points which were enough to help him succeed in passing the exam. The boy then walked through the gate as he remembered how he got his quirk to begin with, him meeting All Might, running to save his friend from the sludge villain after he himself was almost killed by the same villain. All Might saving them for the villain, All Might declaring him as his successor, the harsh training he went through to gain All Might's quirk one for all, and finally the entrance exam. In those last 10 months, his life was truly something out of a good anime, but he shook his head as he walked forward, thinking about how his life has changed to the better, and then he tripped. He looked with a dumbfounded expression as the ground came closer to his face. He internally asked himself, is this going to happen every time I come here? He closed his eyes waiting for the inevitable pain to come to him. But it never did as he felt himself being held. He then asked himself, is this going to wait, this didn't happen last time. Well, it did, but I wasn't held. Maybe it's the nice girl. He looked back to see a floating hand in the air that waved at him as it began to float back to its source. He followed it and then saw a girl, which caused him to flush instantly. The girl then walked toward him and said, watch out, dude. You know falling on the first day is bad luck. The girl in front of him was his age. She had long curly hair with a very dark green color. In addition to that, she had dusk green eyes that resembled oddly a reptilian look with a set of sharp-looking teeth to add to the mix. The boy looked at her blankly before realizing he was being talked to and by a very cute girl too. So he said, why yeah T, thanks for the save. He internally cursed his damn stuttering habit. The girl looked at him and giggled, you're a funny one. She stopped and then added, well, what are we waiting for? Let's go to our classes. The two then began to walk, and the girl then stopped and said, where are my manners? My name is Setsuna Takage. Izuku then blushed heavily as he never spoke to a girl. But then it hit him, for he spoke to the nice girl who saved him from tripping on the entrance exam. He began to remember when she spoke to him, and he remained still as a rock, not even saying a single word. Reality then hit him hard. He never actually spoke to a girl. He then looked at Setsuna and mustered enough courage to say, I am Izuku Midoriya. I mean Izuku am Midoriya. She looked at him and said, not used to people talking to you, are you, big guy? Izuku blushed heavily as he covered his face with his hands and said, is it that obvious? Setsuna giggled again and told him, as clear as daylight. She noticed Izuku slightly deflating before saying, now, no need to feel bad. Not everyone is a social butterfly. She then changed the subject quickly. In what class are you? I'm in class 1B. Izuku lightened up as he said happily, really, I'm in class 1B too. Are going to be a hero. Setsuna then laughed as she said, obviously Mop Top, why do you think I'm in class 1B? To tap dance. The boy flushed heavily as he noticed his question was really stupid but tried to talk to her nonetheless. So how much did you score on your entrance exam? But then processed what she said to him and said, Mop Top. Yeah, Mop Top, I mean look at how messy your hair is. Consider it as a nickname. We're friends now, aren't we? And friends give each other nicknames. Setsuna informed him as if it's an obvious thing. Izuku stared at her, not believing what he was hearing. He had a friend. He was about to cry from happiness if it wasn't for him not wanting to scare the girl, and possibly his first friend ever, away. And regarding your first question, I didn't take the entrance exam. She said, confusing him, I entered through recommendations. The boy then smiled and said, that's wonderful, Takage. It must mean that you have very good grades or are really great Quirk to enter through our recommendations. I see, congratulate for such an achievement. The girl smiled at him. Even though she wouldn't admit it, she was afraid that some of the students might look down on her due to how she entered the hero course, saying she cheated or took the easy route around. Thanks, Mop Top. The boy's sweat dropped at the nickname, but he can live with it. He had been called worse through his quirkless years. As the two continued to walk toward their class while talking to each other, or rather Takage talking while Midoriya stuttered all the while, they eventually looked at the time and it was getting closer to the beginning of the class. This caused Setsuna to huff, saying, man, what the heck is this place? A maze. We've been walking around forever and haven't gotten any closer to our classroom. Izuku nodded his head, noticing that they are lost through the corridors of UA. He then had an idea when and said, well, maybe we can use the map of the building in the school guide that we got along with our uniforms. The girl smiled at him and said, well, what are you waiting for, Mop Top? Cough up that map. She then detached her hands, catching Izuku by surprise, who thought that this might have a relation to her quirk and went searching all over his body, causing the poor boy to go nuclear red. He looked at the girl who was smiling mischievously at him, and asked her, Takage, what are D doing to me? Setsuna smiled and giggled, I have no idea, what are you talking about, Mop Top? I'm searching for the map. The boy swallowed heavily as he informed her, I am sure the map isn't on my stomach. The girl looked at him with a naughty gleam in her eyes as she said, I know, but don't worry. The boy then began to have steam go out of his ears due to the girl's remark, but stopped when he felt her hands leave his body, and moved to his backpack, and got the school guide. She then said, sorry there, I went a bit overboard. She then opened the school guide and cheered onwards as she walked in front of him. The boy took a moment to calm himself down as he said, no problem. The girl looked back at him and said, but damn, you sure are ripped under these clothes. This remark was enough for him to almost faint, but he powered through. They both walked in silence, but Izuku decided to break the ice, so he started the conversation. So how was your trip here? My mom sure cried a lot. Seriously, that's the best I can do. Now she'll think I'm weird and won't talk to me anymore. Setsuna then laughed. You have no idea what my parents did. My mom threw me a party while crying. My dad threw a hissy fit saying that he will kill anyone who dares to touch his little angel. So be ready when you become my boyfriend. The boy flushed heavily as he said, what? The girl giggled. Calm down, I'm joking, she said before adding, or am I? This caused the boy to blush again, but if he had to tell the truth, he was honestly happy with this. He could that talkage didn't mean any harm toward him, but was only teasing him. It was what friends did with each other, right? He was cut out of his thoughts when Setsuna said, we're here. The boy looked and saw a large door with one bee on it. He mentally began to pray that neither Kaken nor the scary boy from the entrance exam was there, but he also hoped the nice girl from the entrance exam was there. He still had to thank her for offering to sacrifice her points to help him pass. He was then nudged by Setsuna, who told him, well, what are we waiting for? Let's go inside. Setsuna went through first and she seemed to be looking for someone, as Izuku mentally prepared himself as he said, calm down, Izuku. This is a new school. Kaken can't hurt you here. He looked at the room and said to no one in particular, well, here goes nothing. He then walked inside the classroom and looked around, but he didn't notice anyone familiar. He felt kinda bummed out. He then shook his head. This is a good thing. If no one noticed him, then he could make friends. He only hoped no one from the entrance exam was with him due to his less than stellar performance. Suddenly a voice cut through his thoughts as someone greeted him. Hello, I'm Itsuka Kendo. Nice to meet you. The voice belonged to an orange-haired girl who had her hair tied in a side ponytail. She also had teal-green eyes. She seemed to have a good physique on her due to constant workouts. Izuku was startled a little but managed to say, and nice to meet you too. I'm Izuku Midoriya. The girl then said while sheepishly smiling and rubbed the back of her head, sorry if startled you there. He then told her, and no problem. He then walked away as his eyes caught a familiar sight of a brown bob-cut hairstyle. He mentally screamed, it's the NC girl. He made a beeline toward her. Once he was in front of her, he began introducing himself. Hello, there, I'm Izuku. He then noticed that the girl wasn't the one he knew, but was someone who looked extremely similar to her. The girl looked at him through the bangs that covered her eyes with curiosity, and something else. Fear maybe. She then asked him, or talking to me. Seeing the damage was already done, Izuku tried to salvage what can be saved. Oh, of course. He told her, hoping to trick her and not hurt her feelings. The girl was not convinced. She sighed disappointedly. She truly hoped the boy was actually talking to her, but it was clear he wasn't, and he was trying to spare her feelings, so she said, there's no need to spare my feelings. Thought IW was someone else. Izuku slumped on the desk near a window close to the girl as he said in shame, why yeah, thought you were someone from my entrance exam. He looked at the girl who lowered her head in sadness, but he then added, but that doesn't mean IW wouldn't like to know you be better. I'll start, my name is Izuku Midoriya. The girl then looked at him with a small smile on her face, my name is Kinoko Komori. Izuku laughed a little and said, you aren't a social person, are you Komori? It's kinda like me. Kinoko sighed as she told him, it's because everyone thinks my cute quirk is really disgusting. What is it? Kinoko looked at him with fear and worry. She was sure he will know eventually, but she was afraid that she will scare him away. She looked at him and swallowed heavily as she opened her mouth and said something in a quiet voice. Sorry Komori, can you repeat that because I didn't hear you well? She then said the same thing a little bit higher, but still not loud enough to be heard very well, but he made out a part of it, room. Can please you say it again? She sighed as she said in a normal voice, my quirk is known as mushroom. The girl looked at the boy expecting to see a disgusted face. That was how it was her entire life. People judged her due to her quirk, not even trying to know her first. She was an outcast and barely had any friends at school. But what she found was something different on his face. It was curiosity. And then he began to ask her questions nonstop. That's a really cool quirk. Can you do it whenever you want? Is there a limit on the number of mushrooms you make? Can you alter the property of the mushrooms? Can you control their size? Is there a range for them to appear in? Does the weather affect the mushrooms? Do they grow instantly or do they need a while to grow? Izuku continued to fire questions at an amazing rate while the girl watched in awe, for someone was interested in her quirk. Kinoko was shocked at the many questions that were being thrown at her. She made sure she didn't use her quirk accidentally to cause the boy to go into his current state, but at the same time, she felt flattered that the boy was genuinely excited about her quirk. It brought a smile to her face, but she then noticed the boy going blue from the lack of breathing. Midoriya, I think you should breathe. You don't look too good. The boy was then snapped out of his muttering spree as he looked at the girl. He then blushed heavily as he realized what he was doing, and quickly apologized. Sorry, I didn't mean to look creepy, but I'm really like analyzing Q quirks. Kinoko laughed softly as she told him, and no harm done, Midoriya. Both sat in comfortable silence for a moment, before an idea popped into Midoriya's head as he asked Kinoko, hey, Komori, how were you able to defeat the robots in the E-entrance exam? The girl took a thinking position before answering. I just spread my mushrooms all across the robots' bodies, causing them to malfunction and fail. The boy looked at her and nodded his head, unconsciously saving this little bit of information for later on. Suddenly, a loud yell caused both teens to jump in fear as a boy approached Izuku shouting, "Hello, are you Izuku Midoriya?" The boy was taller than Izuku. He had silver hair and weirdly shaped eyebrows. He also had sharpened teeth. Izuku's fight or flight responses kicked in, or rather answer quickly to avoid a beating instincts kicked in. He looked at the boy with discomfort, as he answered, readying himself for the worst, which is a beatdown on the first day of school. "Why yeah, that's me." The boy looked him up and down before speaking once more. I quote him TETSUTETSUTETSUTET. He was silenced by a floating fist to the head. Both Izuku and Kanoko looked and saw Setsuna come to the boy and grab him by the ear. She then proceeded to yank his ear, causing him to yell out in pain as he begged for mercy. "Didn't I specifically tell you to tone it down while you're speaking to him?" Setsuna asked the boy, who looked like a defeated puppy. "I know," he said as the girl yanked his ear even harder. "Geez, I'm sorry, all right. I didn't mean to scare him. I told you he was a bit jumpy, so why didn't you listen the first time?" she said as she finally released him. He then began to rub his ear with a pouty look on his face. He muttered something under his breath that the startled duo didn't hear, but Setsuna heard and blushed a little. The boy then looked at Izuku and said, "I'm sorry if I startled you there, but I mean no harm." He raised his arms in the air as a signal of peace. He then added, "Setsuna told me about this new guy she met, so I just wanted to meet you. Sorry if I came off a little bit extreme or intense." Izuku sighed in relief as the situation was cleared. He waved his hands and said, "No problem. No harm done." He then added, "As you already know, my name is Izuku Midoriya. Yours is Tetsu. "Yes," the boy exclaimed loudly, only for him to get bonked on the head again by Setsuna, who was standing near him. The boy once apologized to Izuku, before noticing the girl's presence. "And who are you?" The girl in question blushed at the inquiry, but said in a quiet voice, "I'm Kei Kanoko Komori." The boy nodded his head, and then said, "Well, you know who I am. As for the queen of reptiles over here," he said while pointing a finger at Setsuna, "she's my friend Setsuna Takage." "It's nice to meet both of you," Kanoko said in a shy voice. However, the resident lizard lady had a playful gleam in her eyes, as she looked at Kanoko and Izuku. Tetsu noticed the gleam and shivered as he knew nothing good could come out of it. Setsuna then went and laid herself on Izuku, saying, "Izuku, how could you do this? On the first day of school and you already found a new girl. Was I not good enough?" Kanoko looked at Izuku with surprise as she tried to comprehend what she just heard. The green-haired boy now was a blushing mess, because a girl was pressing her body against his. He also steamed due to Setsuna's accusation. Takage, what are you saying? We aren't like that. We just met today." "Not yet," the girl whispered to him as she took a seat behind him. Tetsu then sat in front of him and whispered to him, "Don't worry, you'll eventually get used to it." "I sure did. Thanks, Tetsu. Just call me Tetsu. My name's kind of a mouthful." "Yeah, right. So are you guys a couple or not?" Kanoko asked, not understanding the situation anymore. Izuku blushed heavily as he waved his arms back and forth. "What? No." He was then interrupted by the class door opening and revealing a very huge man entering the room. The man had a very muscular build to him. He wore a red suit with a gauntlet that had a tube connected to his back. He also had a small scar on his face. He had white hair and sharp teeth. Izuku recognized him on the spot. He was the blood hero, Vlad King. He wasn't particularly a famous hero, but he was a hero nonetheless. Izuku bounced excitedly in his chair as the pro stood in front of his desk and introduced himself. "Hello, class, my name is Sekijiro Kan, better known as the blood hero, Vlad King. From now on, I'll be your homeroom teacher, so I'll be addressed as Kan-sensei. Are there any questions?" "No, Kan-sensei," the entire class said. "Good, now I expect that our relationship for the next 3 years will be built on respect. I'm not going to be some kind of totalitarian teacher who enslaves his class. However, I do expect you to treat me with respect and don't cross certain limits or there will be consequences. Any questions now?" When the class didn't answer, he shouted, I said, "Is there any questions?" "No, Kan-sensei. "Good, now that's out of the way. I want everyone to come here when I call your name. I want to introduce yourself, your quirk, and what hobbies you like to build a better sense of familiarity between the students." He saw the entire class nodding their heads, so he picked up a roster and said, "Yui Kodai." A girl with dark hair shaped in a bob cut style came up front. She had blue eyes, but her most striking feature is her expressionless face. "I'm Yui Kodai. My quirk is called size. I alter the size of the things I touch with my fingers, and the effect wears off when I press both hands together. I like to read manga and watch anime." She then went to her seat as another name was called out, Senkaibara. Meanwhile, Izuku was having a field day as he was writing down his classmates' quirks. They were all awesome, and he wished he can ask them more about their quirks, but it can wait for later events. Now his primary mission was to survive day 1 without ending at the infirmary. Recovery girl made it clear she will whack him if he ended up there again. He looked at his notebook and continued to write as he began to mutter. At first, nobody noticed that he was muttering because he was keeping it down. Eventually, his muttering began to grow louder and louder as he wrote down more information. This caused his 3 neighbors to look at him with concern. So Tetsu asked in a quiet voice, "Is he okay?" Kinoko answered, "I think so. From what I understand, this is a common occurrence." She then walked out of her seat as her name was called out. Izuku was now in the zone when he heard a voice yell out his name, "Izuku Midoriya." The boy jumped and shouted, "Yes, Kan-sensei. It's your turn to come and introduce yourself." The boy rubbed the back of his head and walked forward to where all the class can see him. He heard a couple of snickers along the way and he sighed. It was nothing new, so he would eventually get used to it. Hello, my name is Izuku Midoriya. And my quirk is called, Izuku being the person he has thought long and hard about the name for his quirk since its true nature was a secret. Inner energy manipulation. It allows to augment my S strength and S speed. He was cut off by a shout. Today stutter, we're not planning to die here while you talk. Izuku looked down before Vlad shouted, "Be quiet, Kamakiri." He then looked at Izuku and said, "Proceed, Midoriya. My hobbies are W watching Hero V videos, and W writing Q Quirka analysis." Izuku finished. "So, you are like a stalker, who watches people and studies their quirks," the boy from before said, eliciting a few laughs. His name was Tagaru Kamakiri. He had a bug-like appearance with yellowish-green skin. He also had 2 mandibles coming out of his mouth. His fluffy green hair was styled in mohawk style. Izuku looked down in sadness. This wasn't the first time his hobby was insulted, but it still felt bad. Then a voice came up, "I think Sir Midoriya's hobby is rather impressive and should be complimented rather than insulted. In hero work, it would be most beneficial if we had an idea about the villain's quirks rather than being taken by surprise. It's an important skill." Izuku was shocked that this particular thing was being complimented and looked at the voice. It was a boy who resembled a beast. His name was Jiroda Shishida. "No one asked you for your opinion, Bigfoot." Tagaru shot back. "Shishida is right. The ability to know your enemy's quirk is a good thing and can help a pro limit the battle time and keep public damage to a bare minimum if he already had an idea about the villain's weakness." Vlad then looked at Tagaru. "Kamakiri, keep up the wisecracks, and you'll end up expelled faster than you can produce your blades." The bug boy merely scoffed at him before lowering his head. Vlad then looked at Izuku and said, "Midoriya, go back to your seat. And Ibara Shizaki, come up next." However, something didn't fit well with Vlad. It was Izuku. He thought the boy will have his personality all over the place due to his strong quirk. However, he was the opposite, meek, scared, and fearful. But Vlad was determined to make a good pro out of him. As the introductions were finished, Vlad looked at his class and said, "Students, for now, we'll go to the opening ceremony and listen to the principal's speech. Then after that, we'll have a test." The entire class groaned as the test was mentioned. However, Izuku was worried that if it was some type of quirk test he would come dead last since he didn't have decent control, or any control for that matter on One for All. He sighed as students exited the classroom and went to the opening ceremony. He was accompanied by Kinoko, Tetsu, and Setsuna, who all sat beside him. Tetsu then noticed something off. "Hey guys, aren't we a class short?" he said, pointing to 20 empty seats near them. "Yeah, I heard that their tea teacher is super strict and took them to some test right now," Kinoko explained. "Well, this isn't our problem," Setsuna said as she laid back on her chair. Izuku was lost in his own thoughts, only hoping that the test isn't a quirk test, not even thinking about what was happening. The principal then came along and gave a speech making a few announcements, such as a new mysterious teacher, which Izuku knew who he was, and UAS planned to enforce a new dormitory system perhaps in the next year or the second semester. When he finished, everyone was excused, as Vlad announced, "All right, go and get in your gym uniforms. It's time for the quirk apprehension test." Everyone cheered excitedly except Izuku, who sighed sadly knowing he was going to fail this test. Noticing his foul mood, Setsuna asked him, "What's the matter, Green Bean?" "It's just," the boy sighed, before answering, "I can't control my quirk that good, and I don't feel like looking like a fool than I already am. You know this school's role is to help us control our quirks, right?" the girl told him in an all-knowing way. The boy laughed, before replying, "I know, but it's just, how can I be like All Might if I can't control my quirk? That's the thing, you aren't All Might." "Geez, Green Bean, you're on your first day, and you already want to be number one. Ego much?" The poor boy quickly shook his hands trying to defend himself. "No, that's not what I..." The girl snickered at him. "I know, Green Bean, just relax. My point is just don't try to reach the impossible on the first day. We're here to make mistakes, so we don't do them out on the field, so just take it easy." She then lifted her fist and said, "Fist bump." The boy's face flushed as he fist bumped her and then went to change his clothes. In the locker room, everyone was changing to their gym uniforms when Tetsu yelled, startling Izuku, "Dude, where did you get all these scars? That's so manly." Izuku, who was used to working shirtless with no one seeing him, was afraid, so he quickly answered, "Training." He didn't want them to know about his past, and that he was a quirk practice dummy, especially for Kaken. "Sir Midoriya, I must admit to push yourself to such lengths to strengthen your quirk. Gaining these scars along the way must have been painful." "I," the beast boy said while raising his hand, "respect you for such a strong will." We never got to be introduced properly to each other. My name is Jiroda Shishida. A pleasure to meet you. Izuku grasped the Beast Boy's hand and shook it, saying, "Pleasure's all mine. I Izuku Midoriya." After that, everyone went back to putting on their clothes, but when they were about to leave, they heard someone shouting. That voice was enough to make Izuku quiver like a leaf. That test was so fucking easy. I completely aced it. The voice belonged to a boy with ash blonde hair. His name is Katsuki Bakugo, or as Izuku calls him, Kaken. Another boy with red hair. Yeah, you totally killed that ball throw test. And so did Monoma. Shut up, shitty hair, don't compare me to that copycat freak, Bakugo shouted while his hands sparked with small pops from his quirk. Explosion. Tetsu frowned and said, so unmanly he suddenly felt someone hide behind him. He looked and saw Izuku hiding. Concerned, he asked the boy, "Midoriya, is there something wrong?" The boy whimpered a response, "No, let's just leave." The bigger boy didn't what happened, but he could tell that the newcomer was the cause of it, so he nodded his head and headed out with Izuku. On the field outside, everyone saw Vlad with a small digital timer and a paper sheet. He looked at them and began to explain what was going to happen. Listen up, maggots, now. You're all going to participate in 8 different events. This is only a test to gauge your control over your quirks, so don't feel bad if you fell behind. Any questions? No, sensei. Good. First the 50-meter dash, he announced. First up, Tsunotori and Yanagi. The two mentioned girls went to the start of the line. Back with Izuku, he was stuck with his thoughts on how to use his quirk. How can I use one for all without hurting myself? I mean, can only go 100% or 0. And every time I go 100% like All Might, I break my body, so how? Suddenly a thought hit him as Vlad called out the next two. Why am I trying to use 100% of my power? I was built in a hurry, unlike All Might who trained for years to master the quirk. It's like Takage said, I'm not All Might. He then heard Vlad say, Rin and Shota, come up and get ready. Izuku was then deep in thought again. He found a solution to the first problem, which was not breaking his bones with too much power, but how he will use it. He can't just put all the pressure on one part, even at a low percentage. One for all might do damage to him. He then remembered something Kanoko told him when they first talked. I just spread my mushrooms all across the robots' bodies, causing them to malfunction and fail. This was the last piece of the puzzle. How stupid of me. It's like the egg in the microwave. Instead of focusing on the egg alone, I also focus on the microwave too. He was called out of his thoughts when Vlad King called him. Midoriya and Kendo up next. The boy walked to the starting line with a thoughtful face, deciding to try his new theory out. When he reached it, Kendo said, no hard feelings, Midoriya, but I'm going to beat you. Both students got ready, but Vlad watched Midoriya. He wanted to see what he will do. Will he break and fail as he did in the entrance exam? Will he have at least some decent control over his quirk? Or will he decide to do it normally? The first case was something he hoped never happened. The second was something that would impress. And the last was something that he wouldn't mind, since his students' safety come first. As both students took a running position, something began to happen with Midoriya. Midoriya took a deep breath and allowed his quirk to flow through his entire body. His body at first glowed with red veins, grabbing everyone's attention. It then disappeared and was replaced by green lighting that surrounded his entire frame, but Midoriya held a pained expression. Vlad wanted to stop him, but then noticed that along with the pain was concentration, as if he was focusing on something. Izuku during that time was focusing on lowering the power percentage. When he activated that new form, his whole body rattled, so he quickly began decreasing the power till it reached about 4%. He sighed as his body now felt comfortable with the power, rolling his joints to make sure that nothing was wrong. Seeing that both of his students were now ready and not going to break themselves, Vlad yelled, ready, set. The two then readied themselves to run. Go. In a blare, a green streak of lighting ran the 50 meters, surprising everyone. The machine recording the results then announced 3.19 seconds, 5.12 seconds. Kendo looked at Izuku and said, damn Midoriya. Who knew for such a shy guy you had such speed? Izuku laughed awkwardly before saying, why, you were good too. Vlad then came up to them and said, move it, you two. We still have things to do. The two apologized and quickly went to the rest of the class. However, unknown to them, Vlad was happy. Izuku Midoriya, whom Eraserhead, his colleague, deemed with no potential whatsoever, proved him wrong. In your face, Eraser, I told you he only needs time to control it, Vlad said to himself. Now then came the grip strength test. Most of the people did average on it, except for Shishida, who went beast mode, lifting about 500 kilos, and Kendo, who enlarged her fist to try and crunch the machine, only for her to get 320 kilos. Finally, it was Izuku's turn. He swallowed heavily, since he wanted at least a decent score with this one. Since his quirk is strength augmentation in the first place, he felt it would be kinda lame if he didn't at least get in the hundreds. So he then activated his quirk, allowing it to flow through his body as he grabbed the lever and pulled on it with all his strength at 4%. It finally beeped, giving him a score of 135 kilos. Sure, it wasn't the best, but still better than nothing. He still felt tired due to the use of his quirk, and his body was crying out for him to stop. Next was the long jump. The horse girl, or pony Tsunotori, used her horns to fly across the pit, while Setsuna disassembled her body and floated through it with ease. Izuku was truly astounded by his classmates' quirks. His only regret was that he didn't have his notebook to record them while in action. Finally, it was Izuku's turn. He activated his quirk and jumped, only for him to land a couple of centimeters away from the end of the sandpit. He walked out of it with a sad look on his face. His friends noticed this and went to him. "Come on, don't feel bad. You did great out there. You were so manly." Tetsu was the first to speak. "Yeah, dude, chill out. Like I told you, everyone is destined to fail once in a while," Setsuna said with Kinoko nodding her head shyly. Izuku felt a little better and said, "Thanks, guys. You can thank me by taking me out on a date," Setsuna said, causing him to go nuclear red. They were cut out of the moment by Vlad saying it's time for the repeated sidesteps. Everyone did fairly in it, except Izuku, whose legs were killing him for the use of his quirk. It was actually Kinoko who shined this time, as she used her quirk to create bouncy mushrooms to give her a perfect score. Then the time came for push-ups and pull-ups, to which Izuku was in the top 3, not even needing to activate his quirk. All Might's training really put him through the ringer, so this wasn't too much. And now came the ball throw. Izuku watched as Kendo enlarged her fist to throw the ball to a good 500 meters. Shiozaki used her hair to tie around the ball to fling it far away, while Setsuna simply detached hers and floated till it wasn't in sight anymore. Then his turn came. He walked up to the circle, activated his quirk, and was about to throw the ball when he felt someone hold his hand. He looked up to see his teacher stopping him. The man looked him in the eye and said, "Midoriya, in this one I want you to go all out." "But, sir," he was cut off by Vlad, who said, "I know you break your bones when you go all out, but that isn't an excuse. Tell me, what will you do if you had a villain who needs you to go all out? Will you punch him and then break and need to be rescued yourself?" "What? Of course not." "Well, that's what I see currently. Listen, Midoriya, I'm not saying this to discourage you or anything, but sometimes in real-life cases, you have to go all out." He then patted the boy's back and said, "Prove me wrong. Prove to me that you can go all out and still be able to fight." Back at the sides, the students were wondering what was happening with Midoriya and their teacher. "So what go on?" Pony asked in broken Japanese since she was an exchange student. "I don't know, but I think Vlad-sensei is encouraging Midoriya to do his best," Kendo answered while scratching her head. Setsuna then looked at Vlad retreating away and smiled. She then said to Tetsu, "Midoriya is about to do something awesome." The boy looked confused but nodded. Back at the circle, Izuku was processing Vlad's words. "I know he's right that sometimes I have to go all out, but how can I do it without injuring myself too much?" Izuku thought as he looked at his hand, and an idea popped into his mind. It might be a crazy idea, but it just might work. He then stood, took a deep breath as he activated his quirk, and readied himself to throw the ball. Vlad watched with interest what Midoriya was going to do. What he did today was a great improvement. However, he needed to see him also at his best. This whole thing was a test to see his creativity in a desperate situation. "It's here, you either break or stand." Midoriya then aimed the ball and began to throw. "I have to throw the ball while also maintaining my ability to fight, so the best thing I could do is," he thought as he now channeled the energy to his middle finger, "channel everything I have to the last point of contact." He then yelled at the top of his lungs, "Smash." The wind that the hit created caused some to stumble back while others watched with awe. The only person having a different reaction was Setsuna, who was laughing her head off both literally and figuratively. Vlad looked at the dust cloud, which formed around Izuku, with a proud look as it cleared. It revealed Izuku holding his middle finger, which was bruised and definitely broken, as he told his teacher, "Sensei, you see this? I went all out and I can still fight." Around the corner of the field, All Might poked his head as he looked at his successor, and asked himself one question. "What the heck, young Midoriya, when did you become so cool?" "Sensei, you see this? I went all out and I'm still able to fight," Izuku exclaimed, as he lifted his fist with his middle finger definitely broken, and clutched it. His face was stretched into a smile with tears threatening to fall, but he didn't show any pain, which was most likely due to the adrenaline rush. Vlad nodded his head in approval as he said with a smirk, "Midoriya, 705.3 meters. He then walked over to the boy and said, "Midoriya, do you think you can still continue, or do you need to go to Recovery Girl's office?" The boy looked at his finger. It was broken, bruised, and most importantly an unhealthy shade of purple. Against his better judgment, Izuku said, "I think I can still go." Vlad gave him a skeptical look but nodded. "All right then, next up, Shihei Kiwaro." But when Izuku left, Vlad added, "I can't wait for the sports festival to rub this in Eraser's face." Midoriya returned to his class as the boy who was called passed by him with a scowl. He could tell why the boy was upset, because his quirk, which allowed him to merge with black-colored objects, didn't do him any good here. The boy stood there for a moment trying to control the pain that just caught up with him when he was overwhelmed by his classmates asking him many questions. Tetsu first jumped at him and said, "Man, that was so manly. You threw the ball so far away. How strong are you?" The boy blushed at what he perceived as a compliment. Setsuna then came up and said, "Dude, that was so awesome. You totally killed it." She then hugged him on purpose, knowing she will get a hilarious reaction out of him, and on cue the boy had steam coming out of his ears and nose. When the girl let go, he tried to regain his composure when he felt a small tap on his shoulder. He turned and found Kanoko holding a small mushroom. She then said, "Eat this." He raised an eyebrow, remembering how he got his quirk. The memory alone caused shivers to run down his spine. She then added, "It's a painkiller mushroom. I can see that you're in pain, and this one will numb the pain for a bit." The boy smiled at the girl and said, "Thanks, Komori." The girl blushed and said, "You're welcome." On the side, a certain orange-haired girl was watching the boy with great interest. He had such huge power, and it made her wonder in a match between them who would win, his strength or her skills. She also had a couple of questions she needed to ask him right now. "Midoriya, can I ask you a question?" The boy looked confused at Izuku and nodded his head. "Sure, what do you want to know?" "How does your quirk work?" She asked straight and direct. She was never for beating around the bush. "Well, it just gives me super." Izuku said, only to be cut off by Setsuna, who said, "Listen, Green Bean, we heard that part, but we want to hear the mechanism of your quirk. How does it work in the first place?" Izuku looked at her as he began thinking about an answer. He knew from his idol that his quirk crystallizes energy and stores it, allowing the user to access it, so it could be considered a battery of pure energy. Izuku looked at her and said, "Well, my quirk is kinda like an internal battery that I use once I tap into it. The energy then flows through my body, giving me super strength and speed." Kendo looked satisfied with this answer, but asked another, "So that was your full strength?" "Well, not really," the boy answered. Silence filled the air as everyone looked at him amazed until Tagaru decided to break it and said, "How that wasn't your full strength?" "Well, Vlad-sensei wanted me to use my quirk at full strength, while also keeping my ability to fight, so the best solution was to only use one finger. That also cost me some distance," the boy explained. Tagaru scoffed, "No matter, I'll crush you, stutter." This caused Izuku to shiver at the hostility the boy was emitting. Did I do something to anger him? Izuku asked, getting confused looks. The bug boy had it out for him from the very start without a reason. He sighed. He was used to Kaken, so he can get used to Kamakiri. At least, he won't beat him. Setsuna then asked him, "Say, Green Bean, didn't you say that you didn't have much control over your quirk? How come you controlled so well today?" She remembered their conservation before going to change their clothes, and what he said. Izuku answered her, "Well, it was thanks to you and Kanoko." The girls looked at him and said, "Us." "Yeah, at first when I was using my quirk, I always went 100% trying to be like All Might. But Takage reminded me that I'm not him, so I lowered the power percentage. And then I remembered how Komori defeated the robots in the entrance exam by spreading her mushrooms all over their bodies, so I decided to try the same thing with my quirk on my body." The boy answered, and then bowed to the girls and said, "Thanks." Kanoko blushed, while Setsuna laughed at him and said, "Don't mention it, Green Bean. What are friends for?" Suddenly Vlad yelled, "Come on, maggots, we still have 3 tests to complete." Next was the flexibility test, which Izuku did decent on given that his finger was broken. It was followed by seated toe touch, which he also did decently. It was then followed by the endurance run. It took about 15 minutes for half of the class to give out, and a couple more for another 5 to throw in the towel. The remaining 5 were Kendo, Izuku, Tagaru, Pony, and Shishida. Pony looked at them and said in English, "I can go for weeks. My quirk gives me the natural advantage." Izuku replied to her in the same language, "My quirk kinda helps out too." The girl's eyes widened in delight as she said, "You know English?" The boy nodded as the girl smiled happily, saying, "Finally, someone I could talk to." The boy understood where Pony was coming from. Being a foreigner must be hard for her, and having someone who can understand her could help her greatly. Maybe he should give her a couple of lessons in Japanese. It then took a couple of more minutes for the remaining 5 to throw in the tower, with Izuku being third, Shishida second, and Pony first. Now, they all stood in front of Vlad, who was calculating the results. He looked at them and said, "Here are the results." Midoriya looked for his name and was awed. He was in the 5th position. He wanted to cry, but he didn't want to look like some crybaby in front of his friends. Vlad then said, "Now regarding the results, those tests only showed your skill with your quirk, and some were at a disadvantage, not able to use their quirks at all. For all of you to know, these tests don't define who you are. I saw that you all tried your best. Some of you used your quirks creatively, others made up for their inability to use their quirk by pushing their bodies to their limits, and some put up a good show. Now for those on the top, don't get too comfortable with yourselves. Always work hard. Those in the bottom, don't feel bad, we'll work from the bottom up." He noticed that there was no other reason to keep them, so he said, "All right, go to class and get your syllabus." He then turned to Midoriya and said, "Midoriya, go to Recovery Girl's office, here's a slip." The man handed him a small piece of paper. The boy then went away, as others cleared the training ground. Back in the classroom, everyone began packing their bags, and groups formed with each other except a certain bug boy who just sulked alone in the corner of the classroom. Setsuna sat with Tetsu, Itsuka, and Kanoko as they waited for Izuku. She looked at her watch and sighed, "What is taking the green bean so much? It's only a finger." "It all looked really bad though," Kanoko interjected. She remembered how bruised his finger was, and it scared her to no end. She could only imagine what kind of pain her friend must have felt. but she couldn't say she wasn't happy since according to him, now, he had decent control over his quirk so he won't get hurt anymore unless he decided to go all out, which she really hoped he didn't. Kendo then stated, but still to have your bones broken, that's some serious backlash for a quirk. She heard that some quirks cause tiredness, headaches, stomach aches, or some other problem. Heck, she even heard that some quirks cause the user to faint from overdoing it, but to have your bones broken was some really nasty stuff, but she can only imagine what his power will be if he had full control. Only time will tell, she thought. Tetsu was about to add something, when a boy with black hair and a headband said something. Oh, you haven't seen what kind of damage his quirk can do yet. This was a small display. Tetsu then looked at the boy and said, what do you mean, Oase? The boy looked at him and said, I mean he got off lucky this time. I was in the same arena with him, and I have to say that he left one heck of an impression. He said, remembering how Izuku easily leveled the zero-pointer into the ground. A voice spoke up, can we stop talking about the lame-ass stutter like he's freaking All Might? Tagaru said, clearly annoyed with the subject the class was talking about. Satsuna, who had enough of his attitude, walked up to him saying, hey dude, what's your deal with Midoriya? The moment he spoke, you began picking on him. She was truly angry that the bug boy showed such hostility towards her friend. She never liked bullies, and she wasn't going to let one get his way. If she didn't know any better, she would say that Tagaru was here just to fight, not become a hero. The boy pushed her aside and said, keep your opinion to yourself, lizard wretch. You don't see me snooping around your personal business. He then walked away from her toward the door. Satsuna couldn't believe what she heard. Did he just call her a wretch? It just got personal. She looked at him and said, come back here. She lunged forward only to be intercepted by Tetsu, who held her back, saying what Tagaru did wasn't manly. Wanna come at me, wretch? Tagaru said as he brandished two blades from his wrists. Jiroda then stepped forward and said, now please let's calm ourselves down. We're going to be classmates for the next 3 years. So can we at least be civil in our conversations? He finished trying to de-escalate the situation that went from 0 to 100 in a mere moment. He looked to Satsuna, who seemed to have calmed down, for Tetsu to let go of her. He then said, now, can we talk with each other calmly? The bug boy scoffed and left the room as he told them, I have better things to do with my life than talking about some lame-ass stutter. Satsuna, although calm now, was boiling with anger. She didn't know what this guy's case was. He began to pick on Midoriya the moment he walked to present himself. It seemed that the bug boy took a personal annoyance with Izuku's mere presence. This caused her to frown before letting out a sigh as she felt her anger slowly disappear. Tetsu was sharing a similar feeling as he looked at the bug boy's retreating form. He didn't know what his problem was, but he knew he couldn't let him harm his friend just cause he feels like it. Well, that went as horribly as possible. Kosei Tsuburaba said. He was a boy with brown hair. Satsuna then said, okay, aside from the unnecessary comment, and now that the pain in the ass is gone, she said through gritted teeth, let's get back to business. She said, cheerfully, eliciting a few sweat drops at how her mood flipped from planning Tagaru's murder to chatting happily. She then looked at Oase and ordered him, tell me everything you know about the green bean. The boy scratched his head. Well, as I said before, I was with him in the entrance exam, but I don't think he remembers me, not that I think he wants to. Honestly, he was very plain, and he didn't do much. Hell, he couldn't even destroy any robots. He had to be saved every time he tried to. This caused confusion to envelop the class. The main question was how a person with a strength quirk wasn't able to fight robots. He should have torn right through them. But Midoriya has a strong quirk, so how wasn't he able to destroy the robots? Senkaibara asked the question on everyone's mind. I don't know, Yosu said as he shrugged, I'm just saying it as it happened. For most of the test, he was trying to fight the robots quirkless, but seeing the backlash, I can't say I blame him. Though, he was able to level the zero-pointer. This information got wide eyes from all the students except those who entered through recommendations. Juzo Honuki then asked, the what? Juzo was a male with sandy blonde hair. But his most striking feature was his face, which resembled that of a skeleton since he had no lips or visible nose. Everyone looked at him, and Manga Fukudashi showed through his thought bubble a phrase that said, it's a giant robot. Huh, Satsuna said, but then asked, can you guys please explain what the zero-pointer is? No problem, Lady Takage. You see, the zero-pointer is a giant robot about 7 stories high. We were told that it was an obstacle that we should avoid at all costs, and seeing it in person I know why. Jiroda explained. And yet the green bean still went against it. Man, he's full of surprises. Satsuna said, imagining Midoriya defeating the huge robot. Yeah, but why did he do something so unnecessary? Kendo asked, trying to understand the reason why Izuku went after something that was virtually equal to 0. Well, you see, Yosu said while smiling sheepishly, when the zero-pointer was released, everyone ran for their lives, but a girl got stuck under the rumble. When he saw that no one was trying to save her, he ran and destroyed the robot, but he was cut off by Tetsu, who cried, dude, that's so manly. The boy then returned to his story. Aside from that, Midoriya broke his left arm and both his legs during his attempt and then began to fall to the ground. If it wasn't for the girl he saved having some type of gravity quirk, well, recovery girl might have found a red stain on the ground. The last remark earned him a punch to the head from Satsuna, who felt very uncomfortable at the idea of one of her friends dying. Don't say that like you're talking about the weather, Setsuna demanded. Hey, I just said it as I saw it. The boy complained as he rubbed the assaulted spot. But still, that was so manly, and it was really cool of him. Tetsu said. Now, he wanted to go around against Midoriya to see how much he can hold out against people with strength-augmenting quirks. No, the hell it's not, Kendo interjected while neck-chopping the teen. Hey, what was that for? The boy asked as he rubbed his neck. For thinking what he did was cool. Can you even imagine the amount of pain he was feeling? Kendo scolded the boy because she didn't want him to go around fighting Midoriya, making the latter break his bones. Not that he would in the first place, but just in case. But this raises a different question. Why did he break his bones? Rieko Yanagi, the resident ghost girl, asked. Well, he told us that he didn't have good control over it, but we didn't think it was that bad. The way Rubber Band says it makes it sound like he never used it before, Setsuna said. Well, maybe he didn't, Kinoko said, shocking everyone. Looking at the shocked looks, she quickly explained, maybe. He wasn't able to control it well when he was young, so he never actually used it till the entrance exam. Everyone nodded at the logic. Broken bones could make anyone shy away from using their quirk if it meant saving them from intense pain. Well, anyway, we won't have to worry about him breaking his bones anymore, Itsuka said. Who you won't have to worry about? Izuku asked as he entered the room, startling Kendo, who quickly replied, no one. He wanted to say more, but he shrugged. He then asked his friends if they were ready to leave, and they all nodded their heads, so he packed his stuff and left the classroom with the others, leaving the rest of his classmates to their thoughts. In front of the gates of UA, the 5 friends walked together as they all left for their homes. So Tetsu said, man, today was amazing. I mean, I can't believe I'm at UA. He then lifted his arms up and down, cheering till Setsuna smacked the back of his head because he was making a scene. Kinoko piped up next, I know, right? The girl then looked at the ground with a sad face, though I feel like I don't belong here. Kendo then looked at her with concern. Why would you think like that? Kinoko sighed. I mean, I don't have a flashy quirk like Izuku, or a strong one like you, Setsuna, or Tetsu. It feels like I'm here on a fluke, or that I'm cheating and taking someone else's place that is better suited for the hero course. All of them looked at her with concern. Self-doubt is one of man's greatest enemies, and it seemed to them that their friend had a lot of self-doubts that may be due to bullying because of her quirk. Izuku then remembered his conservation with All Might when he received his quirk. Back then, he felt like he was cheating since his power wasn't originally his, but All Might assured him that this power was now his. So he said with a smile, you definitely deserve it, Komori. You managed to pass the entrance exam even though your quirk wasn't suited for combative purposes. In addition, you don't need a flashy quirk to make it into the hero course, your quirk is great as it is. It's very versatile. I mean, if I can be in the hero course, then so can you. The girl looked at him with tears in her eyes as she sniffed, thank you. The others smiled at Izuku's encouraging words for Kinoko. But then Izuku said, but I do get that feeling sometimes, but I never let it hold me down because I have expectations to live up to. This quirked Setsuna's interest, so she inquired, what do you mean, String Bean? I mean, for most of my life no one ever believed in my dream of becoming a hero, but one day someone did. I just hope that I live up to his expectations. He finished as he looked into the distance with a thoughtful look. All of his friends looked at him with awe and newfound respect, but at the same time with worry, seeing how much he carried on his shoulders. Wow, Midoriya, Kendo looked at the boy with newfound respect. She understood his words and where he was coming from. Like him, no one truly believed in her dream of becoming a hero. They always said that her quirk wasn't useful and always put her down. Only her parents believed in her dreams. Her father trained her in martial arts and helped her find her own style of fighting. That's really inspiring. Kinoko looked down to the ground as she thought about Midoriya's words. She always wanted to be a hero. She had a good life, but from the looks of it and how Midoriya spoke, it seems he didn't, or at least had it rough from the get-go. She was filled with a new determination to follow her dreams. Wow, that's so cool. Setsuna couldn't help but feel that Midoriya might be the purest person she ever met, and he deserves the title of hero more than anyone. But she whacked him on the head, causing him to yelp in pain. The other 3 looked at her in shock as if she lost her marbles. Listen, Midoriya, what you said is truly inspiring and all, but you need to chill out. For goodness sake, you're a first year and I only met you, and I can still see you holding the heaviest set of responsibilities on your shoulders. You need to relax, or you won't be able to make it past the first semester, let alone the first year. If only she knew about One for All, he thought, but he then added, but I have to be a great hero to make him proud. If he truly believes in you, he would be proud either way, Setsuna told him. The boy lamented on her words. He remembered how All Might told him how proud he was when he made it into UA. Or when he was able to finish cleaning the beach. He smiled and said, thanks Takage, I'll take your words to heart. I'll try to see chill out. The girl then patted him back as she said, great for you, String Bean. The boy looked at her and said, what happened to Mop Top, or Green Bean? The girl chuckled as she said, I didn't like them that much. But then she asked him, but I have to ask you something. Why did you take so long at recovery, girl? The boy shivered as he recalled his encounter with the old lady. Let's just say that he didn't know old people's canes can be so painful. She tends to take her time. The boy answered quickly as he suppressed a shiver. Okay, Setsuna said, not fully convinced. She then thought of something and said, what will you call your new move? Huh? The boy asked confused. I think she means that move you did when we raced on the 50-meter dash, Itsuka explained. The boy scratched his head as he confessed, I don't think I have one. Then let's find one for it, Tetsu screamed in excitement, making both Izuku and Kanoko feel startled and jump back. A quick smack to the head and an apology followed that. Let me think of something, Izuku said as he rubbed the back of his head. Well, you seem to be covered in energy, Kanoko interjected. How about I name it Full Cowling? Izuku asked. His friends thought about it and nodded their heads. Thanks, guys, the boy said. Setsuna then put her face in his, causing him to go red as she whispered, you can thank me with a kiss. The boy turned even redder than before as the girl laughed. Izuku laughed, once he composed himself, along with the others as they left the school. Unknown to Izuku, a pair of crimson eyes were burning holes into his head. Katsuki Bakugo was no happy camper. He came to this school to show them who's the new top dog around here. But to his surprise, he was shown up by not only one, not only two but by three fucking people. He was shown up by the ponytailed wretch, the icy hot bastard, and the copycat. Freak. But what annoyed him the most is what the copycat did. He used his quirk to pass the ball throw exam. He tried to attack the freak only for him to be captured by the teacher. The sleeping-looking bastard told him if he ever tried that again, he will be expelled. He couldn't believe his ears. The Katsuki Bakugo threatened with expulsion. He wanted to blow the teacher up, but he swallowed it. But still, something else was annoying him more than what the copycat freak did. He actually couldn't pinpoint it. It was like pain that he couldn't get rid of. It was like a thorn in his side that can't get out. This reminded him of the only thing that ever gave him this feeling, or rather the only person. Deku, he thought with anger, but he knew the nerd won't come here. He made it crystal clear that if he ever did, he will kill him. But he couldn't shake that feeling that accompanied the boy. It only increased when he arrived at the changing rooms after the exam. It was only a moment, but he actually saw a patch of green hair go out of the room with the sliver-haired boy. He wanted to attack him but held himself back since that damned nerd isn't the only person alive with green hair. He was so deep in thought he didn't notice a girl walk up to him. Hey Bakugo, what are you thinking about? The boy's instincts kicked in as he turned and was about to blow her up only for him to stop as he saw the source of the voice. Round face, never creep on me like that again. The girl then puffed her cheeks as she said, well, if I didn't do that, you might have slept at school. She said as she turned to walk away, but stopped saying, and my name is Ochako Uraraka. The boy scoffed as he said, whatever, round face. She then walked out to the blue-haired boy who was waiting for her. Bakugo called him a knockoff Sonic due to his quirk being related to speed, but he will settle for 4 eyes cause it isn't a mouthful like the last one. He walked out of the classroom only to be greeted by Shitty Hair smiling like a moron at him. He sighed as he walked away from him. What do you want, Shitty Hair? The boy looked offended as he said, first, our hair is practically the same, and second, my name is Ijiro Kirishima. The boy then stopped a little. He then yelled, I want to walk with you cause you're so manly. Bakugo rolled his eyes as he yelled at the boy, leave me the fuck alone. But the boy kept following as if he never heard him in the first place. Bakugo sighed as he face-palmed. Could this get any worse? He thought. It was as if the universe has answered his question. He saw something that made him blow with rage. It was so small, but he could make it clearly. It was a patch of green hair. It reminded him so much of Deku that he quickly made a beeline toward the group that the patch was walking with. The group made a turn around a corner before he could arrive. He turned around and they simply disappeared. He was so pissed right now. Kirishima then caught up to him and asked him, hey, Baku bro, why did you go in such a hurry and then suddenly stop dead in your tracks? Bakugo didn't hear him. The only thought he heard was that there is a chance the damn nerd didn't take his warning seriously and still came to UA. That quirkless freak actually thought he has the right to stand on the same pedestal as him. He knew that if the nerd wasn't in 1A, then he'll most likely be in 1B. He will get to the bottom of this tomorrow. He walked home as he growled, Deku. It was Midoriya's second day at UA, and he was excited, to say the least. The first day went better than he honestly expected. He made new friends, gained at least some idea on how to control his quirk without breaking his bones, and most importantly he didn't get beat up. It may seem sad, but that was Izuku's normal routine before UA. He walked up to the gates and took a step forward, but he didn't fall. He chuckled a little as he thought that he would fall to the ground again. He was so distracted that he actually managed to bump into someone. Izuku looked at the person he bumped into and felt a shiver run down his spine. It was the scary boy from the entrance exam. He still remembered how the boy treated him, whether dismissing him at the briefing or accusing him that he was trying to sabotage the nice girl. The boy looked at him and his face held a scowl as he said, watch where you are going. Are you sure you belong in UA? Students of UA should have utmost vigilance so things like these don't happen. I truly recommend that you change schools since you don't hold the spirit of UA. The boy continued to talk about how UA students should behave like him, but Izuku made the mistake of cutting him off by saying, I'm sorry, okay? The boy looked offended by being cut off and said, it's rude to cut off people while they're speaking. The boy continued to lecture him as Izuku shrank on himself, sighing as he wondered how his day took such a bad turn all of a sudden. A voice then caught both boys' attention. Hey, leave him alone. He said sorry, didn't he? Izuku looked inside in relief as he saw Kendo approach him. The boy tried to talk to Kendo to reprimand her for something, but the girl didn't have it. She grabbed Izuku's arm and dragged him away, saying to the boy, since you're the model student of UA, get to your class. You're almost late. The boy looked at his watch and ran quickly. Well, he's something, Kendo said. She then looked at Izuku and asked, what did you do to him anyway? I just bumped into him. The boy answered honestly. This made the girl confused. All this fuss just for bumping into him. Either the guy was seriously stiff, or, no, he was just stiff. Well, anyway, let's go to class, she said. She then took a more excited tone, as she asked Izuku, who do you think our teacher is? What do you think we will do today in our first heroics class? The boy smiled sheepishly and said, I have no idea. The girl pouted as she said, you're no fun, Midoriya. A few moments later, they both reached their class just in time to hear Setsuna and Kanoko speaking. Man, what a freak. What he was doing here anyway. He was watching everyone entering the class with a look that can kill the gods. Kanoko then said, his crimson eyes really scared me. It was like he can see in my soul. Izuku shivered at the description and can only think of one person. Kaken, he thought in fear. He hoped he can avoid the boy for a little longer or perhaps forever if possible, but it looks like the boy has already begun searching for him. He shivered at the idea of Bakugo giving a beatdown every day here. He didn't want his friends to find out about his past with Bakugo. He sure learned to accept it, but that doesn't mean he wanted others to know about it. It would make him look weak, not that he was strong before entering UA. The boy was startled out of his thoughts when a floating hand poked his stomach. The boy turned red as he asked the lizard girl, what are D doing, T-talkage? The girl laughed and said, you went into a muttering spree, so I stopped you. The boy blushed heavily. He then looked at Kanoko and greeted her. Then Tetsu burst into the room, and he shouted as he raised his arms in the air, I scared him away. What do you mean? Kendo asked. There was some freak that was standing in front of the door of our class saying he was looking for someone named Deku. He wouldn't go away nicely, so I sicked Tetsu on him, Setsuna said. Izuku shivered a little at the mention of the nickname Kaken gave him. Izuku then looked at Tetsu as if he was some sort of deity. Never in a million years did he think someone can defeat Kaken. But then Tetsu added, I didn't do much, I only talked with one of his classmates who came and took him away. Kanoko then looked at Midoriya and asked him, are you alright, Izuku? The boy looked at her and said, what do you mean? I mean once we mentioned that guy, you were shivering. The girl said, before Tetsu also gave his 2 cents, yeah, dude, do you know him? He still remembered yesterday when Izuku shivered after he heard the boy's voice. Izuku felt his throat grow dry as his friends looked at him expecting answers. He prayed for every deity he knew of to help him. And as if the universe heard him, the door opened as Vlad walked in. Izuku sighed in relief, but Setsuna then whispered to him with a giggle, this isn't over, Greenie. The boy gulped as Vlad began explaining what was going to happen today. Listen, maggots, today is your first heroic class. So you will all go to Gym Gamma and wait for your teacher there. Yosu raised his hand, and Vlad said without looking at him, no, you won't need your hero costumes. The boy then lowered his hand. Vlad then looked at his class and yelled, now, go and change. Yes sir, everyone yelled as they left the room. 10 minutes later, everyone was standing in the gym waiting for the new teacher to enter. Kanoko looked at her friends with excitement. Who do you think the new teacher is? I don't know, maybe a pro from the top 20 heroes, Setsuna said with Tetsu, Kanoko, and Kendo nodding their heads. Izuku on the other hand was beaming with excitement. He knew who the new teacher was, and he couldn't wait to see him. He was excited to study under such a strong hero. The gym's doors opened and everyone looked with anticipation only for them to all scream at the same time. Vlad SENSEI, you're the new heroics teacher. Disappointment could be seen on the students' faces, especially Izuku's face. The teacher looked at his students' crestfallen faces and didn't know whether to laugh or feel offended. Finally, he settled for neither, as he shouted, heads up maggots. I'm not your heroic teacher. I only hijacked your first class. I need to see a couple of things before I set you to heroic training. And what would be that, Vlad-sensei? Setsuna asked the blood-themed hero. I want to make a sort of physical examination. I want to see how much you can all push your bodies before they fail. Second, a combat session, Quirkless style first, then a small one with quirks. The matches he had already been set. And finally, a quirk showcase. Abar then raised her hand. After she saw a nod from her teacher, she asked him, Vlad-sensei, didn't we yesterday tell each other our quirks, so why a quirk showcase? Vlad nodded at her logic. She wasn't wrong, but she also wasn't right. You're right, Shizaki, but what you did yesterday was the equivalent of just giving the title of a presentation. I want you all during the quirk showcase to give as many details as possible about your quirk. This will help you later on when you're partnered with each. It will make you work smoothly as a team. He stopped and then asked, does that answer your question? The vine-haired girl nodded her head and then lowered her hand. But Vlad had another reason for the quirk showcase, unknown to Izuku. Vlad heard his mumbling the day before when the students presented themselves and their quirks. And when the boy said he does quirk analysis, he came up with this thing to test the boy's abilities. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. He then said, alright, everyone, drop and start doing push-ups till your hands give out. The students looked at him as if he joking, before he yelled, what are you waiting for? The last one to start will have to do my paperwork after school. Not wanting that fate to befall them, everyone dropped to the ground, and all the students did their best. The first to throw the towel was Manga, followed closely by Kinoko, and so on till there were only Kendo, Tetsu, Tagaru, and Izuku doing them. The green-haired boy looked at the others, and they seemed that they were not going to stop anytime soon. 10 more minutes and only Izuku and Kendo were doing push-ups. The girl looked at him and said, "You're quite strong, Midoriya." "Thanks, you too." 2 more minutes later, both students fell to the ground tired and exhausted. Setsuna then came and said, "You seem like you're both enjoying this way too much." Vlad then yelled, "Come on, we don't have time to play around. We still have a lot of work to do." The exercises that followed the first one can be only called torture, according to the students. Students were forced to do pull-ups till their hands broke down, squats till they couldn't feel their thighs, and running for around an hour before they all threw the towel. The teacher walked over to his students near dead forms and said, "Pull yourselves together, we have work to do. If you're like that, you won't be able to make it." The students begrudgingly stood up as they readied themselves for the next torture session. The teacher then said, "It's time for quirkless combat, then quirked combat. The first is to see how you do if you come up against someone with a quirk opposite to yours, or if using your quirk will damage the surrounding area. Quirked combat, as I said, will be later to see if there is a certain fighting style that will help you. Now here are the matches. 1 Kendo versus Tetsu. 2 Takage versus Kamakiri. 3 Komori versus Kodai. 10 Midoriya versus Shota. Both boys looked at each other. Izuku looked at the mentioned boy. He was a short boy about his height or a little shorter. He had iceberg blue hair, and most importantly his hobby is boxing. Izuku gulped, he was screwed. Shota saw this and walked over saying, "I can see you're worried. I'll go easy on you if you want." Izuku thought about it but shook his head saying, "No, it's for the best if you go all out." Vlad Sensei said he wants to gauge our ability when it comes to quirkless combat, so it will hurt a bit but it will be worth it in the end. The boy nodded his head, respecting Midoriya's decision. The matches began to take place, and Izuku took notes about his classmates. It was clear Kendo had a lot of martial arts skills under her belt, while Tetsu was more into wrestling. Setsuna was using some sort of combination between kung fu and street brawling, while Kamakiri Izuku could say didn't know how to throw a punch without using his quirk, though he had to give respect to the boy's reaction time, which was impeccable. Kinoko wasn't too good either, and so was Kodai. Then it was him against Shota. The fight was long, although Midoriya didn't know how to throw a punch, he knew how to avoid one. 5 minutes into the fight and Shota was able to land a hit causing Midoriya to bend over, and he officially lost. "Okay everyone, stop and take 5 minutes to rest," the teacher yelled as he reviewed the results for later examination. Izuku sat depressed as he thought that without his quirk he was a sitting duck, and there were a lot of cases where he couldn't use his quirk. Kendo approached him with Setsuna, "What's up with you?" the green-haired girl asked. The boy answered, "I really did badly in quirkless combat. Without my quirk I can't fight." Kendo then asked, "Didn't you learn any type of self-defense classes during your childhood?" Izuku thought about it once in 2nd grade but then changed his mind. It was due to Kaken, who saw him going to a dojo and told him if he ever went there again he will break his legs. He said that the dojo shouldn't waste its time on a quirkless freak like him, so he lied, laughing a little. "My mom is a little bit overbearing. She thought I might get hurt if I went there." The girls looked at him with confusion because if what he was saying was true, then why was he here in the hero course? Being in the hero business is much more dangerous than a simple dojo, but they didn't push him and they knew he will eventually tell them the real reason. Then Vlad came into the gym saying, "All right maggots, the break is up. Time for quirked combat." The matches are pretty much the same with some pairs like Tetsu and Itsuka, while others changed widely like Kinoko and Yui or Pony and Ibara, who with their quirks tried to find a way to beat each other, the latter trying to trap the horse girl while the former was running around trying to outmaneuver the vines and also find a blind spot to hit Ibara. But the most striking was Kamakiri and Izuku's change, both changing the dial from 0 to 100. The first using his blades to combat the lizard girl's quirk, which was the ability to split, putting him at a disadvantage, while the latter was using his superior speed to dodge and avoid Shota's fist so his quirk won't activate, which was double impact. If he hit a target he can increase the after effect of his hit many times over. After they were done, Vlad gave out some comments on how they could improve. He told some students that they were good and should continue working on both forms of combat. Others were given tips, such as Ibara, who was told to find a way to use her quirk without being an open target, or Izuku, who was told that he should use more than punches. Finally, it was time for the quirk showcase. Izuku was excited so much he was bouncing like a child. His friends came alongside him and saw his state and smiled. Tetsu was first to speak. "Hey Midoriya, bet you're excited, huh?" "I am, it's just your quirks are so awesome. I can't wait to ask you questions about them," Izuku said with a big smile. His friend's sweat dropped, hoping that he didn't ask them questions that they themselves didn't know how to answer. "All right, everyone, let's begin." Vlad looked at his students. "Let's see, who wants to go up first?" No one raised their hands except Tetsu, who Vlad allowed to come first. "All right, as I told you before, my quirk name is Steel, which allows me to make my body into steel. But my quirk can get stronger if I eat metal, so that's why I always eat iron shavings to increase my durability. The whole crowd was silent, except Izuku, who raised his hand to ask a question. Can I ask you a couple of questions? Sure, go ahead. The steel boy said. Can you apply it on parts of your body, or does it always have to be on your entire body? You said you eat iron shavings to increase durability. Did you try to eat anything else? How does the steel appear? Does your body take the iron in your blood to make it like steel, or is it natural? Does your speed get affected by the steel coating, or not? The boy looked at him gaping as he tried to comprehend the questions. Once he got a hold of them, he answered, I never tried to do that. No, I don't eat other metals, but tell me after this what that would do. Yeah, I think so, since if I use it for too long I get iron fatigue. Yeah, I think so. Everyone looked at Izuku, who was writing furiously in his notebook, and one question could be heard. Where did he get the notebook in the first place? The boy looked at Tetsu and explained, well, my theory is that if you eat metals other than iron, it may allow to change your metal form temporary from steel to another form of metal. As for your speed, I suggest learning how to change from quirk form to your base form quickly. That way if you were on a mission you can switch forms easily, giving you both strength and speed. Tetsu was dumbfounded. Izuku just broke down his quirk and gave him ideas he didn't think of himself. He went back to the class thinking he should ask the boy for more tips if he had some. Vlad was impressed, to say the least. The boy had talent when it came to quirk analysis. Maybe he should ask him for some input. The class went on with Izuku usually asking questions about everyone's quirks. It was now Kamakiri's turn, and he walked up to the center and he said, look here at the next number 1 hero's quirk. My quirk is blade and it gives me the ability to produce blades. He looked at Izuku, who was oddly quiet, and said, well, what are you waiting for? The boy looked at him confused, but asked, you want me to ask you about your quirk? The bug boy nodded as he said, don't go thinking far ahead. I still don't like you, but I won't throw free advice away. Okay, Izuku said warily, from where exactly can you make your blades? How long can they be? How durable are they? Can they be removed from your body? The bug boy thought a little before he answered, I can make them from everywhere. A couple of centimeters, I think. I think I can't cut rock and stone. They make them dull. I never tried that. Well, if you can emit them from everywhere, you should try and focus on fighting style oriented around your wrists and palms. Maybe take some swordsman lessons to sharpen your abilities. As for the rocks and stones, I think you should keep trying till they eventually become strong enough to tear through them. Tagaru looked at the boy before nodding his head. This was some good advice, even he wasn't that arrogant to say it wasn't. Midoriya maybe is a stutter, but he still has an edge to him, the bug boy thought. Finally, it was Izuku's turn, who was the last person to speak. He walked and said, well, as I told you, my quirk is inner energy manipulation, which allows me to enhance my speed and strength. It kinda acts like a B battery unit, which I tap into it and use the stored energy inside it. There's really nothing much about it. Setsuna then raised her hand for a question. Once the boy nodded, she asked, hey Greenie, you asked about everyone's quirk, so it's fair I ask a question about yours. Where does the stored energy come from? Everyone looked and nodded after Izuku basically dissected the biology of Itsuka's quirk a while back. They wondered if he could dissect his. The boy remembered the cover story he made for this situation. It may reveal a part of his past that he actually was comfortable talking about, to some extent at least, but better than revealing one for all. Well, you see, most might think my quirk is an enhancement type, but it isn't. The class looked at him confused while Kendo asked, it isn't? No, not really. My quirk is a stockpile quirk, which means it needs to store energy. I have a theory as to where the energy comes from, but... He stopped till Vlad said, what are you waiting for? Tell us. The man stopped for a moment before adding, if you are comfortable sharing that with us. Well, you see, the energy needed to accumulate slowly over time, so at first I wasn't able to use it. No, scratch that. I didn't even know I have a quirk. I think when I trained my body enough, in addition to the former condition being met, I was able to activate it for the first time at the entrance exam. Everyone looked at him dumbfounded, till Tetsu said, so you're basically saying you were quirkless most of your life, till the entrance exam? Yeah, pretty much. Izuku said that in a nonchalant way that made his friends think, how could he be so calm about this? Wait, hold on, when did you actually activate your quirk? Setsuna asked. The boy smiled sheepishly and said, when I wrecked the 0-pointer, it was the first time I ever used it. So wait, you ran to that hulking thing without a quirk? Kendo asked, dumbfounded. Yeah, I mean, no one was saving the girl and that robot was going to run through her. I had to help her. I couldn't just run away like everyone else. Isn't a hero's job to rescue people? Izuku answered. Everyone went quiet at his reasoning. He was right, but that doesn't mean killing yourself. Vlad saw the tense atmosphere but also had answers to many questions he had. Why the boy broke his bones, why he had a meek personality, and many more. So deciding this had lasted long enough, he said, all right, that's enough for today. Everyone go to lunch now. Izuku walked to lunch with his friends as silence filled the air. When they sat, they noticed the boy continuing to walk and sit alone. Setsuna then walked up to him and asked, what are you doing? He looked at her surprised. Don't you hate me now? What? Why would I? Well, I told you I was quirkless, he said as he looked down. It didn't take a genius to know right here to know that Izuku was bullied during his childhood because of his said condition. Greenie, quirkless or not, that doesn't make you less of a human. Now come on, let's go eat with our friends, she told the boy as she walked with him to their table. His friends looked at him with worry, but Izuku was the first to talk. Midoriya, did we do something to upset you? He was about to answer, but the lizard girl beat him to it. This knucklehead thought that we hate him because he told us that he was quirkless. The other three looked offended, but Kanoko spoke first. Izuku would never hate for something that isn't your fault. Yeah, quirkless or quirked doesn't change the fact that you are our friend, Izuku added. Yeah, I also think you were so manly coming to the entrance exam quirkless. But out of curiosity, how were you planning to destroy the robots? Tetsu said, earning a neck chop from Kendo, saying, don't be rude. They all looked at Izuku, who was letting a few tears slip as he said, thank you for not hating me. The four then hugged him, as a sign of their care, but then Izuku looked at Tetsu, and said, regarding your question, I had no idea. Really? Kendo asked. She didn't want to judge him, but she couldn't help it. Yeah, he started, but looking at it in hindsight, it was pretty dumb. I should have at last brought a staff. Well, it worked out, didn't it? Tetsu said. But Satsuna needed to ask one more thing. Just one question. If you didn't know that you had a quirk, and didn't bring a weapon to aid you, why did you try for the hero course? Wouldn't it have been much easier to get there through the sports festival for you? The others were also intrigued by her question. The boy then answered, it's because I was quirkless I had to get through the entrance exam. Quirkless people are always treated like they're less than humans. I thought that if I got to the hero course through the entrance exam, it would break the stereotype that quirkless means useless. Everyone looked shocked at his answer, before Tetsu cried, that's so manly. Satsuna looked at him and said, man, you're made of puppies. What's next? You volunteer at the orphanage? Or you're the one that cleaned the beach a while ago? Izuku laughed as he mentally said, you have no idea. The other four joined him in laughing as they then continued to eat their lunch. Unknown to the boy, someone spotted him. Across the hall, a certain blonde hair was angry as he snarled, Deku. After finishing the first hero class for the students of 1B, Vlad slowly walked to the teacher's lounge to cool his head off, while he contemplated the new information he just received about Izuku Midoriya. When he demanded the boy to be in his class, he thought he was going to deal with a boy whose ego is so inflated that it was the size of a huge mountain. He thought that the boy was so arrogant that he didn't even try to train his quirk, and his arrogance came back to bite him hard in the entrance exam. That was his worst option, but he honestly dealt with worse people than him because he could see that the boy's heart was in the right place when he saved the girl. The better option was that the boy had a hard time controlling his quirk, so that's why he didn't train it or had a good handle on it. He can sympathize with that given that his blood control was a tricky one, and no one ever thought he would be a hero, but he made it. It was hard nowadays to find a place to train your quirk except for government facilities, which cost a fortune. Either way, he was determined to make a decent pro out of him. But imagine his shock when he first met the boy. His personality was meek, shy, and awkward. He would cower at the slightest loud sound as if it meant his doom. When Toguro cut him off in class, instead of getting angry, he seemed rather docile, and disappointed perhaps, as if he was expecting something different. When the quirk apprehension test happened, he expected the boy to be at the bottom of the totem pole, but he did amazingly well. This only helped to raise more questions for Vlad. If he had such good control over his quirk, why didn't he get villain points? If he was that good, he should have been the first on the entrance exam, with no other competitor even managing to come near his score. It wasn't till today that he finally understood the real reason behind the anomaly, which is Izuku Midoriya. It wasn't due to arrogance or due to lack of control. The real reason was that the boy didn't even know that he had a quirk in the first place. His student lived his entire life believing he was quirkless, only for it to manifest during the entrance exam in the most catastrophic of ways. But why during the entrance exam? He can only chuck it off to the adrenaline rush and the situation he was put in that caused it to activate for the first time. This also tipped him off that his coworker, who was responsible for looking up the files of the first 10 examinees, didn't do it. Lazy bum, he muttered under his breath. He wanted to yell at him, but he already won and had the grand prize delivered to him. He can still remember the argument that he had with Eraserhead over Izuku. The underground hero wanted to kick him out before he even saw him in action. It was a good thing he refused that and insisted that the boy will be in his class, or else the worst could have happened with the boy trying to be a vigilante like many other of the underground hero students who he expelled wrongfully. He started to reminisce about the entire conversation he had with him and the other teachers when they decided the fate of the boy. After finally finalizing the results of the entrance exam, and picking the 36 examinees who would be part of the hero course, he already had his share of the recommendation students. He took the girl with the splitting quirk and the boy with the softening one, while Eraser took the one with the dual ice and fire quirk and the girl with the creation quirk. First, Eraser chose to take the boy with the hardening quirk and the girl with the acid one, while Vlad chose the boy with the steel quirk and the boy with the blade quirk. Next, Eraser tried to snatch the girl with the hand enlargement quirk, but Vlad refused, saying that she would benefit from his class. That mostly focused on technique rather than raw strength. The underground hero begrudgingly accepted it and snatched for himself the boy with the tail. Then came the boy with the quirk that allowed him to merge with black objects, which Vlad took much to Eraser's annoyance. The latter was mildly pleased when he took the invisible girl. The two homeroom teachers then divided two girls with quirks who had similar activation requirements, the gravity quirk for Eraser and the size quirk for Vlad. Then Vlad took the giant with the glue quirk and the boy with the wielding quirk, while Eraser took the ones with the tape and sticky balls quirk. How did that boy get in was beyond Vlad's understanding. Then it was followed by a heated discussion on who takes the girl with the vine quirk. It didn't end till Nezu gave her to Vlad, who seemed victorious, while Eraser was given the girl with earphone jacks. Vlad then took the girls with the mushroom and telekinesis quirks, while Eraser took the girl with the frog quirk and the boy with the multiple arms. Eraser then demanded the boy with the sugar quirk, which Vlad accepted, taking for himself the boy who was using some kind of recoil impact quirk he thought initially. The boy with the beast quirk then went to Vlad, while the boy with the explosions went to Eraser, much to Vlad's relief. A character like him in his class will definitely cause problems. The boy with the rock head then went with Eraser, while the one with the grating one was taken by Vlad. The little brother of Ingenium was whisked away by the nighttime hero, while he took the boy with the air hardening quirk. Then Vlad had the horse girl, while Eraser took the electric boy. This process went on for at least 2 hours before being finally left with two names. 1 Izuku Midoriya, 2 Nido Monoma. There was a moment of silence while Vlad looked at Monoma's quirk. He was ready to fight tooth and bone for him in order to get the boy and put him in his class. His quirk was copy, and he would most likely be an underground hero with that, so he needed the technique that Vlad offered for all of his students. But then the unexpected happened. "I'll take Midoriya," Eraser said. Under normal circumstances, Vlad would have been happy he got the student that he wanted, but something felt wrong here. It was that Eraser picked Midoriya willingly without him being forced to, when a kid with a quirk that was underground worthy was presented in front of him. And given Midoriya's performance, he felt Eraser wouldn't want him, given that he usually avoided people who he nicknamed problem children. Interest overtook Vlad as he asked, "Why do you want Midoriya? You usually avoid people like him as if they were the plague, and I usually get them." The insomniac hero smiled a creepy grin that nothing good could come out of it as he said, "You caught me." Vlad raised an eyebrow and said as he crossed his arms, "What are you planning?" "Simple, I will expel him the moment I walk into the room. He has no place here," the underground hero said with zero hesitation. Present Mike then said as he put his hand on Aizawa's shoulder, "Come on Shota, aren't being a little cruel toward the little listener. You usually give your problem children a chance to prove themselves before you make the decision." He knew his friend wanted the best for his students, but this was borderline cruel. Expelling him before he even had the first class was too much. At least last year, he gave the entire class he expelled a chance to get to the field before giving them the kick. Midnight then said, "Yeah, at least let him take the apprehension test. You don't know, maybe he will have some control till then." She tried to get to the logical area in her friend's mind, but apparently, it didn't make it. "No, he had 11 years to get control over his quirk, but I know the reason why he didn't," Eraser said with a bored face as he opened a small bag, pulling out a file, slowly earning Vlad's attention, who saw a picture of a boy with purple hair on it. Vlad then concluded that Eraser wants to put this boy in the hero course, but at the expense of Midoriya. This was, as the nighttime hero called it, the height of irrationality. He was cut from his thoughts as Eraser said. He probably thought that he was so grand that he doesn't need to train his quirk, but was shocked when he reached the entrance exam and saw how the real world works. In short, he has no potential. No potential was a phrase Vlad came to hate with a passion, due to the reason that multiple students with good hearts, but had problems with their quirks which could have been solved by simple quirk guidance, only to be expelled by Eraserhead. They then went either two ways: vigilantism, or other schools where they flourished, unlike what Eraser said. Ectoplasm then said, "You being too harsh here, maybe the boy has a hard time controlling it. Does his file say anything that could give us an idea as to why he can't control it?" Like Eraser, he was a teacher who depended on logic. However, he still gave others the benefit of the doubt. If the boy had a hard-to-control quirk, he should have quirk counseling, which could help him. It was there for a reason. Eraser then said, "I personally looked at the files and gathered the information myself, and from what I saw, he has no reason to control it." Eraser then put the file he had on the table. He was about to speak when Vlad took Midoriya's file and said, "You know what, I'll take Midoriya. His quirk seems simple enough to work with, but he needs experience and a bit of sharpening." Eraser then scowled, "What are you doing?" "I said I'll take him. Monoma needs someone who can teach him how to use his quirk, and from what I see, you're the best for this." Vlad scoffed. He knew that Eraser was buttering him up. He heard how the nighttime hero always accused him of coddling his students, not being tough enough with them, even though with the amount of torture he actually put them through, a couple of students actually dropped out. "No, Monoma needs you. His quirk is best suited for being an underground hero, and you're probably his best option." Other teachers nodded at Vlad's statement. Vlad was actually sad, but he saw potential in Midoriya. He didn't want to sacrifice his hold on Monoma, but it was worth it. Midoriya has a huge amount of potential, as Eraser would put it, so he didn't want him to lose his chance at being a hero. Midoriya, his quirk seems to come from inside his body and requires him to bring it forth, kinda like mine, so I'm his best choice. Again the teachers nodded at the statement, as the boy's quirk was labeled inner energy manipulation. He can sympathize with that. He himself had a very hard quirk to control, so he was willing to help the boy out. The nighttime hero frowned. This was not going as he expected. He thought the moment he offered Monoma to Vlad, it will be over. But the other teacher had made it his mission to keep someone with no potential inside the hero course, so he thought of something. Okay, how about we reach a compromise? I'll put him in general studies, then in the sports festival if he did well. I'll let him join next year while someone with more control over his quirk takes his place. This will be his wake-up call. The other teachers looked at him like he grew another head. Did he honestly think that the student he expelled will willingly study under him with a huge gap between him and the other students? He was basically setting him up to fail. No, I insist that I'll take the boy. I'll have the better luck in helping him master his quirk. Vlad insisted, hoping to avoid confrontation. Eraser then said, okay, I'll be frank, the boy has no potential whatsoever. He needs to be kicked out to give him the wake-up call that he needs and knock that inflated ego of his down a peg. No matter the circumstances, he has to have control over his quirk over those 11 years. Vlad lost his cool for a moment as he yelled, just let me give him a chance. Everyone was shocked by his yell since he was known as one of the most level-headed teachers. The reason why he screamed was that he knew how hard some quirks are to control. His quirk was a prime example. His blood control was difficult. He was only thankful that his teacher didn't give up on him. If he had someone like Eraser, he would have been kicked out of the hero course. Eraser didn't react too kindly to this and activated his quirk, saying, don't raise your voice. The two then continued to bicker back and forth with the other teachers trying to defuse it. It went on till the principal said, enough. Everyone looked at him. He was a small animal-like humanoid with white fur. Nezu then said, Vlad, are you sure that you can help the boy? Vlad, who calmed down, said, definitely. Nezu hummed and then said, all right, so be it. Vlad, you have Midoriya. Eraser, you take Monoma. End of discussion. Eraser didn't argue as he walked out of the room with an annoyed expression, while Vlad looked pleased that the boy wasn't kicked out unfairly. He was rather sad that Monoma was taken away. But he can work with Midoriya given that he was willing to sacrifice himself to save a girl that he didn't know. As long as his heart is in the right place, he will make a good hero, even though there is a chance that he might have a huge ego like Eraserhead said. But he dealt with worse. Powerloader then said, well, that happened. Vlad then chose to leave the room to prepare for the lessons that will begin next spring. He walked outside saying, I really hope I don't regret this. And he didn't regret it. Although the boy was quirkless till not so long ago, he showed great control over his quirk during the apprehension test, and something told him that he wasn't going all out, not that he can call him out on it. It's better that he builds the amount of energy he can handle rather than breaking and failing. He also hit the jackpot with Midoriya due to his quirk analysis skills. It was amazing what he can think of. He even had applications for his quirk that Vlad didn't think of. Monomolecular blades from the plasma in my blood. How didn't I think of that? Vlad thought as he looked through a small notebook that Midoriya had with him. He had asked the boy to borrow it from him and the boy accepted, though very hesitantly raising a few red flags, and the way he broke down his classmates' quirks really impressed the hero. But aside from that, he was also concerned for the boy, especially how skittish and meek he seemed. He would bring up the possibility of putting him under Hound Dog to help him deal with any damage that may have occurred from his quirkless years. He could only hope that the damage isn't too intense. He also was thinking of a way to help the boy further strengthen his control over his quirk, or at least build up more power. This could be done through quirk counseling or after-school activities. Either way, he would have to talk to him about this, though he would emphasize the importance of the boy not pushing himself too much. In the teacher's lounge, everyone was sitting peacefully while doing their thing. Well, everyone except Powerloader, who was stuck to the cameras making sure his newest student didn't blow up the lab for God knows how many times. Mike looked at him and said, come on, relax a little. I doubt the little listener could do so much damage in so little time. Powerloader looked at him and retorted, she caused 10 explosions in 1 minute. I highly doubt she wouldn't cause a disaster while I'm gone. This new student was a menace, but at the same time she was one of the best students in the new batch. He couldn't throw her out. Midnight laughed at the support teacher's plight, while Mike looked over to Eraserhead, who was snoozing off in his sleeping bag. What do you think, Shota? The tired hero looked at him and said, everyone has their problem child. I have Bakugo with the ego of 10,000 mad tyrants, Majima has his problem child, and Vlad has. He was cut off by Vlad coming inside the room and greeting everyone. The night hero then returned to his sleeping bag, not wanting to continue. Vlad then sat on a couch, setting the notebook aside that he was reading on the table in front of him, and picked up a cup, filling it with coffee. He then was asked by Cementos, how was their reaction when you hijacked their first heroic period? Disappointed as I expected, but they benefited greatly from my intervention because now they have greater insight on their friends' quirks, and theirs too, Vlad answered. Interested, Cementos asked, how come? Well, turns out that one of my students has great quirk analysis skills. He broke down everyone's quirks, giving them advice on how to improve them. Hell, he even changed one of my students' outlook on her own quirk drastically. Vlad said, remembering how Izuku deduced that Itsuka's quirk has 2 factors, enlargement and super strength, and that there is a possibility for her to separate them and use them individually. Ectoplasm was then interested as he looked at the notebook that said Hero Analysis for the Future number 13 2.0, so he asked, is this his work? Yeah, feel free to look through it. I think I saw your name in it somewhere. The ghost-themed hero then opened the notebook and skimmed through till he found his section, and began to read. So he knows about my giant clone, interesting. His idea about my clones being in between regular form and giant form isn't wrong though, it could come in handy. Well, this one is quite interesting. He theorizes that I should be able to create clones with multiple limbs, preferably arms, sort of a combination technique. I have to try this later on. The ghost-themed hero then put the notebook down as he said, he seems to have quite the eye for detail. I must admit that he has ideas I didn't think of. Midnight then snatched the notebook saying, my turn, causing Eraserhead to say, this isn't a competition. The R-rated hero then pouted while saying, no one asked you. She flipped through the small book till she found her page. How does he know that I only rip my suit for show? Oh, he seems to think my quirk works on producing pheromones mixed with a sleeping agent. The only reason it doesn't work on women instantly like men is that the gas I usually release is female pheromones mixed with the sleeping agent, causing it to have a harder time on females. He theorizes that if I learned how to release male pheromones, it would work just as effectively on women. Need to look if that is possible later. Midnight then set the book down as she said, impressive, gave me some new ideas. Powerloader then took it and read through it. The excavation hero then said, he gave me some ideas about my quirk, but I got to admit he has amazing propositions for support items. Mind if I borrow him for a while? He asked the blood-themed hero, who laughed and said, yeah, I do mind. He needs to focus on being a hero. He then looked at the notebook and said, I think he also discovered Nezu's true species, a mix between Antarctic mouse and American stoat perhaps. A voice from the intercom came saying, wrong, but he is the closest to discovering it. I think I would like to have a cup of tea with him sometime. Maybe we can compare notes. A collective shiver went through everyone's spines as they imagined the results of the second coming of Nezu, as the principal laughed manically over the speaker. Eraserhead then spoke for the first time since Vlad came. Is that student by any chance Izuku Midoriya? Vlad answered, yes. Eraser then said, listen to Majima and send him to the support course. He's better suited there than at the hero course. The blood hero then replied flatly, no. Eraserhead sighed as came out of his bag. Can't you see you're putting him in harm's way? The boy has no control over his quirk. Even if he has a great mind, it can take him so far. On the field, he will throw a punch, break down, and become a liability. Let someone more suited take his place, and as I suggested before, let him participate in the sports festival. And if he does well, I'll personally train him so he can be on the level of his classmates next year, in case you're afraid he won't be. A vein popped on Vlad's head, but he calmed himself down as he retorted, as I said last time, no. And Midoriya has enough control over his quirk now. Really? President Mike asked. Yes, the only reason he broke himself during the entrance exam is that his quirk manifested itself for the first time, Vlad explained. Snipe, the cowboy-themed hero, then asked, excuse me, but I reckon I might be under the impression that he actually came here to take the test quirkless, and his quirk activated when fought the zero-pointer. That's true, Vlad said. But how? Cementos asked. He said that his quirk is a stockpile type that needed to collect energy over time, that's why it didn't appear till later on in his life. And due to the circumstances of the test, it kinda activated. And he already has control of it. Midnight asked. Well, around 4%, but we all need to start from somewhere, Vlad answered. He looked at Eraser and said, and didn't you say that you looked through the files of first 10 examinees? I'm pretty sure you could have found out that he was quirkless, and just activated his quirk. The underground hero then noticed the looks he was receiving and answered, in all honesty, I didn't have time between my work and teaching, I didn't have time. That didn't surprise anybody, but I would have still expelled him nonetheless because he just manifested a quirk and a highly destructive one. This also somehow didn't surprise anyone. But he only needed quirk counseling, and the situation could have been remedied, Vlad said through gritted teeth. Eraser looked at him with a bored expression. We're here to make heroes who already know how to use their quirks, not coddle children who just manifested them. In my eyes, he still has zero potential. Vlad was about to retort when an alarm went off saying a code purple occurred in the cafeteria, which meant a student attacked another one with his quirk. Choosing to ignore the zombie of a man, he went with Hound Dog to check the problem. Nezu's voice then came through the intercom as he said, Aizawa, please come to my office. The underground hero sighed as he stood up and went to see what Nezu wants from him this time. Earlier in the cafeteria, Izuku sat with his friends as they enjoyed their lunch. He really liked them. They made him feel loved and wanted. It was the first time in his life that he actually didn't feel that he needed to hide or that he was about to be knocked over for his lunch money. Setsuna was really fun, even though she would tease him every minute or so, but he knew she meant no harm. Tetsu was, for the lack of a better term, excitable. The boy maybe was loud and brash, but he was nice. Izuku knew that the boy had a heart of gold under his skin. He actually found his obsession with all things manly kinda funny. Itsuka was a very nice person, and she seemed very knowledgeable about martial arts. Maybe he should ask her later for tips. She also had this big sister aura around her that radiated safety. Kinoko was, as he would put it, a female version of himself. He could tell that she was bullied due to her quirk. She was shy and meek like he was, but with time he was sure that they will both come out of it and become great heroes. But right now, he couldn't help but feel that he was being watched. He immediately pushed it to the back of his mind, thinking of it as nothing but his nerves from his old school. So Midoriya, tell me, do you have any idea on how to split the strength aspect and enlargement aspect of my quirk? Izuku asked. She was really surprised when the boy basically dissected her quirk activation-wise and biologically regarding where the extra muscles came from. But she was thankful. This opened new doors for her. I honestly think that the best idea is punching a sandbag and trying to focus your strength aspect only without enlarging your hands. The boy answered. He saw this as the best course of action because if she did this and concentrated on only activating the strength aspect, she will learn with time how to activate each part individually. Noted, but I need to ask you something. How much percentage of your quirk do you control now? She asked, before quickly adding, you don't need to answer if there's any problem. The boy shook his head before saying, around 4%. But I think I can up it to 5% if I want to. I should really invest in weight so I can increase the percentage since more muscle mass means more power that I can handle. The girl nodded at his reasoning. The boy went back to his lunch but noticed something in the distance, or rather someone. He noticed a pair of ivory horns with blonde hair standing confused in the cafeteria. The boy looked at his friends and said, should we be concerned about Pony? She seems kinda lost. Izuku looked at her and said, yeah, we should probably get her. She is having a hard time learning Japanese. The boy then stood up and said, I'll be back. Setsuna then laughed and said, never say that in a horror movie or you'll die. The boy shook his head with a smile as he went to the girl to bring her to their table. He saw the girl trying to talk to people but she was failing as everyone kept passing by her without paying attention to what she was saying. The boy then stood near her, grabbing her attention. She smiled and said, Midoriya, please help. She then added a puppy face with a small pouty look to ensure that the boy helped her. The boy felt his heart clench at how cute the girl was. Must protect, the boy thought to himself. The boy then spoke in English. Tsunotori, how about you go with me to sit with my friends? You seem kinda lost here. The girl's eyes sparkled as she began speaking. Midoriya, I forgot you can speak English. Thank you very much. It's hard being in Japan while being a foreigner. The girl then walked with him to the table. I understand it must be very confusing and hard to be here. But I hope you can get comfortable here soon enough. Thanks, Midoriya. That's nice of you to say. They finally reached the table and sat down. Pony then greeted the other occupants as Midoriya remembered something he needed to ask the horse girl. Tsunotori, I need to ask you something. The girl looked at him and said, ask away, Midoriya. Are you related to the American hero cow lady? The girl smiled at them, causing everyone present to think, must protect. She then said, she's my aunt. The girl then noticed something distant that was coming closer. Anyone hear explosions? Midoriya was confused until he heard the sound and his blood ran cold. He acted quickly, pushing Pony out of the blast radius, shocking the girl and everyone else with his actions. The girl was shocked. She thought Midoriya was nice, but why did he push her off the table? This question was answered a moment later when an explosion engulfed the boy, sending him flying to the ground beside her. The girl looked at the table as the smoke cleared and saw a boy with crimson red eyes and blonde hair standing there like a maniac on drugs as he said, Deku. Everyone was so shocked that they didn't react when the boy jumped off the table and went to Izuku. The boy then lifted him, giving a knee to the stomach, and then used his quirk on the boy's abdomen. Izuku felt extreme pain. He knew this day would come eventually, but he hoped that it would be a little longer. He looked at his stomach and saw that it was bleeding from the explosion. He then looked with fear at Bakugo's eyes as the boy said, Deku, didn't I tell you not to come here, you quirkless freak? You honestly think you can come here and act all high and mighty? I gonna. The boy didn't get to finish this sentence as a large fist sent him flying, which made him let go of Izuku. Izuku then retreated and hid himself under the table. Kinoko then checked on Pony, who said, me fine, but Midoriya. The mushroom girl looked over to her friend and saw him cowering in fear under the table. He was quivering like a leaf in the wind. If she had to take a wild guess, she would say that that boy was a bully of his. Katsuki then scowled as he snarled at Itsuka. What the fuck do you think you're doing, man? Hands. Roll over, this is between me and Deku. The orange-haired gritted her teeth as she said, who do you think you are, attacking my classmate like that? Move, this is between me and fucking Deku. The nerd needs to learn his place. Like hell that's happening, Setsuna said as she joined and stood beside Itsuka. Tetsu then joined as he exclaimed, attacking someone who didn't do anything is really unmanly. Bakugo stood there a moment confused, as he said, and who are two shitty extras? A green wretch and shitty hair's cheap knockoff. Go get lost. Meanwhile, Kinoko went to Midoriya with a mushroom and said to him, Izuku, eat this mushroom. Like last time, it will lessen the pain. The boy did as he was told, but looked at his friends who were standing up to Bakugo. No, I can't bring them in my mess. Before he can do anything, two voices rang out. You ruffians, how dare you gang up on one of our classmates? The blue-haired boy who admonished Midoriya earlier said while chopping the air with his hand. The three who were standing up to Bakugo felt their veins pop, as the boy came out of nowhere and accused them of attacking Bakugo. They didn't get to think too much as someone else spoke this time. The inferior class 1B is causing a problem with our class. No wonder they're trying to get. In a blink of an eye, Kendo was beside him as she neck-chopped the boy saying, Monoma, didn't you promise to tone it down a little? She looked at her friends and said, no worries, he's more bark than bite. I know him from my old school. She then let the boy fall down as she stood back with the others. She then looked at the blue-haired boy and said, and your classmate attacked ours. We're only defending ourselves. Bakugo shook his head as he said, now, I'm gonna say this once. Either you extras move so I can get to Deku and teach him his place, or I'll blow you all up to Kingdom Come. The blue-haired boy, now fully understanding the situation, said, Bakugo, we shouldn't harass our fellow students. Fuck off, Four Eyes, this is between me and Deku. These extras are only in the way. The blonde-haired teen said as he approached only for Izuku to say, stop. The boy then slowly but fearfully walked up to him and said, leave them out of this. This is between you and me. Finally, you want to fight me, Deku? I'm gonna make you regret the day that you were born. Bakugo said with a crazy look in his eyes. But Setsuna tried to interject only for Izuku to cut her off, saying, it's okay. This is between me and him. The girl frowned as he approached the blonde hair. Now Deku, the boy said as he swung his arm, die. The blonde boy smiled a little, but he'd still need to show this worthless piece of shit his place. Once the smoke of his attack cleared, a muscular hand gripped him and lifted him in the air, causing him to shout, who the fuck are you? Be careful what you say because you're already on thin ice for attacking my students, Vlad said as he looked Katsuki straight in the eye. What? I was putting Deku in his place. Let go, I didn't do anything. This response didn't do anything except make Vlad angrier, so he simply neck-chopped the boy and then looked at his student who was on the ground with wide eyes. Midoriya, are you alright? Vlad asked the stunned student. Yeah, I think so. The boy answered quietly and winced from the pain in his abdomen. The large man sighed and said as he pulled a paper slip, here's a slip for recovery, girl. Let Hound Dog take you. He then looked at the others and said, you can go with him as well, but make sure you all arrive to class on time. Vlad then took Bakugo to the principal's office. Hound Dog, who was there, looked at the other one of students and said, where are they part of this? Kendo then answered, no sir. Good, let's move then. The teacher ordered. On the way to the infirmary, Izuku and his friends walked together with Hound Dog. He looked at them and said, I'm sorry guys, I let you all get caught in my trouble. No worries, Greenie, but really who was that freak? Setsuna asked. Midoriya began to sweat, which grabbed Hound Dog's attention. But a voice from behind them made them all turn. It was a girl who looked like an exact replica of Kinoko. Hey guys, wait up. The girl then stopped, catching her breath. When she stopped panting, she saw Hound Dog, so she asked, sir, can I talk with them for a bit? The hero shrugged and said, as long as you're not late for class, that's fine by me. Also, Midoriya, when she's finished, join me in the infirmary. We're already here. The hero then entered through the door. The 6-1B students looked at the girl, especially Kinoko, who said, whoa, you look just like me. The girl looked at her and said, wow, I know, right? The girl chuckled a little before bowing and saying, I'm sorry for what my classmates did. Please don't think that class 1A are bad people. Only Bakugo acts that way. Itsuka then said, don't worry, we don't think like that, but please keep that guy away from Midoriya. And also the blue-haired guy, because he seems to have something against Midoriya. Monoma, I know him personally, and he only does this for show. He really has a good heart under that big ego of his. Blue-haired. Do you mean Ida? Oh no, you got him all wrong. He's just a little bit too earnest sometimes, and tends to jump to conclusions. The girl said before realizing she hadn't said her name. Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm Ochako Uraraka. Okay, it's nice to meet Uraraka, but still keep the blue-haired boy away from Midoriya. Itsuka said, but then added, I'm Itsuka Kendo by the way. Tetsu. Setsuna Takage. Ponitsu no Tori. Kinoko Komori. Izuku Midoriya, the green-haired teen, asked, but are you the nice girl who tried to give me her points? He asked just to be sure, since last time, he jumped to conclusions. The girl then looked at him and something flashed in her eyes. You're the falling boy. Thank you very much for saving me, she said before blushing hard and saying, yeah, that was me. I thought it would be only fair that I give you something in return. Thanks. He suddenly felt something press on his back, as Setsuna laid on him, and said in a dramatic voice, Izu, is this the new woman of yours? Not only did you cheat on me with the mushroom girl on the first day, but now this one too. How could you? Izuku and Kinoko then turned a bright red as they tried to put an answer, while Ochako stood there clueless, as she said, what? Setsuna then laughed and said, calm down, Greenie, I kidding. Midoriya caught his breath, but then Ochako asked, Midoriya, can I know why Bakugo attacked you? You're so nice, and he totally attacked like a villain today. As if something flipped in Izuku's head, he actually began to defend his bully. What? Kakin, a villain? That's impossible. He's going to be a great hero one day, and I know that. He has a great quirk. His friends were dumbfounded by the fact that he was defending his bully. Even Ochako was confused, and asked, do you know him in any way? The boy smiled as he rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, we're childhood friends. Tetsu wanted to say something, but was silenced by Setsuna, who elbowed him in the gut before saying, Greenie, why don't you enter the infirmary? We don't want to be late to class, now do we? The boy then quickly entered and the sounds of shouting could be heard, presumably Recovery Girl chewing him out for getting injured again. Achako then said, well, I need to go guys, and like I said before, I'm really sorry for what happened. And then she went back to her friends. Tetsu then said, why did you hit me in the gut? It's because you were about to say something stupid, Setsuna replied. What do you mean? You were about to call out Midoriya for saying the blonde ass was his friend. Shouldn't we do that? Kinoko asked. No, at least not this way. Didn't you remember what Midoriya said? He was quirkless for his whole life. Yeah, but that means that the blonde was his bully, not his friend. Shouldn't point that out. Kendo inquired. No, Midoriya is clearly suffering from a case of Stockholm Syndrome. What's that? Tetsu asked. It's a case where a victim gets attached to its abuser or in most cases kidnapper. But why? Kendo asked. He was quirkless. He didn't have friends, that explosive ass was probably the only person who talked to him. So he offered some kind of sick toxic relationship with Greenie. And given that quirkless students usually aren't in any teacher's good graces, he must have been taught that the ass will be a great hero while he will be nothing. She finished shocking everyone through her explanation. Tetsu asked, how do you know that? My sister studies psychology, Setsuna answered. As enlightening as that was, we can't just let him do that to himself, Kendo stated with Kinoko trying to hold back her tears seeing how much her friend have suffered. No, we won't. We will help him slowly and let him see how Blasty isn't his friend, Setsuna said, and then added, I'm also pretty sure Hound Dog heard everything and is planning to give him therapy. Back in the infirmary, Recovery Girl was smacking Izuku on his head with her cane as she said, didn't I tell you to stop hurting yourself? The boy rubbed his head as he said, it couldn't be helped this time. Hound Dog then added, he's alright. The old woman then looked at the dog hero and said, you stay quiet. Don't think I forgot last year's fiasco, she said, reminding him of a training exercise where he went a little bit too wild for the students' taste. The number of injuries was huge. He was only grateful that the students actually found it fun and weren't severely injured, but that didn't save him from the cane. The hero raised his hands and remained quiet. Recovery Girl then kissed the boy using her quirk and threw him a clean set of clothes saying, here, wear these, and then went to her chair. The dog hero then cleared his throat and said, Midoriya, I want you to come to my office every Friday. What did I do? The boy asked afraid. Nothing, but Vlad told me you were quirkless for most of your life. I want just to help you in case there is any lingering damage. The dog hero left out the part which said, and why did you defend the boy who attacked you? Okay, the boy answered. Good, now that you're finished here. Go with your friends, your English class is about to begin. The dog hero said. The boy then walked out, and the hero could hear talking as the students went away. He muttered under his breath, poor kid. Back in the principal's office, the nighttime hero said as he looked at the animal who he preferred to call the rat god. He finally asked, what do you want? I'm a busy person. Nezu smiled, always to the point Aizawa, I merely wanted to have a chat with you. Is it so wrong? The nighttime hero frowned, what do you want to talk about? Nezu said, I want to have a chat about what you and Vlad talked about. Aizawa gritted his teeth, the child has no potential. He only manifested his quirk. He's a liability. And I believe you think that you have potential. If I may remind you, you entered this course through the sports festival unlike our friend Midoriya who entered it through the entrance exam. Shinso, the student that you want to replace Midoriya with earned no points whatsoever. The entrance exam is illogical. It favors those with combat-related quirks, unlike mine and Shinso. Eraser tried to talk, but Nezu cut him off. But what about the rescue points that our friend Midoriya has earned? Which may I remind you could have been earned by both of you, yet you both forgot the importance of saving lives. The nighttime hero couldn't retort because he saw that there were several cases where Shinso could have saved someone but didn't due to spite regarding the treatment he received while growing up. Then Nezu said, let's watch something now, shall we? He then opened a video that showed the cafeteria. He then pointed the video at Midoriya. Eraser sighed as he said, the problem child. What do you want, Nezu? Is this some attempt to change my mind? Because it won't. No, please watch, I think it will be interesting, Nezu said with a mischievous gleam in his eyes. He watched as the problem child talked with his friends, and then walked up to the exchange student which he was thankful not to have. He didn't have time to coddle students. Leave that to Vlad. What are you doing? I don't see a point in any of this. Eraser spoke with annoyance. He didn't have time to see the problem child socialize. Sure, he felt bad for the boy being quirkless for most of his life and treated badly for something he can't control. But this same concern made him want to put the boy away from the hero course till he can fully control his quirk. He wasn't doing it out of hate but rather the concern for the boy's well-being against people who had their quirks for most of their lives. If he was a horse, he would at the end of the race. He honestly thought that the boy's best chance to succeed would be putting in general studies to give him time to master his quirk. And he will train him so next year he would be on the same level as his classmates if he gave him a good show at the sports festival. Oh no, wait, the best part is coming, Nezu said, look closely. The night hero looked at the feed and saw something that made him smack his forehead. His problem child, Bakugo, attacked Midoriya out of nowhere. Wonderful, now Ada and Monoma joined the fray. The former will give a serious headache for how stiff he is and how he always jumps to conclusions without thinking. And the latter, well, he knows the boy is all bark and no bait at all. So Aizawa, have anything to say? He needed to think carefully because he was literally walking on thin ice now. He was about to answer when Vlad opened the door. Nezu, I demand you expel this student immediately, Vlad said, making Aizawa scowl. He can't deny such a request given that he knew how Vlad tried his students like his own children. But at the same time, leaving Bakugo unchecked is like putting him on a villain track. I'm sorry, I can't do that, Nezu said calmly. Before Vlad can argue, Nezu explained, imagine, if someone like Bakugo went on his own with his destructive quirk, he would attract villains hoping to recruit him. Can you see the danger in letting him loose? Even though Nezu knew that if Bakugo turned to villainy that would be on the boy, not the school. But expelling him for only one offense would become some sort of martyr story to the boy if he decided to become a villain. He didn't want to give Bakugo any reason to say that UA has wronged him. He would give him a chance to become better, and if that fails, he knows what he has to do. The huge teacher gritted his teeth as he sighed, fine. But I want him to write an apology letter for Midoriya and have detention for the entire year. That could be arranged, Nezu said as Aizawa breathed a sigh of relief. The principal then pointed to a chair and said, put him down. The man did so, and gave Aizawa a look that said, keep him away from my students. The underground hero sighed as he couldn't fault him for being angry. Aizawa, the teacher gulped as he looked, wake him up. The underground hero sighed as he flicked the boy on his forehead, causing him to jolt as he yelled, fucking Deku. He noticed that he wasn't in the cafeteria, and noticed that he was with the hobo. And some kind of rat. He asked, who the fuck are you? Who I am isn't of any importance right now. What is important is that you need to know that I'm the principal, and you're in quite the pickle here. Young man, the boy wanted to shout, but Nezu cut him off saying, you're already on thin ice, so be careful of what you say and speak. Bakugo then felt a shiver as he felt his mouth grow dry and clamp itself shut. Nezu smiled as he saw how the boy can sense danger and said, can I ask, why did you attack one Izuku Midoriya? He's a fucking Deku that needs to be reminded of his place. The boy answered. And to him, this was enough. This was always the case, and no one ever cared. Not good enough, Nezu spoke and then added, but given that you attacked a student unprovoked with the intent of harming him, I'm within my full authority to hand you over to the police for illegal quirk usage, expel you from the hero chorus, and give you a one-way ticket to our lovely prison Tartarus. He looked at the boy whose face lost color from fear. Oh, how he loved his reaction. People who think that they're all grand and almighty only for reality to smack them hard in the face. Deku, this all your fucking fault. Bakugo thought as Nezu continued, but the only reason I'm not doing that due to my fear of setting you on the course of becoming a villain. Bakugo froze. Him. A villain. He was going to be the #1 hero. Fucking Deku. Now, if you want to continue in the hero course, I would need you to do a couple of things. The boy looked at the rat as he said, first, you'll write an apology to Midoriya and his friends. Bakugo was shocked as he gritted his teeth. Second, you'll have detention for the rest of the year except if you have an internship. The boy's eyes widened. And lastly, you'll have therapy with Hound Dog every Thursday to make sure that you get over your anger issues, superiority complex, and inferiority complex, or you'll be downgraded to general studies. The boy's teeth almost broke from anger, but he took a breath and said, fine. Good. Nezu then turned to Aizawa as he said, Aizawa, you can consider your rights to expel students revoked, and have a nice day. You can go. The teacher wanted to argue, but he was already on thin ice as it already is. He sighed and told his problem child to follow him. When they left, Nezu opened both Midoriya's and Bakugo's files and searched through them. He frowned when he saw that both were faked for obvious reasons. He was half tempted to ask All Might if he ever talked with his successor about his school life, but refrained since he knew the man didn't. Aldrahai, what secrets do you hide? He said as he hacked into their servers. His maniacal laughter could be heard throughout the entire school, and one lanky man with blonde hair shivered as he knew nothing could come out of this. At the end of the school, Midoriya walked with his friends. He was still pretty glum about what happened, so Takage thought of something. Guys, about we go to the arcade. I have no plans today, Tetsu said with Kendo shrugging, signaling her okay. Kinoko then said, I'm free too. Izuku then looked and said, I can go, but I need to tell my mom. He then pulled out his phone and sent her a text. Seconds later, his neighbors sent him a text telling him that his mother flooded the apartment complex. He chuckled and said, my mom says it's okay, though she may have passed out from happiness. Setsuna giggled and grabbed his shoulder and whispered, imagine her reaction when she finds out that I'm your girlfriend, Greenie. The boy blushed as swirls appeared in his eyes, while his friends laughed as he eventually joined them. They all walked to the arcade after that. Friends, it's really nice to have them. Setsuna came home after a day of hanging out with her friends. She remembered the amount of fun she had in the arcade. She couldn't still believe how Midoriya was able to beat her in the game Machine Dance War even though he totally sucked at it when they first began playing the game. Maybe there was more to the green bean than reading books and heroics. She thought there for a moment that maybe she should seriously try to get the green bean to actually be her boyfriend. He was surely full of surprises. She chuckled, imagining his reaction if she told him that she wants to be his girlfriend. She put that thought on back burner as she kicked open the front door of her house. She then yelled, "Mom, Dad, I'm home. Who's ready to party?" She waited for an answer, but nothing came back. "Hey, where's everybody?" The girl yelled again, but only received silence. She walked into the kitchen and saw a small paper note and read it. "Dear Setsuna, we know we promised you that we will stay with you for a couple of days, but something occurred at work, so your dad and I were forced to go. Please, don't be angry. We know how happy you were to see us, but we need to make a perfect living for you. Love, Mom and Dad." The girl looked at it with little emotion, but then she crumbled the note angrily and threw it into the garbage bin, and huffed, stomping to her room, annoyed that another promise was yet again broken. This wasn't the first time, and she was certain it won't be the last, but she hoped this time would be different given that she entered a hero school in UA. At that, she sighed as she changed into her pajamas. She went down to the kitchen, but she felt that someone was watching her, so she said, "Come on, Hana, I know that you're here. That used to work when I was a little girl, but now I'm a big girl." She looked to her side as something began to flicker into existence. The other person was a girl older than she was. She had a somewhat scaly appearance that added to her beauty. Her eyes had slits like most reptiles. She also had wings and small horns. That was Setsuna's older sister, who, although had a very hero-worthy quirk, chose to be a psychiatrist. And here, they say you don't have a very strong sense of spatial awareness. The older one teased before she took a softer voice and said, "So how are you doing, sis?" The girl sighed as she sat at a table and began to eat her noodles. "What do you think?" "Come, Set, you know that Mom and Dad want nothing more than to spend time with you, but..." The older tried to talk, but was cut off. "But what? I only ask for 2 days so that I can see my parents. See them and spend time with them, that is. I only see them when they come, like the Walking Dead. They sleep and eat alone, and that's when they don't pull an all-nighter, which happens like every single day." Hana rubbed her forehead as she sighed. "Listen, they are only doing this because they care, and they want to make a good living for us. At least, they came for the first of school." Yeah, whatever. I heard it all before," Setsuna said as she pouted. The older one then smiled and picked up her phone as she said, "Other than this recurring childish behavior." The younger girl then stuck her tongue out. "Let's talk about your new boy toy that I saw you have a picture with." The young girl blushed a little as she said, "Midoriya is only a friend, but he's also a work in progress." The older one smiled, revealing a set of sharp teeth, as she began her teasing. "Work in progress, so you do like him. Tell me now, did you kiss him? Did you hug him yet? Come on, don't forget anything. I love the small details." The smaller girl blushed heavily. Her sister is one of the only people who can make her blush, even if it was normal teasing material. "No, I mean, it's not what I mean." Setsuna began to stutter a reply, but her sister's laughter drowned her out, causing Setsuna to yell, "Stop it, it's not that funny anyway." Hana then rubbed her head as she said, "Clam down, shrub. You can dish it, but can't take it. You're seriously one of a kind, Set." The younger one pouted at the older sibling, but then took a serious look and said, "Hey sis, I want to ask, how can I help a person who's suffering from some type of Stockholm syndrome?" The older one took a thinking position. "It depends on how he is attached to that person. Well, he sees him as a good person, even though he attacked him in the cafeteria. He says he will become a hero even though the person in question acts more like a villain," Setsuna explained. Seems bad, but it could have been worse." "Well, seeing that you're using he instead of she, I guess you're talking about your new boy toy, since that bucket head has nothing of this sort on him. You seem to care for him a lot. Are you sure that you don't love him?" The older one said, making the younger sigh as she wasn't in the mood for her sister's antics. The older, seeing the unamused look she was receiving, coughed in her hand as she said, "Well, the best I can offer is that you can try to let him see that he isn't a friend. Point out that what he's doing to your friend is wrong. Though, you should seriously tell him to have therapy. It's the best solution, plus, you can go there for emotional support." The younger one hummed at her sister's suggestions as remembered hearing Hound Dog telling Midoriya to go see him every Friday. "Well, that takes care of that." "Thanks, sis," Setsuna said with a smile on her face. The older one hugged her and said, "Come on, let's go watch a movie. I have some old pre-Quirk movies I know that you would love to watch." They then walked to the sitting room together. The next day at UA, the entire class was buzzing with excitement as they were the first class to meet the new heroics teacher, given that their schedule made it such that they had heroics classes in the morning and regular classes during the afternoon. "Man, who do you think he's going to be?" Tetsu asked in excitement, as he waited for the new teacher to arrive. "Whoever he is, he's going to be manly." Kendo sighed at Tetsu's excitement, but she couldn't fault him as she said herself, "I can't wait. I'm really excited to see how he is. What do you think, Midoriya?" The green-haired boy smiled and said, "Whoever he is, I'm sure he has to be a numbered hero, or they wouldn't have made his identity a secret. He already knew who he was, but he couldn't reveal it, or their relationship with each other will be revealed. No one needs to know that he was the successor of All Might yet, and he hoped there will be no need for that either, and hopefully never." Kanoko then added, saying, "I suppose what you said is true. Izuku. They won't make it such a secret if that wasn't the case. Setsuna then put her floating head on top of Midoriya's, making him blush. So who might it be? I really hope it's Maruko. She's so badass and I'm sure she will be an awesome teacher. The others looked at her and nodded their heads, knowing that having the rabbit hero as a teacher will be amazing given that she's one of the strongest heroes out there. The door then slid open, revealing Vlad King. The class looked at him and Kendo asked, Vlad-sensei, where's the new teacher? The blood hero looked at her and said, well, he's coming to your class if you're worried about that. The class sighed in relief as they thought they would have to go through another torture session like last time. But they counted their chickens a little bit early. I just wanted to accompany you to do some warm-ups before you start the lesson today. Some students who were on the more physical side of the spectrum sighed. Others like Rin went pale white as his legs and arms still hurt him from yesterday, while people like Rikio had their souls leave their bodies. Murmurs of displeasure began to fill the class, so Vlad yelled at them, come on, maggots, if a little training regime and you throw the towel. What will happen if you fought a villain? Nag him to death. This is the hero course, if you can't deal with it then go. The door is open and there are a lot of general studies students who wish to be in your place. The students then went quiet as they processed his words, and lowered their heads in shame. Seeing that his students learned their lesson, he said, good, a couple more minutes, and you meet the new heroics teacher. This managed to lift the class's spirit as they returned to talking about who might be the new heroics teacher. Vlad then looked at Midoriya and went to him. He cleared his throat, as he said, Midoriya, I would like to return your quirk analysis notebook. I have to admit that the contents in there were so good that they even attracted the attention of Nezu, and that says something. The boy blushed a little as he said, thanks Vlad-sensei, that means a lot. The boy took the notebook and flipped through it as he saw the pages of Ectoplasm, Hound Dog, Midnight, Power Loader, and heck even Eraserhead with their signatures. How Vlad convinced the nighttime hero to sign it in the first place was beyond him, but he thought it was perhaps blackmailing from Midnight. The notebook was then snatched from his hand by a disembodied hand, and it went to Setsuna, who was smiling. She looked at the notebook and asked, is this where you keep all the notes about us, Greenie? Let me have a look. Kendo then approached her and said, yeah, I'm interested in what he wrote about us too. Please, give it back, Izuku said in a small meek voice, but it held something else that was quickly caught by Kinoko, who felt like this before when her bullies messed with her stuff. It was malice and anger. I think it's for the best that we give the notebook back to Izuku, Kinoko said, hoping to avoid a confrontation. Come on, what's the worst that? She didn't get to finish that sentence as the book was snatched from her hand by Izuku, surprising everyone that the meek-looking boy did this. Oase was so shocked that he said, hot damn, it's always the silent boy. He was promptly whacked over the head by Shizaki, who frowned at the foul language as she called it. Midoriya was even shocked by his actions, causing him to blush, and then promptly bow saying, I'm so sorry Takage, but I just don't like anyone touching my notebook. The last time that happened, my work went up in flames and I had to rewrite it all. The girl, though shocked, felt a spike of anger rise through her as she understood what happened. The blonde ass must have burned it with his quirk. She then looked at Izuku and said, waving her hands, no problem, Midoriya. Everyone has their own boundaries. I should be apologizing for overstepping yours. The class remained in silence for another few moments, till the door slid open and a massive man with two blonde hairs that stood in a V shape entered the room screaming, I'm coming through the door like a normal person. That person was none other than the number hero, and the symbol of peace, All Might. The entire class looked at him in silence as he began to sweat slightly. The hero then gulped, wondering if he did something wrong. It wasn't until Juzo spoke, saying, holy moly, it's All Might. The entire class began to cheer happily for the symbol of peace's presence, as Vlad thought, I don't know how you do it, but your timing was impeccable. Look, it's seriously him, the symbol of peace. His presence is truly divine. Holy shit, I can't believe he's actually here, Oase said, only to receive another whack from the vine girl. You better believe it, Zygotes. I'm going to be your heroics teacher from now on. But first, before we begin our training, you know that any hero without his costume isn't complete. So everyone, take your suits and meet me and Vlad King on the training ground Gamma. The large hero said as cases emerged from beside everyone containing their hero costumes. He then added, and today's lesson is going to be combat training Gamma. Tagaru smiled as he said, combat training, this is going to be fun. The number one hero and the blood-themed hero then walked together to the training grounds while the students went to the changing room to get in their costumes. Setsuna then approached Izuku and whispered in his ear, I can't wait to see you in your costume, and I can't wait to see your reaction when you see mine. The boy then felt steam come out of his ears as he tried to calm down his heart rate. A couple of minutes later in training grounds Gamma, everyone was ready and in their costumes. Setsuna then came out with her costume that was, for the lack of a better term, provocative. She was wearing a blue skin-tight suit that complemented her body. It was so revealing that Kinoko blushed when she saw it. Don't you think that this is a little bit overboard, Setsuna? The mushroom girl asked. She was wearing a cute mushroom dress with red and white polka dots. Think about it. The villains get distracted by my body, and then out of nowhere, a fist to the face. He gets knocked out, and then the day is saved. The lizard girl said while laughing. I don't think that's how it works, Kendo stated. She was wearing a turquoise martial arts dress with a corset under her chest. On her face, she had a domino mask. Man, you all look so manly. Your costumes are so cool, Tetsu said as he shed some crocodile tears. He was wearing a dark green jumpsuit cut just below the chest with baggy pants in addition to wearing a mouth guard on his face. Setsuna then walked over to him swaying her hips and said, "So, what do you think of my costume, Tetsu?" The boy simply stared at her blankly before lifting his hand and covered a small piece of it with metal and flicked her on the forehead as he said, "Yeah, that ship sailed way back. Those tricks won't work on me anymore." She smiled at him and said, "But you still get flustered whenever my sister says hi. Don't tell me you have a crush on her." This made the sliver-haired teen blush as the girl raised her arms and yelled, "Yes, I've succeeded." She made both Kanoko and Itsuka sweat drop at the girl's behavior. Kanoko then looked around and said, "Does anyone see Izuku? I thought he should have finished by now." The other three looked around confused for a moment, and Itsuka said, Now, let's not worry. It's not like he's going to get into a problem in the changing room. I don't know about that. I'm just afraid that the blonde guy." Kanoko tried to say, but her voice was drowned out by All Might's laughter as he came near the aspiring heroes saying, "You all have such wonderful costumes. They definitely look good on you. I can't wait to see you all in action, but is everyone here? Vlad said he needs you all for something important." The hero students then shivered looking at their homeroom teacher as they imagined what kind of hell he'll put them through today. Itsuka raised her hand and when the teacher nodded, she spoke, "Sir, Midoriya hasn't arrived yet." The girl didn't get to fully lower her hand as footsteps were heard from the tunnel near them. Tetsu then said, "Man, I bet Midoriya's costume is going to be super manly." When Izuku finally exited the tunnel, to say people were shocked by his hero costume would be an understatement of the century. He was wearing a full-body green jumpsuit with a utility belt around his waist, and also on his face was a mouthguard that resembled All Might's smile in addition to two bunny-like ears on the top of his hood. All Might, who was on the side, tried to suppress his laughter as he thought, "Young Midoriya, I know that you look up to me, but that's way too obvious." Laughter echoed through the room as everyone looked at Tagaru, who was wearing a black cloak above black pants with a small black mask over his eyes. Noticing the looks he was receiving, he tried to hold in his laughter, but couldn't as he said, "It's just way too funny. Who in their right mind made this abomination?" Jiroda then came next to him and said, "Now, this isn't a way how a future hero acts. I'm sure some designer worked very hard to make it." Izuku then interjected saying, "Well, to be honest, my mom actually made it as a gift to me for making it in the hero course, and I couldn't just throw it away. I know it's going to be ruined today, but it made her happy." This caused some students to laugh at the boy, who also awkwardly laughed with them. This wasn't the first time he was laughed at, and he was sure as hell it won't be the last time. At least this time, it wasn't as bad as the other times. Tagaru then slapped his knee saying, "You're wearing something your mom made, and you know it's going to be ruined. What are you, a mama's boy?" The bug boy was silenced as a fist slammed on his head. He looked and saw Setsuna, who frowned at him saying, "I think it's a great thing that Midoriya has a nice relation with his mother." She couldn't help but feel a little jealous that Midoriya's mother was present in his life, but she felt happy for him, though this didn't stop her from muttering under her breath quietly, "Wish my relation with my parents were like that." "Did you say something, Takage?" Midoriya asked as he stood beside her. The girl was flustered a little, but said quickly, "No, nothing at all." The boy shrugged as Vlad came, and finally stood in front of them. The giant man then yelled, "Everyone listen, we'll start our warm-ups right now." Once he saw that he grabbed everyone's attention, he said, "Okay maggots, listen up, you won't do much. You'll just do 100 push-ups, 100 pull-ups, 100 squats, and run around the battleground 5 times. The students looked at him with wide eyes. He chuckled at their reaction. Then he yelled, "Get to it." The students scrambled to their feet to finish the warm-ups, as All Might approached the blood-themed hero and asked him, "Is this really necessary, Vlad?" The blood-themed hero looked at him and said, "If you continue to whine on their behalf, you can join them. If you don't want that, keep your mouth shut. I run my class as I see fit." The blonde hero chuckled nervously, knowing from the records that Vlad might actually do it, and force him to join the students in their warm-ups, but in all honesty, he was happy that Izuku made it in his class rather than Erasers. He was pretty sure that the nighttime hero will try to single his successor out in an attempt to expel him. He then looked at his successor doing push-ups with vigor and smiled, remembering the training he gave him. "You came really far, young Midoriya. But today, I want to see how far." After 1 hour, the students have all finished, but some were worse for wear. The first to finish was Itsuka, followed closely by Izuku. The last was surprisingly Rikio. Everybody thought it was going to be Manga or Kanoko. The blood-themed hero then said, "Good, now that you finished the warm-ups, expect that every heroic class will start like this." This caused Rikio, Manga, and some others to drop to the ground with a sad aurora around them. The man then left the training ground, ushering with his hand for All Might to start. The blonde hero then said with a loud laugh, "Well, now that you students finished your warm-ups, we can begin the combat training lesson. The case which we are going to work with is anti-personnel training." Murmurs began to rise among the students as they thought about what the teacher said, but Yui raised her hand. When the blonde hero nodded his head, she asked with an expressionless voice, "Sir, don't you think that we're moving too fast? I thought the first lesson might be some sparring matches between students. I mean, shouldn't we wait till we have more experience?" The blonde hero smiled as he said, "You're on point there, young Kodai, but the experience you're talking about will be gained through the battle training you'll be doing today. And the best way to gain this experience is by first-hand application. Don't you agree with me?" The girl nodded her head. The blonde then said in a loud voice, "Most of the hero's work takes place indoors, rather than outdoors. So today, we're going to work on this aspect. You're going to learn how to fight a villain in a closed environment. Therefore, for the exercise, you will all be divided into teams." Then a couple of questions began to rise from the students. "Sir, is there a time limit to the exercise? How are we going to be graded? Can we use our powers in this exercise or is it quirkless one? How are the teams going to be split?" One question at a time. "My quirk is super strength, not super hearing." He then pulled a small script from his pocket, causing some students to think, "Is he seriously using this?" The blonde hero then began to explain the exercise in detail. First off, the scenario, in this case, is a nuclear bomb inside the building. A group of 2 villains will be protecting the bomb and will do their best to hinder the hero's progress. The heroes will then enter the building and try to find the bomb in a time frame of 15 minutes. The scores will be given individually based on teamwork, quirk usage, and overall performance. However, there will be an MVP for every round. Finally, the teams will be decided by random. Then Jiroda raised his hand, and once he was given permission, he spoke, "Is it really a wise idea to have our teams picked in such a hazardous way? I'm sure there is a more beneficial way to pick the teams." Before the hero can respond, Izuku answered the fur-covered teen. "Actually, if you think about it, this is the best way to do it. Since in regular hero work you don't pick who you are working with, you have to team up with any hero present at the scene or the closet proximity." The beast-like student then nodded his head saying, "I see, thanks Sir Midoriya." He then looked at All Might and bowed saying, "I apologize for the interruption." The large hero smiled at the student. "No problem, young Shishida." He then picked a box and ushered for the students to come near it. "Come on now, students. Everyone come here," and drew a ball to see on which team you are. One by one the students took turns picking a ball from the box, and when Midoriya picked one of the balls, it had the letter D on it. He looked at his friends and raised the ball hoping that one of them was on his team. But to his dismay, it wasn't. Kendo had the letter A, Setsuna had F, Kinoko had G, and Tetsu also had A. The boy then frowned a little as he said, "I guess I'm going to be alone." But then he looked at his friends with a strong expression as he said, "Don't expect me to go easy on any of you, and also please don't go easy on me too. I want you all to give it your best." Tetsu then cried saying how Midoriya is being manly, while the girls smiled, or in Kinoko's case gave him a thumbs up. The mushroom girl then felt her shoulder being tapped. She turned around and saw Kiwaro holding a ball that said G on it. The boy smiled at her and said, "Guess we're teammates then." The girl felt very uncomfortable away from her friends, but steeled herself since she can't depend on them forever. She smiled at the boy and said, "I guess we are." Midoriya then asked out loud, "Who has the letter D?" A loud groan from his side caught his attention as Tagaru came to his side and said, "Please say that you're kidding me." Midoriya then slumped as he thought, "Wonderful, just wonderful." "I'm afraid not," the green-haired boy answered. The bug boy then replied, "Just stay out of my way, and I'll win the exercise for both of us." Midoriya didn't argue, hoping that when their round begins the bug boy would change his mind. Then the teams were announced. Team A, Kendo and Tetsu. Team B, Yanagi and Kodai. Team C, Shishida and Shizaki. Team D, Midoriya and Kamakiri. Team E, Tsunotori and Fukudashi. Team F, Takage and Shota. Team G, Komori and Kiwaro. Team H, Rin and Bondo. Team I, Awase and Kaibara. Team J, Tsuburaba and Honuki. The giant then came upon them as he laughed saying, "Wonderful, now that the teams were picked, we'll also pick who will be going against whom." The blonde man then revealed another box that had the word hero on it and picked up a ball that said D, and then picked another ball with the letter C from another box with the villain label on it. Both teams C and D looked at each other. Shishida then stepped forward and said, "I wish you both the greatest of luck in this exercise." While Midoriya thanked the boy, Tagaru merely scoffed at him. In the end, the placement was like this. Heroes, D versus villains, C. Heroes, F versus villains, J. Heroes, I versus villains, G. Heroes, E versus villains, B. Heroes, A versus villains, H. All Might then approached the villains team and looked at the two young heroes. He then said, "Heroes, today to win and save the day, you must become villains. Here's a map of the building. You must begin strategizing on how to stop the heroes. You have a 5-minute head start, so go." Two then bowed saying, "Hi, All Might Sensei." The villains team then went and entered the building. All Might then went to the heroes team and gave them the manual to the building, as he said, "Heroes, the villains right now are threatening the safety of the civilians. It's your job now to secure the bomb and capture them. Don't forget that you are fighting indoors, so you must keep the damage to a minimum. Here's a manual to help you understand the interior structure of the building. Good luck, heroes. You have 5 minutes before you enter the building to come up with a plan to defeat the villains and secure the bomb." The hero then retreated to the viewing room. Midoriya then looked at the manual and said, I think that the bomb might be on the 5th floor. Given that Shizaki's quirk gives her the perfect defense, it would be reasonable to assume that she will be protecting it. In that case, Shishida will be the one going to confront us, so if we fight him together we'll be able to defeat him, and then go on to secure the bomb. Midoriya was cut off by the bug boy who said, Be quiet. I told you to stay out of my way. You're only going to slow me down. But you can't win this alone. Shishida is a strong opponent with a strength-enhancing quirk. You can't expect to defeat him that easily on your own. We need to work together, Izuku said, trying to get his teammate to cooperate. The boy looked at him with an unamused look and said, Listen, nothing personal, but you're only get in the way. You just manifested your quirk, and you don't have control over it, which means you're going to break down. Izuku couldn't say the boy wasn't technically wrong, but he had enough of people walking all over, so he said, No, I can control it. A small piece of it, but if you had to go higher, you would break. The blade boy said, So stay here. Midoriya then sighed, but he wasn't deterred. He was going to show that he was worthy of being in this course whether Tagaru liked it or not. He looked at his watch and saw that there were 2 more minutes, so he began to think of a plan to win the exercise, and hopefully make it look like he was working with his teammate. Back in the viewing room, Setsuna said, I don't like this. Her friends looked at her, and Itsuka asked, Why not? Just look at the heroes team. The others looked at Izuku and Tagaru, who were standing there without talking to each other. Kanoko then said, Shouldn't they be, I don't know, planning how to win this exercise? The others looked again and frowned. Tetsu then said, I heard that Kamakiri wasn't planning to work with Midoriya, but I thought he was kidding. That's really unmanly of him. In the building, Shishida and Shizaki stood beside the bomb, as they began to talk about their plan to defend the bomb and defeat the heroes. So Lady Shizaki, I think the best course of action is that I go and confront the heroes while you stay up here and defend the bomb, given that your quirk offers the best offensive and defensive capabilities. Shishida explained his plan while the girl listened to his plan carefully. The girl nodded his head as she said, I agree with you, Shishida, though I emphasize that you must take Kamakiri out first, since I don't know if his quirk is strong enough to cut my vines or not. But I don't want to take any chances. The boy nodded his head. I also think we shouldn't underestimate Sir Midoriya. Even though he doesn't have experience with his quirk, his intelligence is something that shouldn't be taken lightly. The girl looked at him confused, before remembering how Izuku was able to dissect everyone's quirks in mere moments after every presentation. She then said, Noted. Both are highly dangerous. While one is battle-thirsty with his quirk to boost it, the other one is a highly tactical mind. Such an unholy team, but we still have an advantage given that Kamakiri doesn't seem to like Midoriya that much. The boy nodded as he heard All Might. Time's up. Heroes, you can enter the building. The declaration was followed by what seemed like mad laughter echoing through the building. Shishida then walked out of the room, but gave Shizaki one last look before he left. If I return to this room and seem out of control, tie me up, since my quirk's drawback must have kicked in. The girl nodded as the boy walked out. He then turned into his beast form, as he tried to keep himself in control. Focus, focus. I should seriously try Sir Midoriya's advice and meditate to control my beast mode more efficiently. Tagaru was in the zone as he ran through the corridors of the building. He looked around the rooms, hoping to find the bomb. He was going to end this exercise as quickly as possible, and he will win it. He only hoped the lame-ass stutter doesn't get in his way and interrupt his work. He didn't want someone to help him to win this thing. He stopped as he heard heavy footsteps coming from the top of the building. He smiled as he knew that Bigfoot was on the move. He ran as quickly as possible to disable him, and he readied his capture tape. He stood there for a moment, before a giant paw smashed the ground in front of him, but he managed to dodge it. Barely. Shit, he almost got me, Tagaru said as he made 2 blades come out of his wrists, and looked at the giant furry student. Come on, Bigfoot, let me see what you're made of. I'll beat your ass in 3 seconds flat. The giant student snarled at him as he lunged at the boy, smashing his fist into the wall when the smaller boy jumped away from there. Tagaru then jumped at him while slashing his blade at his forearm, causing the giant student to howl in pain. Tagaru then said, Not so tough now. The boy was then slammed into a wall by a furry fist, but pulled himself out of it even if he felt a little bit dizzy, and then said, Lucky shot. The boy then jumped at the beast-like student, brandishing his blades. He was shocked when the giant boy smirked at him as he dug his claws into the ground and lifted a chunk of rock. Shishida put the rock in front of him, causing Tagaru's blades to clash on it. The bug boy railed back in pain as he felt the similar feeling of his blades being dulled. He frowned. Either he was lying about his quirk drawback, or he still has some cognitive abilities in this form. Whatever the case, I have to find a way to beat him quickly. I don't have the... He was cut from his thought as the chunk of rock was sent flying at him. The boy panicked, but the chunk of rock suddenly exploded. The boy looked and saw Midoriya standing in front of him. The green-haired boy looked at him and said, I told you that you need my help. Back in the observation room, Tetsu yelled with excitement, with crocodile tears flowing down his face. That was so manly. He came out of nowhere and stopped the rock with a single punch. Kendo then said, I hope this will make Kamakiri realize that he needs Midoriya's help. The girl didn't like Kamakiri's attitude from the beginning of the class. He treated Midoriya like he was dirt. She was used to people like that trying to tease her due to her interests, or her quirk, but that didn't mean she liked them. Yeah, I don't think he's going to admit that he needs help, but most likely will give Midoriya the honor of fighting Shishida, Setsuna said. The others looked at Shishida and were worried that the boy might accidentally hurt anyone. All Might stood there watching the match as he thought, I'm sorry young Midoriya, but today I'm going to act fairly. I can't show favoritism, you're going to have to prove yourself like the others. He then watched as his successor dodged a strike while dragging the bug boy away from the beast boy. Back with the heroes, Midoriya looked at Kamakiri and said, we need to come up with a plan. No, you stay out of my way. Midoriya sighed as he said, go. The boy looked at him confused before he said, what do you mean? You want to win the exercise, right? Then go, I'll hold back Shishida. The bug boy waited for a moment before standing and walking away saying, are you sure you can handle him? He didn't want his help, but they were on time, and he didn't want to lose. Yeah, I'm sure I can keep him at bay. Are you sure your blades can cut through Shizaki's vines? Yeah, Tagaru was cut off by a sudden yell. R-A-H-H-H. Both boys looked at their classmate who looked out of it, and Tagaru ran without the giant boy noticing him as Izuku attacked him with full cowling at 5%. Man, my body stings a little but I can handle it. The boy then ran at the beast boy giving him a punch causing Shishida to fly back and get slammed into a wall. Izuku was shocked for a moment as he thought it would take more than one punch to take Shishida down. He didn't get to dwell too much on this though as the boy rose from the ground growling. It finally hit Midoriya, his classmate's drawback finally hit him. He then quickly dodged a blow from his classmate as he then sent a punch of his own. The giant boy took the blow as he launched his own hit back at the green-haired teen managing to rip the bunny-like ears. Izuku then yelled, Detriot smash. He then smashed his fist into the beast boy's face. The giant boy staggered for a moment before recomposing himself and running back at the green-haired teen at full speed. The boy then swiped his claws at the green-haired boy. Izuku managed to avoid a hit to his face. However, he wasn't lucky enough to avoid being hit in his chest which caused his costume to be ripped. Izuku then put his hand on his chest and noticed that he was bleeding. I need to retreat to figure out a way to defeat him, Izuku thought as he ran away from the beast teen who was giving chase. The boy then increased the power of his quirk to 7%. He felt his muscles tightening but he needed to get away from Shishida to form a plan. He knew that the boy was following by using his enhancing smelling abilities, but there. He then thought of something that was a bit mad, but desperate situations call for desperate measures. Back in the viewing room, Tetsu was again yelling about how Midoriya was being manly fighting Shishida till the boy ran away. Hey, running away isn't manly. He was silenced by Setsuna punching him on the head. Can't you see he's trying to come up with a plan? All Might then said, young Takage is right. Sometimes you need to fall back in a fight if you felt that you're losing or need to change your strategy, or if you need to call back up. He then walked up to the mic and said, 10 minutes left. Then Itsuka noticed something Midoriya was doing. What is he doing? She said as she pointed to the screen. Some were horrified while others seemed confused. Only 2 understood his plan. Honuki said, that's a good idea. Setsuna laughed, Greenie, you always manage to surprise me. Then Itsuka realized why Midoriya was doing what he was doing and smiled. He was truly full of surprises. Tagaru ran as fast as his feet can carry him trying to finish the exercise as fast as possible. He then heard that he only has 10 minutes left. Great, another problem to think of. He finally reached the 5th floor. He knew that Shizaki was a tough opponent, so he wasn't going to take this lightly. He ran to the door popping out his blades as he crashed through it. He looked around only to see what he can describe as a jungle. He quickly dodged a vine coming at him and cut it. He looked and saw the bomb through the tangled vines. He said, give up villain, and I promise you I'll go easy on you. Shizaki then said in a cold voice, you have sinned. I must punish you in the name of the Lord. Vines began to rush at him as he began cutting them. He dodged a vine that came behind him by jumping to the side. He then ran to the bomb trying to grab it, but was stopped by a vine that captured his leg and sent him flying into the wall. He groaned as he stood up mentally asking himself, what is it with my classmates slamming me into walls? I think I'll have a concussion at the end of this semester if this becomes a trend. He then saw Shizaki's vines rushing toward him. He cut many of them, but the wave of vines was too much and he was finally captured by the girl. She looked at him as he smirked at her, and then blades popped out of his body cutting the vines, and freeing himself. He then said, it's gonna take more than that to stop me. The girl then put her hands in prayer as she said, you're right, but I already won. The boy was confused, but then he felt something tighten around his left foot. He was shocked to see that the vine girl used his own capturing tape against him. This couldn't be happening, but what happened next proved it. Young Kamakiri have been captured. Pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. You were so focused on finishing the exercise to protect your pride that you didn't notice that your capturing tape fell, or I was slowly bringing it to you. The vine girl told him. The bug boy then smacked his forehead. She was right. He was so focused on winning the exercise alone that he lost focus on everything else. If he was a little more attentive, he noticed her plan. He looked at her and said, you got me. He then smirked saying, honestly, I didn't think you had in you. I thought you'd be crying that you deceived. He then saw the girl in a praying position as she asked for forgiveness for, as she put it, using wicked ways. He slowly walked out of the room not wanting to be caught in whatever craziness she was experiencing. He sighed as he said, "Well, Stutter, I guess it's up to you now." He then walked away, accepting his defeat and reviewing what caused it. Back with Shishida, the boy managed to regain some control. He vaguely remembered fighting Tagaru, but then everything went blank for a moment. He only hoped that he didn't hurt anybody. He then picked up Midoriya's scent coming from a certain direction. He quickly ran toward it, and it got closer. He then sensed something wrong. The scent was overwhelming his nose. It was like he was everywhere. He turned around a corner and saw something that made him stop in his tracks. The walls had some spots on them covered with blood. He knew where it came from. "Sir Midoriya, I hope I didn't hurt you too much." The boy looked around trying to find the boy's scent, but the overwhelming amount of blood, or at least the way the blood spots were covering the area, overpowered his nose. He looked around confused, not able to determine where the green-haired teen is. He tried to use his other senses, but his eyes couldn't see anything, and it was deadly quiet. In other words, he was outsmarted. Back in the viewing room, Izuku said, "I see." He used his own blood to throw Shishida off his scent. If Shishida can't determine where he is exactly, he can't beat him. "That's pretty smart of him," Setsuna said. "That's really manly, to use your own blood to win a fight. It's really cool." Tetsu cried with tears in his eyes. All Might stood there astonished by his successor's ingenuity. "Young Midoriya, you keep surprising me. The way your brain works is truly remarkable, but..." He looked at the blood and shivered. "Couldn't you find another way to trick him?" Shishida looked around in confusion, as he tried to find the green-haired hero. Without his sense of smell, he was lost. He then heard something move quickly. He didn't have time to think as Izuku yelled, "Smash!" He was then sent flying and got slammed into a wall. The green-haired boy looked at his beast-like friend and brought out his capturing tape. He slowly walked toward him only for the boy to jump, attempting to grab him. He barely managed to avoid the furry hand reaching out for him. He looked at the boy and said, "I must admit, Shishida, it was kinda naive to expect you to go down from one punch." The beast boy then said, "RAHH." He then added, "Smart move using your blood to throw me off your scent. But it ends here, hero." The boy then rushed at him as he swung his arm toward Izuku, but the green-haired boy jumped, powering his quirk up to 6%, and sent a punch to Shishida's face which made the boy fall back, but he came back up quickly. He then swiped his claws at Izuku, who dodged, going under him and giving him another smash, but Izuku was beginning to feel the drawback of his quirk as his muscles began to hurt him, and his bones began to rattle. The beast boy then threw a punch that connected with Izuku's stomach, knocking the wind out of him. Izuku then stood up and ran at the boy, who swiped his claws once more. Izuku then jumped up, and the claws struck his legs. He swallowed down his pain as he went to the side, before coming back at the beast boy. He then smashed Shishida in the face with a 15% smash. The beast boy was then sent flying to a wall and crashed into another room through it. Izuku waited for a moment before walking to the boy. He saw that Shishida was now unconscious and in his human form. The boy then pulled out the capture tape and put it around the boy's arms. He then looked at his own body to assess the damage done from the fight with the beast boy. His arm was clearly bruised, not broken. It began to turn red, which in his books was a sign that he can continue. He looked down and saw that his chest was slashed and bleeding, but he can walk through it. Finally, his legs were also bleeding. He then moved them and hissed at the pain, but pushed forward. He then heard All Might say, "Young Shishida is captured. 5 minutes left." He sighed as he activated full cowling, and ran to the 5th floor where thought the bomb with Kamakiri caught, it was up to him to catch the bomb. In the viewing room, Itsuka walked up to All Might and said, "Sensei, can you please stop the exercise?" The blonde hero looked confused as he asked, "Why is that, young Kendo? There is still time for this round." Kendo then said, "But sir, look at Midoriya. He seems to be in a lot of pain. He can barely stand." All Might then looked at the screen, and it was true. His successor seemed horrible with his chest and legs bleeding, and his arm didn't look too good. He was torn between stopping the boy from harming himself even further or allowing him to continue the exercise. He walked over to the mic not knowing what to say, but Setsuna then said, "That's a bad idea." Itsuka looked at her and said, "You don't honestly think that allowing Midoriya to continue like this is somehow better?" She then pointed to the screen. The lizard girl sighed as she said, "No, but we can't coddle him. Midoriya now is in his zone. I mean, look at him, his demeanor is different. The usual stuttering, anxious, and nervous boy is replaced by someone more confident. I think it is best if we see what he will do. If we can't handle small injuries from training, how are we going to be heroes? What Midoriya is doing now is the right thing. In desperate situations you can't back down. You must overcome your injuries and keep pushing forward because people are depending on you." Itsuka then nodded her head saying, "I hope this is a good idea," while Tetsu cried in the background saying that Setsuna was manly. All Might smiled as he said, "Once again young Takage is right. In situations where everything is hanging in the balance, we must overcome our pain and injuries. We must go beyond." He then lifted his hand as he yelled the school's motto, "Plus." The students carried on as they yelled, "Ultra." Back with Izuku, he managed to reach the 5th floor. He looked at his watch and saw that he only had 3 minutes left. He knew Shizaki was a tough customer, so he had to outsmart her and reach the bomb before she can catch him. He looked at the entrance, which was covered by vines, and powered his quirk to 7%. He then punched the vines, which blew them away. Once he entered the room, he saw the girl in front of him. while the bomb was on the other side of the room. The girl then sent her vines toward him. He then began to try and dodge the vines, which he was able to do successfully most of the time, and in some cases, he had to rip them off. He then ran to the bomb, but a vine caught his leg, causing him to hiss, and threw him back. The girl then said, "Midoriya, don't fall into the sin of pride like your friend, and give up." She then saw his state, and added, "You are in no state to fight. You fought now honorably, but it ends here." The girl then sent her vines from multiple angles and tied them around the boy. Back in the observation room, they saw Shizaki tie Izuku with her vines, and Itsuka said, "Please call it off. It's clear he was caught." All Might knew that his successor had 1 minute left, but he was caught. He went to announce his capture, but Satsuna stopped him by saying, "What is Greenie doing?" He looked at the screen and smiled. Izuku knew he was captured, and he didn't have much time left. If only he could hit her from here, he could free himself. He looked at his fingers, and an idea came to him. He then angled his hand from his binds in such a way that it was aimed at the girl. He then powered one for all to 20% as he flicked his finger at the girl, sending a huge burst of wind that not only cut his bindings, but hit Ibara in her stomach, causing her to double over. The boy then fell and hit the ground, as he looked at his fingers, which were bruised and red. Wonderful, he looked at the girl, then the bomb, and bolted toward the ladder. Ibara then saw Midoriya run toward the bomb, so she sent her vines after him as she said, "You'll not succeed. Give up." The boy then jumped with a quirk, empowering his leap. He was now in front of the bomb with his fingers centimeters away from them, as he also felt the vines slowly catch up to him. And then, pain and extreme pain were what Izuku Midoriya was feeling at the moment. You would think it would be from his injuries from the battle training, but no, it was from Recovery Girl's legendary cane smacking his head. He could only remember waking up from sleep and seeing the old lady frowning at him. And then the chewing out began, as did the beating from her legendary cane that he was sure All Might once said gave him more than a few bruises. But this raises a question in his head. How did it end here in the first place? Right, the battle training. About a quarter of an hour ago, Izuku leaped toward the bomb with a jump empowered by 1 for all at 6%. He could see the bomb in front of him. It was in his hand's reach, only a few centimeters away, but at the same time, he could feel Ibara's vines beginning to catch on him to try and stop him. It was just in front of him now, but at the same time, Ibara's vines began to coil around his leg. But much to Ibara's dismay, before she managed to get a good grip on him, he put his palm on the bomb, causing All Might to say, "Hero team wins." But even with the declaration, the Vine Girl was too engrossed in the fight that she yanked Izuku back and sent him flying into the other side of the room, causing the blonde hero to yell, "Young Shizaki, the hero team won. The fight has stopped." The girl blinked a little before sighing, and saying, "Well, I guess that the Lord was on your side this time." The girl then looked at Izuku, and screamed, "Saint Maria, Midoriya, are you alright?" The girl then ran to his side to check on him, but at the same time, Jiroda, who woke up from unconsciousness, entered the room, and said, "Lady Shizaki, did something happen? I heard you screaming." He then looked at where the girl was standing, and yelped himself, "Oh, dear goodness, Sir Midoriya." Said boy was now laying against the wall. He had a bruised arm, his chest had slash marks, and so did his legs. One of the fingers on his left hand was also bruised and was hurting him like hell. He looked at his classmates' concerned faces and smiled, saying, "I'm alright. There's nothing to worry about." He then promptly passed out. The Beast Boy then heaved his fallen classmate on his shoulder and began to run with him to the infirmary with the Vine Girl on his toes, but was stopped by his teacher saying, "Young Shishida, don't worry about young Midoriya. The medical bots had already arrived, and are going to take him to the infirmary." Both the Beast Boy and the Vine Girl frowned. They felt that they were responsible for their classmate's condition, and wanted to go with him to the infirmary to make sure he was alright. Jiroda then felt someone tapping on his leg. He looked down and saw 2 medical bots holding a stretcher. One of the bots then said, "Cough him up, punk." Both of the students' eyes went wide as they felt that they were being mugged, and not getting help. He hesitantly put Izuku on the stretcher and began to follow the robot out of concern. But All Might then said, "Alright, everyone who wasn't injured go to the observation room to discuss who the MVP is." The blonde hero then saw both members of the villains' team looking in the direction where Izuku was going in. He smiled at both students' compassion and spirit, but they were needed, so he said something to comfort them. "Young Shishida, young Shizaki, don't fret, young Midoriya is going to Recovery Girl. He will join us in a little while." Both students looked at each other and then walked with their heads down in shame to the observation room. In Recovery Girl's office, the old lady sat organizing some files in front of her. It was a slow day, as she would call it, not that she was complaining. Today was the first day of the heroic classes. She expected by now that at least 2 or 3 students would have come to her injured, but she smiled. Maybe that huge oaf is a better teacher than he looked like, she thought. Then she shook her head. She knew that thinking too much about this would begin to tempt fate to miss with her. It was as if fate hurt her, and began laughing as the door of the infirmary opened up, and a medical bot entered. The bot then unloaded someone on a bed and said, "There was a kind of a situation." She sighed as she turned around, only to be greeted by the familiar sight of fluffy green hair and a freckled face. The boy then opened his emerald eyes and looked at her. He then coughed a little. When he finally noticed where he was, he said, "Oh, recovery girl, funny seeing you here, so how's the weather?" He joked through his pain, hoping to avoid her wrath. The old lady then screamed, "For the love of all that's holy." And with that began a very long lecture about the boy's recklessness. Back in the observation, Ibara, Jiroda, and Tagura entered the room. The first two had a sad look on their face, while the last one had an unreadable expression on his face. All Might then coughed and said, "All right, young heroes, let's get this show on the road. But first, who do you think is the MVP of this exercise?" A lot of murmurs and silenced conservations went through the room, till Juzo raised his hand. The blonde hero then nodded his head, so the student spoke. "I think the Shizaki is the MVP of this exercise. She was the only person who didn't get sidetracked, or lost focus of their opponent, like when Shishida lost Kamakiri when Midoriya took him." He then turned to the boy and said, "No offense." The Beast Boy then waved his hand, telling him that it was no problem. And unlike the heroes team, she came up with a plan due to the coordination with her teammate. In other words, the heroes team's victory was a very close call. Finally, she used her quirk in such a manner that was both offensive and defensive, which led to Kamakiri's capture, so I think that she should be the MVP. All the other students began to give nods of agreement, with Shizaki beaming with happiness even though it didn't appear on her because she was still feeling a little guilty about Izuku's condition. All Might then said, "Great observation, young Honuki, what you said was quite true. Young Shizaki played her role very well. She even managed to drag young Kamakiri into a trap to capture him, and also managed to give young Midoriya a hard time." But inside the hero's head he said, "Man, these students are scary when they want to be." He then noticed Takage and Kendo's hands rose, so he said, "Young Takage and young Kendo, do you have anything to say?" "Actually, we think that Midoriya should be the MVP," Kendo said, with the lizard girl nodding her head. The hero then said, "Please, explain your reasoning." "Well, you see, All Might, indeed, Midoriya didn't work with his teammate. But it wasn't his fault, it was due to his teammate's refusal to work." Setsuna then glared toward the bug boy, who was still in deep thought, so he was forced to work with what he had. He accurately predicted that Kamakiri won't be able to beat Shishida in a one-on-one match, and told him to go and fight Shizaki, who he had better luck with. He then fought off Shishida, and managed to get the drop on him by using his blood to mislead him to his direction. The blonde hero then shivered remembering the scene, but the girl continued, and add to that, when he was captured by Shizaki, he used his quirk in a way to break his bindings while also hitting her, disabling her for a while. So I think he should be the MVP given to the strategies and methods he used to win the exercise. Other students began to agree with her, citing how Izuku single-handedly won the exercise. All Might then smiled as he said, "Well said, young Takage. Young Midoriya managed to win the exercise by using his wits even though he was outnumbered. So we can reach an agreement that both young Shizaki and young Midoriya are both tied for the MVP of this round." He then looked at his clipboard and said, "All right, now, let's move to the next set. Team F versus Team J now. Young Honuki and young Tsuburaba, please make over to the building to start with your plan." The two boys nodded as they walked away to the building to start planning their plan to defend the bomb. All Might then walked to both Takage and Shota, saying, "Young heroes, the villains are in their hideout. You must find the bomb and disable their plans." He then walked away after handing them the layout of the building as he did to the previous team. Takage looked at Shota and said, "So what are thinking of glasses?" The boy then tapped his chin as he said, "Both of our quirks naturally complement one another. If you manage to hit them, I can double the amount of force where the hit happened. So it's a win for us." The girl said. "Hardly," the boy replied before continuing. "While we can definitely take out Tsuburaba without a doubt, Honuki is a different matter entirely. His quirk can allow him to go under us and trap us without altering us. So we should be vigilant in each step we take in this building." The girl then nodded her head, as she then heard the buzzing sound announcing their entrance. Inside the building, Honuki looked at his partner and said, "Follow the plan, so we can win this." The hero team then entered the building and walked carefully to the first floor, but found nothing. So they continued their trek to the second floor and also found nothing. They decided to venture deeper into the third floor and try their luck. Once they arrived there, something jumped out, or rather someone. The hard air user then jumped in front of them and created an air barrier. The boy then ran as Shota used double impact to break the shield, and they ran after him. The girl then disconnected her body and sent them flying. She tried to catch the boy, but every time she came close to him, he breathed out an air barrier. So the girl's floating mouth said, "Come on dude, did you ever hear of a breath mint?" The boy smirked as he said, "I keep them fresh for you, lizard brain." The girl frowned as she sent her arm in the adjacent corridor, and said, "It's on, bubble boy." The girl then sent one of her pieces and tried to hit him. But he erected an air shield, but what he didn't count on was a piece moving around the shield and punishing him in the face. He then fell, but bolted up quickly as he said in his head, "Come on, only a couple more steps." The boy then looked forward, and his eyes widened as he saw Shota with Takage's hand. He looked back. The fist went directly toward him, but he blew and hardened some air. But then he fell into their trap. The girl's body parts began to rotate around him and hit him from various angles, with Shota activating his quirk. Soon enough the boy fell, declaring his defeat as Takage tied her capture tape around him. Young Tsuburaba has been captured. 10 minutes remain. Their teacher's voice echoed through the hallways. So we captured one. I detach my eye and look for the other, Takage said as one of her eyes disconnected from her body and searched the building quickly, but they didn't notice two hands appearing from under them. The hands then grabbed onto their ankles and began to drag them into the cement. Before they can even react, they were neck deep down there. Suddenly Juzo began to appear in front of them and said, "Well, I guess that's that. Pity, I have to wait till runs out so I can win. I didn't capture you after all." "And what makes you so sure that you won?" Takage asked. "Because you're clearly stuck." The boy replied, but then felt a sudden tug on one of his arms only to look and see the girl's capture tape around it. The boy then hit his forehead for his oversight. "Young Honuki has been captured. Can you set us free now?" Takage asked the softening user. He chuckled a little as he said, "No. I thought so." She then sent her arms and eyes and began to search the building. But she still didn't find anything. When her part still didn't find anything on the fifth, she said, "I can't find it." Shota then said, "Did you look on the roof?" The girl's eyes widened as her arms went flying with one of her eyes to the roof. She then saw the bomb there and touched it, signaling their victory. Hero team wins. "I guess you won after all." Honuki then walked over and activated his quirk and began to lift the two from their cement prison. That was close for comfort. She then looked at the mudman and asked, "I thought you said that when you use your quirk the entire area is affected." "I just tried Midoriya's advice about focusing only on my surroundings." The boy answered. "What did the greenie tell you?" Setsuna asked, interested. "He said that I should try and focus only on softening my surroundings, that way I can travel underground without altering anyone to my presence." The boy then stroked his chin. "Might want to invest some kind of breathing apparatus in my suit though." He then looked at them and fell forward. Both of the students caught him as the air-hardening boy came and saw the scene, so he asked, "Dude, why are you so tired?" "I never tried focusing my softening only on my surroundings. It's harder than it looks, honestly. I'm surprised I managed to get them out of the ground." Juzo admitted, but the last part was quiet. Both Setsuna and Naranjeki sighed a breath of relief. So the lizard girl said, "Come on, Buckethead, let's go to the observation room." Back with Izuku, he was covering himself from the old lady's cane, which somehow hurt more than his injuries. 1 week, Yuminiof. That's all I ask for, 1 week without you getting injured." The old lady screamed at him as he bowed repeatedly to her and begged for her forgiveness. "Come, recovery girl, I mean, it was my first heroics class. I had to leave an impression. I couldn't just sit around." The boy tried to defend himself only to earn a cane to the head. Not sitting around is something, but going plus ultra on your body is something else. For the love of hell, your power isn't something you use, it's something you get used to. Recovery girl told him. But All Might used 100% right off the bat. He was then smacked again on his head, as the lady said, "That giant oaf is putting too much pressure on you. Listen here, take things slowly, alright, and don't injure yourself." "Geez, recovery girl, for a moment there I thought you just don't want to heal my injuries anymore. How about I don't come here anymore?" This remark earned him another whack as the old lady screamed at him. "Clearly, you didn't listen to what I said before I fixed you up." She then sighed as she said, "Sonny, it's like I don't want to heal you. It's just that your body has its limits that if I pass will make my quirk dangerous for you, and it may kill you." The boy went pale as he imagined his tombstone with the phrase "died by healing quirk." He then asked the old heroine, "Really?" "Yes, my quirk worked on speeding up the recovery of your body by using your stamina." She then yelled, "So stop going plus ultra on your body at its expense." The boy then exited the infirmary as he walked back to his class. When he reached the room, he knocked on the door of the observation room and walked inside. Once everyone saw him, his friends barreled toward him and began to ask him if he was alright. First was Tetsu, who said, "Midoriya, you were so manly, but are you alright? You looked so horrible the last time I saw you." Kinoko then piped up, "Izuku, are you still hurt? You seemed that you were put in a blender when they took you to the infirmary." Kendo then popped up, "Seriously Midoriya, you really made us worried. I thought for a moment there we actually managed to lose you." Setsuna then said, "Come on guys, you can see that he is dandy fine. Give him some space." Izuku only laughed at them as he waved his hands saying, "It's alright guys, I'm fine as you can see. I was only hurt a little so there's nothing to worry about." His friends then backed down, and he then asked, "So what did I miss when I was out of action?" Setsuna then tapped her chin and said, "Well Greenie, if you want to catch up on what happened, then you and Shizaki were declared MVP of your exercise. I won my own and was declared MVP. Shroomy over there won her match and was also declared the MVP of her own round." She then looked at the screen as she said, "Now, it's mostly Pony and Fukudashi's match against Ghosty and Silent Queen." The boy then smiled as he pulled out his notebook from nowhere, shocking his friends as he said, "That's good. I'm not too late to take notes." His friends' sweat dropped at how he pulled a notebook from nowhere, and one question went through their minds: where did he even get the notebook from? The boy then began to walk forward to the screen as he began to take down notes, as he watched the team of the Ghost and Silent Girl lay carnage on the hero's team, who was having a hard time due to the communication barrier. He then wrote down, "Note to self, teach Tsunotori Japanese." He then noticed All Might walking toward him, as he said, "Young Midoriya, you're alright. I hope Recovery Girl didn't rough you too much. The hero then shivered, remembering her cane like he was going through some war flashbacks. The boy then chuckled as he said, no, not really, though she did say that I have to try and stop coming to her infirmary because I'm about to break the record of injuries in the first week of school. The boy then felt something tap on his shoulder. He looked back to see both Jiroda and Ibara with their heads down. The boy was alarmed as he said, hey guys, is there something wrong? You both seem kinda down. Can I help you in any way? He was shocked when both students bowed down as Jiroda explained the reasoning behind their actions. Sir Midoriya, we're both extremely sorry for the huge amount of harm that we caused to you. I can understand if you don't want to forgive us. We were in an exercise, and yet we inflicted heavy damage on you. Ibara then carried on as she said, what he is saying is true. We hurt you horribly. We have sinned heavily, and I have heard at the end of the exercise when you were declared as the victor, but still, I fought you. Can you find it in your heart to forgive us? The boy just stood there confused a little as he tried to process. Did they really apologize to him? Is this really happening? He rubbed his eyes to make sure he wasn't seeing things. But still, his friends were in front of him apologizing, so he just had to ask, are guys really apologizing to me? Ibara then looked at him and said, yes, it's the right thing to do. Is there something wrong? The boy then shook his head as he said, no, I mean it's just weird. I was never apologized to before. But in any case, there's nothing for you to apologize for. The Beast Boy then rose up and said, but Izuku then raised his arm as he said, this was an exercise, so we couldn't afford to hold back, so there are no hard feelings. In fact, I'm much better now. The boy then looked at the screen to see that Yanagi managed to capture Pony, ending the fourth battle as All Might looked at him thinking, young Midoriya, how couldn't I see it earlier? To think, you were being bullied, and I saw the signs but never asked. I'm truly ashamed of myself, but I promise you that I will make it up for you by being the best mentor I can. He heard from Nezu what happened yesterday in the cafeteria, and angry would be an understatement regarding how he felt. But he couldn't do anything as the guilty party was already given his just punishment. Villain's team wins, he declared as he then added, please, all students report back to the observation room, and those who are injured let the bots take you to Recovery Girl. The 4 students then arrived at the class, and they began to discuss the MVP of this exercise, before finally landing on Yui for her planning of the entire match. That's correct, young Kodai managed to win the exercise through her careful plans. Now the last group, Team A versus Team H, please prepare for your match. The villains team made of both Rin and Bondo made their way to the building as they began to plan their best course of action. Rin then said, I have a plan, but I need you to be ready. How much Semidine can you produce and go? The giant then stroked where his chin should be as he said, a lot. The dragon scale user then nodded his head as he said, my plan has one shoot. It works or it fails, so what do you say? He looked at the giant who gave him a thumbs up. So the Chinese student then began to tell him his plan. At the entrance of the building, Kendo stood there with Tetsu as she looked at him, and said, so how is this going down? Can't we just go in there and catch them or something? The steel boy asked. The girl smacked her forehead as she said, no, we can't do that. We need a plan, not wing it. The boy shrugged as he said, I offer manliness, not brains. The girl couldn't help but laugh a bit as she said, I'm sure you do, Tetsu. She then began to stroke her chin a little as she said, I say we first try to take out Bondo because if we're caught off guard by him, and he managed to glue us to the ground, there's no telling how strong his glue is. Okay, but what about Rin? The girl then lifted her hand as she said, I didn't train in martial arts for nothing, you know. I'll take care of him. The buzzer then went off telling them that they can enter the building. She then walked inside the building as they looked around. But the moment they stepped into the second floor, Tetsu saw something in his peripheral vision as he pushed Kendo and activated his quirk. He then was hit by scales as the dragon scale user then ran inside a corridor. The metal boy then looked at Kendo asking her, are you alright? Yeah, I am, thanks to you. She then looked at where the Chinese boy ran and said, let's follow him. They continued to walk till Kendo stopped Tetsu and said, look over there. In front of them, there was a ton of Bondo's quirk. No doubt it was to make them stuck. Itsuka then said, it would take more than this to stop us. She then saw something move and jumped, enlarging her fist as she punched the side of the wall, causing Rin to jump from behind it and say, damn, I thought I can get you off guard. The girl jumped to combat as she sent a fist to her opponent, but he avoided it by jumping backward. Tetsu, not wanting to be out of the fun, activated his quirk and tried to punch Rin in the face. The boy then fired some dragon scales at Tetsu, causing him to back off, before sending a kick to the big hand user who managed to block it. Itsuka then tried to uppercut him, but he dodged. He then ran down the corridor with both teens following him. Rin looked at them and activated his quirk, firing plenty of scales at his opponents, which made them jump to the side as they tried to avoid him. The metal boy then said, enough of this. He then made his entire body steel as he took the barrage of dragon scales as they followed the boy. Itsuka then said, good work, Tetsu. The boy only flashed her sharp-toothed grin as they began to manage to catch up to Rin. Itsuka then used Tetsu as a jumping board as she leaped on him, and delivered an air kick to Rin, who barely got out of the way. Before the boy can react, a fist met his face from Tetsu. Rin then looked around him and backed into a room. Itsuka noticed this and smiled. She then ran up as she enlarged her fist, and punched Rin, who was occupied with Tetsu, into apparent unconsciousness. She then ushered for Tetsu to follow her inside the room as he carried Rin. She then kicked the door and jumped into it only to see it empty. She was confused till she heard her partner yell. She then saw Rin blast Tetsu in the head as he jumped away from him, and began blasting at her and Tetsu, forcing them to fall to the ground. She didn't have time to get up as something fell on her and began to harden. It was Bando's quirk. She looked up to see Bando, who said, "Surprise." In mere moments, she and Tetsu were stuck to the ground as the boy groaned and she said, "Well, you can't win everything." Rin then walked up to them and tied the capture tape around their bodies as the speakers said, "Villain's team wins. Now, can you get us out of here?" Itsuka asked as both boys began to help them. In the end, it was decided that Rin was the MVP of this match, but Kendo's sharp wits and skills were praised by her friends. By the end of the lesson, All Might stood in front of the class as he said, "Young heroes, you all did wonderful today, but now for the most important part of being a hero." The students looked at him confused as he yelled, "A heroic exit." And with that, the hero then sped away with the students gawking at him, especially Izuku. After everyone went and changed their clothes, Izuku and his friends stayed together in the cafeteria. Kendo then said, "Ugh, I think there's still some of Bando's quirk stuck in my hair," she said as she removed a chunk of hardened glue from her ponytail, and pouted saying, "This takes me forever to make it." Her friends then laughed at her reactions, as she said, "I hope one day you get to experience this." Setsuna then said, "Well, I think Greenie over here won't mind. I mean, look at his hair, it's as messy as it can get." The boy in question pouted, as he said, "My hair isn't messy. It's just naturally like this, and also why do you call me Greenie when your hair is also green?" The splitting girl then stroked her chin as she said, "You're right. It's not fair I call you Greenie when I also have green hair." She then disconnected her head and floated him to Izuku's face as she said, ... but do you know what that means?" The boy blushed as he thought, too close. He then shook his head as he said, "What?" The girl then laughed as she hugged his arm, causing him to steam as she said, "That means we're the green team." Itsuka then neck-chopped the lizard girl as she said, "That's enough set, leave him alone already." The boy then said, "Takage, I need to ask you something." The girl then lifted her head and said, "Ask away, green buddy. How does your costume work? I mean, you can freely disconnect your parts while using it, but how?" he asked as he summoned his notebook and a pen. Tetsu then whispered into Kanoko's and Itsuka's ears, "We seriously have to ask him where he hides this book." Both girls then nodded their heads. Setsuna then smiled, "What do you mean, Midoriya? You have been checking me out, didn't you?" The boy panicked as he waved his arms saying, "No, I swear that's what I wasn't doing. I was just curious about how your hero suit work." He then felt a finger put on his lips as the girl said, "Shhh, there's no need to lie. I know that I'm irresistible, so if you want I can take you out on a date." She laughed as Midoriya stuttered a reply to her accusation. She then said, "Calm down, Greenie, I'm joking. Now as for your question." She then pointed to her hair as she began to explain, "The costume is made from my DNA after I gave the support company a couple of strands from my hair." She then closed in as she whispered, "I can give you a little if you want." The boy chuckled as he blushed slightly, "No, thank you, but how does it work, and how does it differ from a regular costume?" "Always asking the right questions, Greenie," she said as she then began to explain, "My costume is made from my DNA which was embedded into it. That means that whenever I use my quirk while inside my suit, the suit will obey my orders since it technically became a part of my quirk. And it differs from regular costumes in that if I used one I would have to go butt naked every time I split, or I will be restricted since my parts aren't free to move. In fact, I have a couple of gym uniforms that were made from my DNA." The boy was sitting furiously in his notebook, as he said, "Wow, that's so cool." He then began muttering about how Takage was cool, making the girl blush a little as she chuckled at his muttering. She then flicked him when he began to turn blue. "Breath, Greenie, breath." The boy then stopped as he scratched the back of his head. He then said, "Today was awesome. I mean, it was our first step to becoming actual heroes. Though I wish I did better." The last part was quiet, but they heard him. Tetsu then said, "What do you mean, Midoriya? You were so manly today. How you kept fighting on even when you were extremely hurt. It was so cool." Itsuka then gave her 2 cents. What Tetsu said was right. "You did amazing today, all things considered, though you do to learn some type of fighting style because punching can take you so far." She didn't forget to add some constructive criticism for his own sake since he couldn't just keep a style of randomly punching his opponents. Kanoko then added shyly, "I thought you were cool." Setsuna then exclaimed, "Dude, are kidding me. Today, you were awesome. I mean the way you used your blood to trick Beast Boy, and how you caused a hurricane by flicking your fingers. I mean, given that Bug Boy wasn't a team player, and you won the exercise single-handedly, I thought you did more than enough." The boy chuckled as he said, "Really thanks guys, but I'm only sorry that I didn't see all your matches, but I bet you were really great." Setsuna then smiled as she hugged Kanoko. "You should have seen Shroomy over here. She covered the entire building with mushrooms, as her partner jumped from one black mushroom to another. Once the welder boy and spinning Jack entered the building they were down for the count. I mean when they thought they caught Kiwaro, Shroomy was like Shroom as she covered them with mushrooms and won the round. I think they'll have nightmares for weeks. While Setsuna was telling the boy how Kanoko won, said girl was blushing while Izuku was writing down notes. That was really cool of you, Komori. I see that you did an awesome job. Izuku complimented the mushroom girl who blushed as she thanked him. Tetsu then frowned as he said with a sad aurora around him, is it only me and Kendo who lost their match? It's not a big deal, Tetsu. I mean you did your best, but everyone loses once in a while, so don't beat yourself about it. Izuku said as he turned to Itsuka, Kendo, you said that I need to learn some fighting styles, right? The girl nodded as Izuku then asked, can you teach me? The girl looked at him and smiled, I would be happy to. She then stood up and grabbed Izuku and told him, let's go talk to Kan-sensei so we reserve a training room for us. He then saw Setsuna walk up saying, I'll help too. Izuku looked at the other two and said, if you see Pony tell her to meet tomorrow morning so I can help her with her Japanese. Vlad was not having a good day. He frowned as looked at the results from Nezu's investigation in Aldera High, the school where Izuku went before coming to UA. He was half set on going there and tearing it down brick by brick, but from what Nezu told him he was already on it. He then heard a knocking sound on his door. So he said, enter. He looked only to see 3 of his students enter the room, before Itsuka stood in front of him, and said, Sensei, can we reserve a room for the afternoon today, and a couple of days in the coming weeks? The blood hero then stroked his chin as he said, why do you need that? The girl rubbed her shoulder, saying, well Sensei, Midoriya asked me for some help in his fighting style, so I thought I could use one of the training rooms in UA. That is if there's no problem. The blood hero then shook his head saying, no, just out of curiosity. It's a good thing that you brought this up because I was about to talk with Midoriya about this. The students then tilted their heads and asked, what? I was going to take Midoriya and train him in the afternoon in a sort of after-school activity to help him increase the amount of energy he can handle in his quirk, Vlad explained. The students nodded their heads, as he said, now since that is covered meet after the classes end in the training ground Gamma. The students nodded their heads as they returned to their classes. Vlad then picked up his phone saying, Cementos, I need a favor from you to ask. Meet me this afternoon in the training ground Gamma. The 3 students then walked together to their class, as Izuku said, I can't wait to see what Vlad sensei is going to give us. I think you mean you, Granny. Plus, you're excited about anything regarding heroes. Setsuna said as she came to learn from the previous 2 days that Izuku is a huge hero nerd. Hahaha, I guess so, but I still think it's very cool that a pro hero will train us privately, Izuku said as he walked beside the 2 girls. Kendo then looked at him and said, Midoriya, bring today your game because I won't go easy on you during training. The boy smiled as he nodded his head. They then entered their classroom as their regular subjects began. In the afternoon as school ended, the 5 friends walked out of their classroom as Kendo asked Tetsu and Kanoko if they wanted to come, are you guys sure you don't want to join us, the more the merrier. Tetsu said, I'm sorry I can't, I have to go visit a relative of mine today, plus the math homework is something out of hell. This earned him from Setsuna, if you don't sleep during the class, you won't find it hard. Shut it, Alistair. You don't know the amount of torture I go through, and I still can't get how you barely study and get high grades. Tetsu said as the girl smirked and said, a magician never reveals his secrets. The mushroom girl then said, I really want to, but I need to train my quirk a little bit. I found new formulas that I want to test out. Maybe tomorrow I'll join you. The 5 then went their way, as Tetsu and Kanoko left to go home, and Itsuka, Setsuna, and Izuku went to training ground Gamma. When they entered, they saw Vlad King standing with their literature teacher Cementos. The latter was asked by Vlad, now, I want you to make for me a couple of ramps, blocks, and walls. The cement user then began to manipulate the cement of the area and formed a couple of pillars, ramps, and some blocks. He then looked at Vlad and said, is that to your liking? The blood hero looked, nodding his head in satisfaction, and said, thank you very much, Cementos. The cement hero then bowed and exited the room. Vlad looked at the students and said, Midoriya, before you can begin with Kendo helping with your fighting style, I want to gauge your control over your quirk. In other words, I want you to use the highest percentage your body can handle without feeling any type of backlash. The boy then nodded and began to activate full cowling. It only took a couple of seconds, but Vlad said in his head, might want to work on the time he needs to activate his quirk. He then picked up his watch and said, go. The boy then began to increase the percentage till he reached 6% without feeling anything. He then tried to up it to 7%, but he felt his muscles tighten, so he said, I think that 6% is my upper limit right now. The blood hero nodded, as he said, Midoriya, do you see that course that Cementos set? The boy nodded, I want to complete it as fast as you can. The boy then nodded as he began to run through the walls and jump the ramps. He was running around with green lighting coursing over his body. This intrigued Setsuna, who said, I wonder, what are the lightning bolts that are coursing on his body? The blood hero then said, I think maybe it's the excess energy being filtered out so it won't hurt him. But if that's the case, can he use it as some sort of lighting attack? Kendo then looked at the green-haired girl and said, look, Midoriya is already rubbing off on you. The girl then laughed as Vlad said, if you want I can put a training course for you too. The two girls paled as they remembered the warm-ups he put them through, and said, "No thanks." The blood hero shrugged. Izuku then finished as he said, "What do I have to do next?" "Shave the time you need to activate your quirk," Vlad said. He then looked at the lizard girl and said, "Takage, use your quirk to hit Midoriya from all angles, so he would cut down the time he needs to activate his quirk." The girl then nodded, as she asked, "Hey Greenie, what is your time to activate your quirk?" 6 seconds. "Good, because they're about to become 3 seconds." The girl said as she disassembled her body, and sent a piece toward Izuku who tried to activate his quirk but hit him upside the head with a floating piece. He then tried to activate while dodging but got nailed in the back by a floating hand. "Come on Greenie, put some more effort into it." The girl taunted him. He then finally ran as he finally managed to activate his quirk. He then jumped above the pieces, but one hit him in the face when he was distracted by dodging a piece. He fell face first as the girl's head hovered above him saying, "Try harder, Greenie." He then stood up, and this process continued for about half an hour before the girl called it quits. Itsuka then walked up front as she said, "Let's Midoriya, let me see your pose while fighting." The boy took a stance as the girl began to evaluate his stance. She saw that it wasn't too bad, but still, it could be better. She then said, "Listen Midoriya, your stance is not bad. But try to bend your knees a little. Also try to keep your right elbow closer to your body because it will help protect your ribs and vital organs. Also, try to raise the heel of your feet a little, okay?" The boy quickly did as the girl told him, and she said, "Perfect. Now, let's spar a little." She knew that this will answer her question from the beginning of the year about who will win her technique or his strength. But will it though? He clearly doesn't know how to fight properly, so maybe she should wait till he developed fighting skill of his own. The spar then started as Izuku tried to punch her, but she ducked under his fist and delivered a hit of her own which Izuku blocked. She then tried to grab Izuku's hand to throw him over her shoulder, but the boy managed to reverse it somehow, but she broke herself free before he got the chance to throw her. The girl nodded as she said, "Good, Midoriya." They then continued, sparring by exchanging hits. But then Izuku was taken by surprise at one point when the girl swept his feet causing him to fall to the ground before she grabbed his hand and pinned him down till he gave up. The boy then sat up and said, "Can't say I saw you using your feet given that you're mostly a hand-to-hand combat person. That's the point, Midoriya. If the villain thinks that I'm only good as a hand-to-hand combater, he will be caught off guard when I use my legs." She then scratched her head as she said, "Why didn't you use yours?" She remembered a couple of moments where he would have gained the upper hand if he used kicks instead of punches. He chuckled nervously as he said, "Would you believe me if I said I forgot about them?" The girl then broke into laughter with Vlad and Setsuna joining her, as the gingerhead said, "Only you can say that, Midoriya, and be completely serious." When she stopped laughing, she said, "Okay, let's spar a couple more times before we called it off." The two then did 5 more spars. All of their victories went to Kendo, but Izuku was one time very close but slipped and failed due to his shoelace coming off. The green-haired boy sat with the two girls, as he said, "Well, that was really helpful." Itsuka then said, "Indeed, but don't worry Midoriya, you seem like a smart person and a fast learner, you'll get there eventually." Vlad then stood in front of them and said, "All right Midoriya, break time is over. Time for the last exercise of the day, fighting me." The boy looked at him, before gulping. What followed in the next 15 minutes was Izuku trying to fight Vlad. He managed to do well given that the pro was holding back a lot. When he finished his training with Vlad, he walked to the changing rooms and took a shower before heading out home with Setsuna and Itsuka, with the latter advising on how to perfect his fighting style, while the former teased him. During the time that Izuku was being trained, someone else was going through his own version of hell. It was none other than Katsuki Bakugo. He walked with a glare on his face toward Hound Dog's office and knocked on the door. When he received an answer, he entered and said, "Okay, let's get this over with, so I can go home." The dog hero then sighed, as it didn't begin yet, and somehow the boy managed to give him a headache. "Listen hair boy, I'd take this seriously if I were you. You'll a whole hero care is depending on my results." The boy glared at him, as the hero then asked, "Let's start with something simple. What is your problem with Izuku Midoriya?" The hero could have sworn he saw the devil manifest for a second when the green-haired boy's name was mentioned. "He's a Deku who doesn't his place. I only attacked him because he needs to remember that he is nothing but a pebble in front of me. I didn't even do anything wrong. And why is he a pebble? And why do you think he's in your way? He's a quirkless loser. Do you need any more? He's weak, and yet he thinks he can be a hero. I've reminded him that he won't ever be one. He's always been in my way saying that he's going to be a hero without a quirk." The boy said through gritted teeth. "First off, Midoriya isn't quirkless. He has one. And second, what is your problem with him being a hero and a quirkless one at that? How is that in your way? Deku has a quirk. Impossible. You didn't answer my question. How is he trying to be a hero gets in your way?" The boy, who was shocked by the new information about his old victim having a quirk, then said, "It's because he is weak, and he's a useless Deku. So what I can deduce is that you don't have any actual reason except he's quirkless. Do I need more? What kind of delusional moron thinks he can be a hero without a quirk?" The boy shouted. Well, given that there are some heroes who don't have battle-worthy quirks exist, a quirkless hero isn't out of the realm of possibility. Your own homeroom teacher is the closest thing to a quirkless hero, but you don't seem to have a problem with him because he has a quirk. A quirkless person is the scum of society. They should always remember that they are nothing but extras in this world. They aren't worth throwing an insult at them, Bakugo said. The dog hero frowned as this had the Meta-Human Liberation Army prints all over it. Well, America's number 2 hero seems to disagree with you. He's quirkless, you know, the dog hero said. Bullshit, the boy retorted. There's no way a Deku could reach this level. The next hour went on with Bakugo saying how quirkless people are worthless, and the dog hero trying to get to the root of the problem. Finally, Bakugo walked outside the office. As he stomped home, he saw Izuku with his friends walking home. He was half tempted to attack him right there and now to know about the whole Deku has a quirk thing, but he bit it in knowing that it may lead to him losing his spot in the hero course. Deku, have you been looking down on me this entire time by hiding your quirk? I don't care how, but I will get to the bottom of this, and force you to give me answers as to where you have a quirk, Bakugo thought as he walked home. Our reports from several sources are saying that our very own symbol of peace, All Might, is now a teacher at UA. A reporter with horns coming out of her head said before turning to her co-host and asking, "What do you think about this development, Yosaku?" The man who had a small physical mutation in the shape of a gem in the center of his head then said, "I think this will be very beneficial for the heroes of tomorrow to learn from such a man how to be a hero." A man who had years of heroics under his belt and now is planning to work with the future generation to secure a brighter world. I can tell you, Hanabi, that the world will be a better place. There you had it, folks, our special report about the symbol of peace teaching at UA. And now in other news. The TV was turned off as a man began to violently scratch his neck. The man was a blue-haired individual who had very crusty and dry skin. He was wearing a blue shirt with jeans. He then said, "Kirigiri, pour for me another drink. This news report gave me a bad headache." "Yes, Master Tamura," Kirigiri said as he began pouring the drink. The man in question was entirely made of mist, wearing a bartender's outfit. He also had yellow eyes that pierced through the mist with a metal collar around his neck. As he finished pouring the drink, he then slid it to the man known as Tamura. Tamura then said as a creepy smile adorned his face, "So the rumors are correct, All Might is teaching at UA." He then looked at Kirigiri and said, "So is everything ready for tomorrow?" "Yes, young Master Tamura. Everything is ready for tomorrow," Kirigiri said to the boy as he bowed down. Tamura then took the drink from Kirigiri, making sure to let his pinky not touch the glass, and drank it, before grasping it with his 5 fingers, which made the glass decay and turn into dust. He then turned to a picture of All Might hanging on the wall of the bar, and said, "Tomorrow's symbol of peace, the world will see how fragile their hero society is. They will see how their system is unreliable." He then walked up to the poster, pressing his fingers against it as the picture and a small part of the wall decayed and became dust. He then looked at Kirigiri saying, "Clean this up, I'm going to play a video game." The mist man then picked up a broom, as Tamura went to his room to play. Behind both of them was a screen that connected to somewhere. Through the screen was a figure who was connected to multiple life support machines. The figure then grinned as he wondered how will tomorrow's events play out. The feed was then cut out as the figure laughed a little before he contacted someone and asked, "Is it ready?" The next day, Izuku woke up from his slumber. But he didn't feel very well. This could be majorly attributed to him fighting Vlad King. He was seriously excited that he fought a real-life pro. Granted, he trained with All Might for 10 months, but he never fought with him. It was truly exciting that he lasted against Vlad the time he did. Granted that the pro was holding back, way back. Izuku then jumped out of his bed and went to the bathroom, and he began to brush his teeth, readying himself for a new school day at UA. He quickly put on his uniform and went to the kitchen to have breakfast with his mom. His mother, Midoriya, who was a short, chubby woman with green hair, greeted him with a smile as she asked, "How is my little hero today?" The boy smiled at his mom and said, "I'm good, Mom. Can I have a sandwich to go?" The mother then gave him one, and a small bento, saying, "If you feel hungry during training here, eat from these." The boy then bowed down and thanked her. He then wore his iconic red shoes and went out, finally dropping his smile. Even though he loved his mother dearly, he hated how she started to fake smiles around him ever since he started going to UA. He could tell that she was faking it. It hurt that his mother didn't believe in his dreams, but he knew that she'll come around eventually. On the other side of the door, Inko sat down with a sad face. It was truly hard, but she couldn't help it. Her only son, whom she long thought that he was quirkless, had a quirk. He passed the UA entrance exam and got a seat in the hero course. She didn't want to discourage him from his dreams, but why be a hero? There were safer options where you can still help people, like a cop, doctor, or firefighter, so why was her son deadest on becoming one? She knew she was being selfish by wishing he would quit his dreams, but she couldn't help it. Every time she sees him, she only sees a weak, quirkless boy that needs protection from the world around him. She then shook her head, remembering a very bad day, saying, No, Izuku is following his dreams. I need to support him. She then looked at a picture of a small Izuku with her as she said, I'm sorry I failed you as a mother, Izuku, but I promise from now on I'll support your dream with everything I have. Back with Izuku, he had just finished his trip to UA on the train, and was walking to the school when something, or rather someone grabbed him covering his eyes as the individual said, guess who? The boy smiled as he said, good morning, Takage. The girl smiled as she greeted back, well, good morning to you too, handsome. The boy then blushed a nuclear red as the girl began to laugh at his reaction, saying that he was really funny. They then walked together to the school and began to chat with each other. Takage asked him, so Greenie, what do you think Vlad-sensei will teach us today? I highly doubt that they will give us another exercise after tomorrow. The boy hummed as he stroked his chin. I agree, I think that Vlad-sensei will mostly review our fights, and will give us notes on how to improve our performance. The girl nodded as she added, maybe also he will tell us how to increase the efficiency of our quirks in situations like these, since some of us were limited by the environment we were training in. She finished as Izuku nodded his head. He then looked around and said, odd, usually the others would be here walking with us by now. Takage then said, well, Shroom and Metalhead are running late while Kendo came here early so she can train a little. The boy nodded, and he tried to say something but was cut off when both he and Takage were surrounded by reporters asking them questions. How is it like to be taught by All Might? Was he a good teacher? Did he pass over his experience to you? Was he inspirational like in the news? The two students were dazed by the number of questions that were been thrown at them before noticing several students facing the same predicament. So Takage quickly thought of something as she said, let us go, we'll be late for our business class. The reporters then left them alone quickly and went to talk with some students from class 1, mainly Uraraka and Ida, as they were infected by the plague. Takage said, huh, suckers. She then grabbed Izuku's arm, before dragging him into the school saying, let's go before they realize that we tricked them. The boy was stunned for lack of a better term since he wasn't used to this type of attention before or ever. When they reached the gates, Takage sighed, as she said, whoa, that was a close call, I thought we were goners for a moment. The boy chuckled a little, then tried to say something, but was cut off by a very tired voice. What do you think you're doing here? Go to your class, you're about to be late. Both turned to the voice and saw a very tired-looking man who seemed to have come out of the homeless shelter wearing an all-black suit with a gray scarf around his neck. The man had very long black hair. Izuku couldn't help but notice that the man was staring, or rather glaring at him. They both stared at him briefly before he said, what are waiting for? An invitation. Get moving. His eyes then glowed red, and his hair lifted as both students nodded their heads and ran away, leaving him with Present Mike to deal with the press. He looked at both students and took a pic of them while Takage was still holding Izuku's arm. He smiled as he sent it to Midnight, who loved this kind of thing. Izuku Midoriya had to pay for all the hours he didn't get to sleep because of the new paperwork he had. He was petty, sure, but he didn't care. Takage then leaned toward Izuku asking him, who's the creepy-looking hobo? The boy then said, I think he's a hero. I know I saw him from somewhere before, but where I'm not sure. Takage was shocked as she asked, he's a hero. The boy nodded his head as they finally reached their classroom. They both entered it only to be greeted by Kanoko, causing Takage to ask, hey, I thought you said you were running late. The mushroom girl then smiled sheepishly as she said, well, I kinda was, but something happened and I came early. Itsuka then came up and lifted her hand saying, hey, good morning. The two greeted her, and then the classroom door burst open as Tetsu came in screaming, good, I made it on time. He then went over to his seat and slumped in it as he took a deep breath as said, hey guys, but you wouldn't believe how strong the press was outside. I thought I was going to die, but then some hobo-looking man pulled me over and closed the gate, telling the press to beat it. The others smiled at him, and they began to talk before the class begins. But then Kanoko asked Izuku a question. Izuku, I never asked you, but why do you want to be a hero? The boy blinked at her a little, causing the girl to backpedal as she said, I mean, you don't have to answer if you don't want to. The boy then shook his head saying, no, I was a little surprised, but I have no problem answering it. He then stroked his chin. Well, it mostly boils down to All Might. What do you mean, Midoriya? Kendo asked him. Well, you see, ever since I was a little boy, I always wanted to be a hero just like All Might. I thought he was the coolest hero ever, especially how he saved everyone with a smile. I want to be just like him, a hero whose presence makes people feel safe and help them conquer their fears. So in short, I just want to help people. Everyone in the classroom looked at him when he finished, and he noticed the stares he was receiving. But then he heard Tetsu crying, man, that's so manly. Shizaki, who was on the side, said, that's really nice of you, Midoriya. She then took a praying position as she prayed, may the Lord with all his powers protect you and keep you safe till you achieve your goal. Her prayer was accompanied by mysterious light coming from nowhere. Izuku then said, Shizaki, I didn't know you had a second quirk. The girl blinked at him in confusion as she said, but I don't have a second quirk. This made the five and some of their classmates sweat drop as they thought, then where did the light come from? Choosing to avoid an awkward situation, Izuku then asked, what about you, guys? Tetsu then yelled, I wanted to become a hero to help people since it's so manly. He then muttered something under his breath that no one caught. Takage then said, I want to become a hero to make people feel that they always have someone that cares about them, and will be there for them no matter what the circumstances. Takage was highly affirmative that she wanted to be this kind of hero, since years of her parents working day in and day out made her feel alone, so she wanted to be a hero that helped people have a friend if they ever felt alone. Kendo then answered, well, it's mostly like Midoriya, but she hated this part of her, but her friends will understand her point of view. There is a little of spite in there. Ever since I was little, I was ridiculed for my quirk or my interests. They always say that I won't amount to anything and that I had a pipe glass dream, but I wanted to prove them wrong, so I came here. She then looked at them and saw for the first time compassion and people who actually believed in her dream beside her parents. I believe you can make it, Kendo, Izuku said with a smile while the others nodded. The orange-haired girl then smiled as she said, thanks, guys. Kanoko then looked at them and fidgeted a little. She knew her goals were good, but she was afraid people will look down on her because of them. She then took a deep breath and said, I want to be an idol hero. The girl then looked at her friends and noticed that they were staring at her a little, so she began to defend herself. I know my goals don't seem as pure as yours, but I truly intend to help people with any money that I gain. Please don't think I'm a greedy person, but… Izuku stopped her, as he said, Komori, stop. We don't think you're greedy, but it is just shocking given that you're not that person. The girl then began explaining, you see, I want to become an idol hero to help the unfortunate. I was born into a good family, but we lived near areas where people, well, for lack of a better term, don't have a good life, so I swore that one day I'd become a hero, and help them with all I got. She chose to forget all the ridicule she endured when people laughed at her for saying she wanted to be a hero with her quirk. That's so manly, Komori. Tetsu cried as Setsuna said, well, aren't you a ray of sunshine? The 5 friends then turned to Ibara, who was listening to them when she joined the conservation earlier, and was shocked when they waited for her to answer, well, it's nothing like you guys, but it mostly stems from my belief system. It was always mentioned in the Bible how the Lord helped the less fortunate and guided them to the light, so I wanted to be like that. Izuku then said, well, it's not bad. I think it's a wonderful idea that you want to convert your beliefs into actual practice. Most people just like to read about helping others, but don't do anything about it. Thank you, Midoriya, Ibara mumbled with a small blush. Then the door was opened and in marched Vlad King, who looked at his students and said, all right, maggots, today we'll talk about your performance during the battle training that All Might performed. This will talk about overall performance, quirk usage, strategies, counter-strategies, and how to increase the efficiency next time you perform a similar exercise, because believe it, you'll be all doing it multiple times through the year. He then looked at them and said, any questions? The students shook their heads as they said, no, Vlad-sensei. Wonderful, now just to remind you, your final marks for the exercise had been finalized by All Might, so there will be no need to worry about failing the exercise or not. Vlad explained and clarified some points. He looked at them only to see a couple of students taking breaths of relief, not that he can blame them. He then said, all right, let's begin with the first match, Heroes team, Midoriya, and Kamakiri versus Villains team, Shizaki and Shishida. While Izuku gulped, Toguro hit his head against his desk, clearly not liking where this was going. Vlad then began setting up the projector, and the video began rolling. It showed how at first Izuku tried to convince Kamakiri to work with him, but the bug boy refused to work with him in any type or shape. It then showed how Kamakiri jumped head in with Midoriya sighing in defeat and following him. Then the part where the bug boy began fighting Shishida appeared, showing how he was outclassed by someone who has super strength on his side. It then showed how his beacon was saved by Izuku before the two divided. Kamakiri to find the Vine Girl while Izuku stayed back to deal with Shishida. It then showed the brief struggle between Toguro and Ibara where the vine-haired girl managed to trick him and capture him. It then turned back to Izuku, who was struggling with Shishida, before doing a tactical retreat when he was injured and using his blood to fool the Beast Boy. The Beast Boy then came and was finally subdued after some struggle. It then showed Izuku facing off against Ibara and managing to win on the skin of his teeth. Vlad then turned off the projector and asked, so looking at the first battle, any comments? No one dared to raise his hand except Kamakiri and Midoriya, thinking that the bug boy would say something along the lines of the lame-ass stutter got in my way. Vlad chose to hear Izuku first, to the annoyance of the former. Midoriya, what do you have to say? Vlad asked his student. Well, for starters, I think it was my fault that the exercise went so badly for 2 reasons. The first was that I wasn't assertive enough with Kamakiri, allowing him to walk all over me, even though if this was a real situation we'd both be toast. Second, I think deep down inside myself I used the exercise as a way to prove that I'm worthy of being in the hero course, so instead of focusing to save the day, I focused more on proving something. Vlad then nodded his head at the boy's reasoning. He liked that with Izuku, the boy was open even to criticizing himself if necessary. You are correct, Midoriya. But don't go too hard on yourself. In your given situation you did your best to come out on top. You deviated a little, sure, but that's the reason you're called a hero in training, so you can commit mistakes here, not on the field. The blood hero then looked at Kamakiri and decided to entertain him a little, so he ushered him to speak. The bug boy, seeing his cue, then began. The nerd, as much as I hate to say it, is wrong. It was my fault the exercise went awry. Everyone was shocked, so Vlad said, care to explain further? The boy nodded as he continued, listen, I'm not saying this because my views changed, but I should have listened to him at the very least. If this was a real-life situation, no one knows what would have happened if the nerd didn't pull through. I was so busy winning the exercise alone that I was outclassed at every turn. He then took a deep breath and said with a forced tone, if next time I'm somehow paired with Stutter over there, I'll work with him under the strict condition he does what I tell him to. The bug boy then noticed all the stares he was receiving. What's with the look? Come on and take a picture, it'll last longer. Kendo then said, we just didn't expect to say that. The bug boy felt offended as he yelled, hey, I'm perfectly capable of being objective and not letting my opinions blind me. Vlad then stopped it saying, enough, good analysis Kamakiri. Glad to see you have a sensible side, and are willing to learn from your mistakes. The bug then scoffed at him before turning his head away. The blood hero then asked, okay, what about the villains team? Izuku then said, well, I think it boils down to Shishida's dependence on his sense of smell since when I tricked him, he seemed kinda lost. He then turned to the boy and said, no offense. The boy shook his head as Izuku continued, and well with Shizaki, there's nothing to be talked about since she was practically the best in the exercise. However, standing still might be a problem in the future. Vlad King nodded his head, before he said, on to the next match, hero team, Shoda and Takage versus villains team, Tsuburaba and Honuki. The video began as it showed the heroes entering the building and scaling it carefully. It then showed the chase between the heroes and Tsuburaba and his defeat before being captured. Then the heroes were trapped inside the cement as Juzo emerged from the ground before he was captured by Setsuna's arms which detached before she was sunk. Finally, it showed the heroes' victory. The video was cut off by Vlad who asked, so, what do you think? Izuku lifted his hand to talk which Vlad allowed. Okay, for starters, I don't think the hero team did anything wrong, or at least to me, but they should be more careful with their surroundings next time. Now regarding the villains team, Tsuburaba was so focused on getting the heroes to the rendezvous point with Honuki that he missed that one of the heroes disappeared. While Honuki did well at first, he got too confident towards the end which cost him greatly. Talk about brutal, Kosei said making Izuku apologize. Juzo who was near Kosei kicked him in the leg before turning to Izuku saying, he's just kidding. Don't mind him, you were right anyway. The class then continued with the rest of the matches with Izuku usually doing all the explaining where the hero team and villain team went wrong, how to improve their approach, and how to use their quirks effectively next time they are in a similar case. When the class ended, Vlad said, alright maggots, ears up here. I have 2 announcements to make. When he noticed that the students gave him their full attention, he began speaking as he said, first there was supposed to be a recuse exercise with class 1 of this afternoon, but it was scrapped due to some technical issues. He finished remembering how it was scrapped. Eraser insisted that both Izuku and Katsuki be on the same recuse team with the former being the leader in some sort of forced therapy to get them over their childish problems, as the nighttime hero insisted to call it. Vlad, Hound Dog, and Recovery Girl with 13 refused to humor him because he was planning on playing therapist with unforeseen disaster. The man had said that if Izuku didn't dare to stand up to Bakugo then how he was going to be a hero. And after much shouting, 13 said that only Class 1 will go to rescue training because she doesn't want her facility destroyed due to Eraser's attempt at being a therapist. So yeah, that's for the first news, but the second news is much more important. He then took a deep breath as he said, you're all going to pick your class representatives. And with that, the hero sat on his chair while the class erupted into chaos, every one of them demanding to be class representative. Pick me, Pony said the best she can in her Japanese. No pick me, Oase said. Pick me and I'll help you all to the light of heaven, Ibarra said as a beam of light cast on her making half of the class ask, seriously where is that light coming from? The dialogue continued back and forth as Kendo finally stood up and said, quiet. Everyone then looked at her as she said, how about this, we all vote for the person we see as the fittest to become the class rep, and the person who gets the most votes takes the position. Deal. The class then nodded at the idea, before everyone took a paper from their notebooks, and began writing their choice down. With Izuku, he was currently confused between 2 people. Right now, I have 2 reasonable choices for class rep, which are both Kendo and Takage. Kanoko is out of the equation since she is as shy as me, and Tetsu seems to hate these types of things since he doesn't look like a planner, or at least in this domain. But who to pick? The boy then bit the back of his pen as he debated his choices. On one hand, Takage is my technically best friend. She is my first friend after all. But she seems like a party person who wouldn't like such a position with so much responsibility. Kendo seems like a natural-born leader and she gives off a safe sister-like aura around her. But I don't want to burden her if she doesn't want it. He kept thinking for a couple of minutes before finally reaching a decision. After counting the votes, the results were announced. Itsuka Kendo, 4 votes. Izuku Midoriya, 3 votes. Ibarra Shizaki, 2 votes. Jiroda Shishida, 2 votes. Rest of the students, 1 or 0 votes. Vlad then stood up and said, well Class 1B, you have your new class rep. and his, or in this case her vice. Please both students stand front and center and speak if you have anything to say. Both Izuku and Itsuka stood in front of the class as the smaller boy shivered, not being used to such a position, getting a sympathetic look from Itsuka, who whispered, "Just follow my lead." The boy nodded as the orange-haired girl spoke. "Thanks to everyone who voted for me, and I promise you all to do my best." She finished as everyone cheered for her. The girl then nudged Izuku, who swallowed a heavy lump that formed in his throat before taking a deep breath, and speaking, "Well, everyone, to be honest, this is kind of shocking. I never thought that anyone would actually vote for me, given that I'm not the best choice that may come to mind. But I promise you all to do the best job I can as a vice." He half expected to be met by silence, only to be cheered on like Itsuka, though he did see Kamakiri scoff. As Vlad exited the room, everyone got ready for lunch as Izuku talked with Takage. "And Tetsu, I really hope I don't blow it as a vice. It's just so much scary. I believe that you can do it, Midoriya. You're the manliest person I know, so you have this." Tetsu cheered on his friend. He then heard a scoff from the bug boy, who said, "No hard feelings, but we both know that is wrong. I admit that he knows his way around quirks, but with this position and the limited social interaction he has, whoever voted for him was just setting him to fail and earn a couple of laughs at Stutter's expense." Izuku wanted to counter, but Kamakiri was right about the social thing not being set up part, but he was cut from his thoughts when Setsuna said, "Can you act more like a hero, and less like a bully?" It didn't a moment for the Kamakiri then to give her the scare of her life, as he was suddenly in her face, and told her in a dark tone, "Don't you ever call me a bully." He said in a harsh voice, "Got it." The girl then frantically nodded her head as she was beyond startled at the boy's behavior, but what she didn't expect was Izuku's reaction. The boy grabbed the bug boy's hand, pulling him away, as he said, "Hey, don't talk to her like that." Everyone was surprised that such an act came out of the normally docile boy, especially Kamakiri, who frowned, saying, "I can do whatever I want. You aren't the boss of me." He then went into a staring contest with Izuku till he finally gave up, yanked his hand free, shoved the green-haired boy away from him, and exited the class muttering something about how he wasn't a bully. Awase, who was still shocked, then said, "Damn, I told you never anger the quiet kid. This what happens when you go after his woman." This statement caused two things: the first, a whack from Shizaki for the swear he used at first, and the second, Izuku going nuclear red from Awase's claim. The green-haired boy began to frantically wave his hand to deflect the accusations thrown at him, but Tetsu and Kanoko began praising him. "You were so manly, Midoriya. How you stood up for Takage was really cool." The mushroom girl then said, "I knew you would be a great rep when I voted for you." Izuku was shocked by what she said, so he asked, "You voted for me?" The mushroom girl nodded her head, as she said, "So did Tetsu and Takage." The boy rubbed the back of his head as he said, "Wow, thanks, guys. I hope I don't fail you." He then saw Kendo pat him on his back, saying, "See what happened right there? This is a sign that you're going to be a great vice." He then looked at Takage, who was still startled from the encounter and awfully quiet, so he asked, "Takage, are you alright?" The girl blinked a little before lowering her head and saying something he didn't pick up, so he said, "Can you repeat that?" She did, but he still couldn't hear her, so he asked her to do it a second time, but this time she yelled, "My hero." She then jumped at him as he caught her. The girl then hooked her arms around his neck as she looked at him. "And here I thought the big bad bug boy was going to kill me," she said dramatically before looking at Izuku and saying, "And here came my knight in shining green armor and saved me." She then began to rub her cheek against Izuku's, and whispered into his ear, "Want a reward kiss?" The boy, who had reached his limit, then steamed as Kendo took Takage off him, saying, "Enough, Setsuna, we know you like to have fun, but he can't take it anymore." She then pointed to Izuku, who slumped in his seat. Setsuna then laughed as she grabbed Izuku's hand, saying, "Let's go eat lunch." She then dragged the still flustered boy toward the cafeteria, with the others following on his toes. Awase, who looked at the entire scene, said, "Damn you, Midoriya, you secured one of the hottest chicks in the class without even trying." Ibara, who was standing next to him, smiled innocently as she whacked him with the vine from her hair, causing him to cry out in pain before running outside the room. The vine-haired girl laughed at him, wondering why she and Shishida hanged with him the first, before going out and following him. In the cafeteria, Izuku finally managed to calm down his heart rate, and looked around for Pony so he can tell her when they can study together. It took a while to find her, but when he did, he was barreled by a speeding cannon of blonde hair. The blonde girl then spoke in her native tongue, "Izuku, do you really want to teach me Japanese?" The boy nodded, which made the girl smile brightly at him, making him feel his heart melt at her innocence. So he said, "Yes, but I want to arrange a schedule with you, given that I have after-school activities to help me further control my quirk." The girl began to quickly nod her head as she said, "How about you teach every Monday, Tuesday, and Friday afternoon when you finish training?" The boy nodded his head at the girl. The idea she made wasn't all that bad, and it sure took into consideration his activities, so he needed to adjust one thing. "How about we make it Thursday instead of Friday, because I have something with Hound Dog on Friday?" The girl looked at him and nodded her head. The boy then smiled at Pony, saying, "Then it's settled from now on. I'll teach you Japanese every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday after I finish training, but are you sure about the time? I don't want to keep you home for too long." The girl shook her head as she said, my home is really close. It's only a 5-minute walk from here. The boy smiled as he said, that's wonderful, Tsunotori. Then I guess I see you this afternoon. The pony girl then neighed happily as she hugged Izuku, thanking him profusely. He could have sworn he heard someone call him a lucky bastard. When the girl let him go free, he asked her, wanna go eat with my friends? The girl nodded, and they went to the table they usually sit on. But when he arrived, Kendo grabbed him and took him aside, and said, Midoriya, where have you been? I was looking for you. The boy was confused, so he said, I was looking for Tsunotori to arrange with her a time so I can teach her Japanese. He said before taking a more urgent tone, did something bad happen? Did someone get hurt? What do I need to do? Why does? Izuku kept mumbling on and until the orange-haired girl neck chopped him, saying, calm down first, then we talk. The boy then took a deep breath and calmed down. Once Kendo saw that, she said, well, it's really nothing. But I thought that we should go introduce ourselves to the Class 1A representatives, so we can get to know each other better and clear any misunderstanding. The boy nodded his head, though he was shaking in fear from seeing Kaken again. Honestly, he doesn't want to be within a range of 10 feet from that class, but as a vice of the class, he has a duty that he must stick to, so he would swallow it. The two then began walking through the rows of seats, and came among 2 students of Class 1A. One of them had blonde yellow hair with a black lighting blot running down through it, while the other was a short student who had purple balls for hair. The second student made Kendo feel very uncomfortable with the way he was staring at her, so she quickly asked, hey guys, you're from 1A, could you tell me where I can find your class representatives? She then looked at the small one who was eyeing her chest and swallowed the urge to punch him in the face, but this didn't go unnoticed by Izuku, who stepped in front of the girl, as the blonde one then said, oh yeah, they're right over there. He told her, but continued, by the way, my name is Denki Kaminari. The girl cut him off by saying, thanks very much. She then looked at Izuku and said in a distressed tone, let's go, Midoriya. Lunchtime is about to be over, and I'm sure you want to eat. She then grabbed him and began to quickly walk about with the boy, causing the small one to say, damn him, that green-haired bastard. First the blonde chick, and now her. Calm down, Maida, Denki said to his friends. Izuku with Kendo then said, well, they sure are quite the characters. Itsuka looked at him and said, tell me about it. I had to suppress the urge to punch the small one in the face when he was looking at me. I noticed that, Izuku said, as the way the small imp-like boy looked at his friend also made him uncomfortable for her sake. The two then arrived at a table where 2 individuals were currently talking. First was the blue-haired boy who came to Bakugo's defense when he attacked Izuku, making the boy hide behind Kendo, and the second was black-haired girl with mature features and an elegant look. Itsuka then began talking. Hello, my name is Itsuka Kendo, and I'm the class representative of Class 1B. She then nudged Izuku, who said, and I'm Izuku Midoriya, her V-Vice. The blue-haired looked angry for a moment and tried to say something, but then he was stopped when he winced in pain. He then looked at the girl across him on the table, who was giving him a sickly sweet smile that told him to zip it. The girl then stood up and introduced herself. Hello, I'm Momo Yaoyorozu, the class rep of 1A, and this is my vice Tenya Ida. Kendo then said, a pleasure to meet you, Yaoyorozu. I would say the same to Ida, but I already did meet him, and he didn't give a good impression. The black-haired girl then gave her vice a dry look as she said to Kendo, please excuse him. He's always jumping to conclusions without looking at the facts. So to what do I owe this pleasure? Itsuka then said, well, it's mostly to clear some misunderstanding after your classmate's stunt the previous day. The girl said as she rubbed the back of her head. Do you mean Bakugo? Yaoyorozu asked. She saw what happened, and told Ochako to go and apologize to Izuku on behalf of the class, but even against her best wishes, she heard some students of Class 1B mumbling something about how Class 1A is a bunch of jerks, making her feel bad. Yeah, the thing is, after what happened, a lot of my classmates kinda took you all for jerks, so I came here to try and come up with a solution to bring the classes together, Itsuka explained. The black-haired nodded her head and wanted to speak, but Ida beat to the punch. This is totally unacceptable. You can't just stereotype us for one of our classmates' actions against you. We are here to be heroes just like you. The boy then went for a minute while chopping his hand in the air, making both Izuku and Itsuka wonder if this was a natural thing for him. While Momo just sighed for between Bakugo's ego and Monoma's endless banter, and now Ida's earnest behavior, she was going to die young. Kendo then said, enough, you're also one of the reasons. The boy looked offended for a moment, and before he can ask why, Kendo said, remember when jumped to Bakugo's defense last time when he attacked our classmate? The boy then tried to speak, well, or how about when you practically told Midoriya to quit UA just because he accidentally bumped into you? Itsuka finished. The boy looked really flustered and ashamed as Momo said, really Ida, you told him to quit UA because he bumped into you? The boy couldn't say anything, but Momo then looked at Kendo and said, I apologize for everything that happened. She then looked at Izuku saying, especially to you, Midoriya. Itsuka then said, well, I'm sorry for my outburst. She smiled sheepishly as she rubbed the back of her head. No problem at all, Momo said. She was about to add something when the alarms went off. Intruder alert, code 3 hash. Please all students evacuate in an orderly fashion. The four looked in confusion as students began to run in total panic. But then Kendo asked an upperclassman what the code meant, so he said, "It means that an intruder actually managed to enter the school grounds." And with this, all hell broke loose as students began to shove each other in an attempt to escape from the cafeteria. Izuku was then separated from Itsuka as he was shoved toward the windows. He then saw the reason for the alarm signal. The press has somehow managed to enter the school. He looked around him and miraculously saw two of his classmates, Shishida and Setsuna. He then managed to weasel his way to Shishida saying, "Shishida, can you hear me?" "Yes, Sir Midoriya. I want you to roar the highest you can when you see me in the air." "Okay." The beast teen nodded as Izuku made his way to Setsuna and asked her, "Can you float me to air so I can tell them it's just the press?" Takage, who was now pressed against him, nodded as she grabbed the boy and separated her body saying, "Whoa, I almost suffocated there." Shishida, seeing Izuku in the air, then let out a huge roar, grabbing everyone's attention. Everyone then looked at Shishida, who simply coughed and lifted his finger to the air. Everyone then looked up and saw Izuku, who spoke, empowering his body with at least 5% of his quirk to make his voice loud enough. "Please everyone, calm down. If you would kindly look outside, you could see it's just the press that managed to enter the school campus undetected." A bunch of students, who were near the window, looked outside only to see that it was truly the press that managed to enter the school grounds. They were currently handled by the police and present Mike, who was escorting them as he said, "Goodbye, you horrible leeches." Sighs of relief began to fill the cafeteria as students began to say, "It is truly the press. Man, I thought I was a goner for a moment. Glad that's over." Izuku, who was still in the air with Takage, heard the girl giggle, so he asked her, "What's so funny?" "Nothing, but the lighting coursing off of you is kinda tickling me." The girl answered honestly. The boy then looked at the students and said, "All right, now that this is resolved, can we please act like UA students? Everyone please evacuate the cafeteria in an orderly fashion, and Hero Course students, if there is anyone injured, please take them to the infirmary." Then the halls were slowly getting emptied as a couple of Hero students, and even General Studies students, volunteered to aid anyone that was injured during the chaos and take them to the infirmary. Setsuna then floated down and connected with her lower body as she said, "I half expected for my legs to be crushed in the stampede without my torso, but seems that I'm made from rough skin." She then began to laugh as Izuku followed her. The boy then felt a hand on his shoulder. He gulped because from previous experience this meant it is beat up time. He turned only to see Itsuka with a big smile on her face as she said, "Great work, Midoriya. You truly came through today and proved that you deserve the vice's rank." Izuku blushed as he hid behind his hands saying, "It was no problem at all. I was just doing my job. I just wanted to keep everyone safe." The piece was interrupted when someone shouted, "Deku, you bastard." They then all saw Bakugo stomping over to him holding a paper. Itsuka walked up to him before he shoved the paper in his face saying, "Take this. This is the stupid apology letter that I fucking wrote for you. Listen here, you little shit, don't think this changes anything, and don't you think that you're better than me just because I wrote a fucking apology letter. You got it." He then walked away throwing swears everywhere, while a pair of green eyes watched him with a scowl on their owner's face. The startled teen then looked at the letter, which was more of a bunch of curses. As for the letter, it read, "Fucking Deku and the shitty extra that are friends with him. I'm sorry for you being such a fucking weak loser, Deku. I swear if you start looking down on me just because you have a quirk or just because you have fucking friends, I'll kill you. And as for the shitty extras, I'm sorry for you being friends with such a weak moron. Next time you stand in my way, I'll beat you all up before I blow him all in front of you. Sincerely, the next #1 hero." The three, along with Kanoko and Tetsu, who joined them at some point while they were reading the letter, looked at the so-called apology letter with disturbed looks. Tetsu then asked, "Is this guy alright?" Izuku then said, "Well, it's better than nothing. I frankly thought he won't actually go with this. This is the most that we'll get from him, so we might as well consider it a win. I never thought he could say I'm sorry." Izuku knew that Bakugo will never apologize to him, so this was the closest thing to the real deal ever, and he was sure if Bakugo ever wrote this again it will be on his deathbed. Izuku then said, "Now that the emergency is over, let's go over to the class because we'll be about to be late," he said before racing off, leaving the remaining four stunned before realizing what he said and running after him. Back on the outside in front of the gate, Nezu and Powerloader with Eraserhead and Vlad King stood in front of the dusty remains of a wall that was once thought to be indestructible. The nighttime hero scowled, "What is this, some kind of a sign?" Nezu then answered, "No, it's more of a war declaration." Once Izuku walked into the classroom, when his classmates began cheering for him, the boy was flustered and asked, "What is this for?" Ibara then said, "Midoriya, we are simply thanking you for acting the way you did during the chaos, or else something worse could have happened." Rin then said, "Yeah, you totally took control of the situation and made the right calls." Bondo added, "If it wasn't for you, the cafeteria might have become a bloodbath." Kamakiri on the side then mumbled quietly, "Yeah, good work." Like earlier in the morning, this caused everyone to look at him confused, which made him explode in anger. "Hey, I'm perfectly capable of congratulating a job well done. I'm not that arrogant, you know." Everyone was then silenced when Vlad woke in the room. He looked at his class and began to count through them in his head. Once he saw that everyone was accounted for, he said, "Good, everyone is here." He then looked at Izuku and said, "Midoriya, good job out there." The teen then bowed and began to blush, still not used to being complimented. "Now, since today's exercise with Class 1 was scrapped, you will train with me in Midnight and Training Ground Gamma," he said as the R-rated hero walked into the room, making every boy blush. Izuku couldn't help but feel that she was eyeing him, but he pushed that feeling to the back of his head as Vlad said, "Everyone, go change into your gym uniforms." Everyone walked outside the room, but Midnight then held both Izuku's and Takeji's hands. She looked at them with a teasing smile as she asked, lifting her phone, "Care to explain?" In her phone were two pictures, one in front of the gate where Takeji was holding Izuku's hand, and the other inside the room where Setsuna was rubbing her cheek against Izuku's face while the latter was holding her in the air. The two students blushed as the teacher said, "I'm going to get so much fun out of this." After a very awkward, very painful encounter with Midnight, the two students walked into the training ground as Izuku sneezed, making Takeji ask him, "Dude, are you sick?" "No, not that I think so," he said as he felt a shiver run through his spine as if a major law of the world was broken. "Are you sure?" "Yeah." They were then approached by Kendo, who asked them, "What did Midnight Sensei want from you?" The two students shivered as they remembered the encounter and said in unison, "Nothing." Itsuka then said, "Okay." She then looked at Izuku and said, "Wanna spar?" The boy nodded eagerly as walked with the orange head to a clearing, before they both said at the same time, 3, 2, 1, go. The two teens then ran to each other as Takeji watched from the sidelines. Izuku then tried to uppercut Itsuka, who dodged, trying to punch him in his chest, but the boy caught her hand and flipped her over, making her hit the ground. She then quickly rolled out of the way before standing up and smirking, "Good, let's kick up a notch." She then ran and jumped in the air, increasing the size of her fist as she tried to hit Izuku with it, who sidestepped her. But she landed and quickly turned to decrease the size of her fist, punching Izuku, who tried to block but was sent flying by the sheer strength of the hit. He then stood up and said, "I see you're trying my advice, but still can't control it well, can you?" He saw that the girl was shaking her hand from pain. Itsuka then ran at him and jumped to kick him in the face, but he blocked it before grabbing her leg and throwing her to the side. The girl stood up as Izuku activated his quirk and ran at her, punching her in the stomach. Although in pain, the girl managed to kick Izuku's legs and cause him to fall. She then tried to pin him, but the moment she reached out her hand, he kicked it. "Always use the unexpected," Itsuka said proudly of Izuku as he changed his style from random punches. The girl then pounced at him, punching him in the chest and knocking the air out of him. She ran and tried to hit him again before he focused, but he managed to dodge and recompose himself. He then ran at her, pretending to punch her, but when she put up a defense, he then sidekicked her in the abdomen, causing her to fall to the ground with a grunt. The boy then went to hold her and win the spar, but suddenly a black mist appeared under the entire training grounds and swallowed him and his classmates all together as he screamed, "But I was about to win." When the mist closed, Vlad King came with Midnight, who went to bring some equipment to the students. As the two teachers saw that no one was there, he yelled, "Where the hell are my students?" Back with Izuku and the others, they all fell on a platform-like place with stairs connecting to it. They looked around, but it seemed as if all hell broke loose. They saw Class 1A and a person in a spacesuit. They also saw a misty figure who had a pleased look on his face, which was two glowing eyes. And down the stairs, there were a bunch of people with a man in black fighting them alone. They then heard someone say, "Whoops, my bad." This caused Kendo to facepalm as she seemed to recognize the owner of the voice. Kamakiri then asked the question running through every one of 1B students' minds, "What in fuck's sake is happening here?"